There were two eyes at my window at 4 in the morning, and they were the size of dinner plates. I want to be honest that I did not handle it well. I stood in my own living room in a bathrobe, looking at something the height of a house sitting in my snow like a cat outside a kitchen door, and the only thought I could produce was that it had followed me 22 kilometers. That was the same week I found out that somebody had been quietly taking my house apart from the outside for a fortnight. Lee Mei-ling went across the control panel like somebody playing a piano and had the whole network audited in about 10 minutes. The system was called Galaxy Light. Best private network money could buy 10 years ago and still capable of crushing most of what is left in the world. In theory, it has no vulnerabilities at all. However, she said cheerfully, a top-tier hacker can make one. Then she gave me the news. In the past 2 weeks, this system has been hit by several thousand attacks. If nobody had caught them, the whole network would have been down inside a month. Somebody had been methodically taking my house apart from the outside since the day I killed Liu Jinchen, and I had been in that building playing badminton. She closed the hole, killed the wireless router entirely, and started building a new encrypted network from scratch, and then she got a look on her face that I recognized from my own mirror. Next, I'll find out who's been trying. It would be so interesting if we could get into their network. How confident are you? And what happens if you fail? Even if I can't get in, I can at least hide us. When she finished, she looked up at me with her whole face shining, obviously waiting for something, so I put my hand on her head and told her she was amazing. It's just simple maintenance, there's nothing difficult about it. Which brought me back to the thing sitting outside my window. It was tired. There was a long cut on its neck from Dragon's Cry that had not closed. That is why it had followed us, and specifically why it had followed the girl. She was the only human being it trusted. So I put a coat on Lee Mei-ling, wheeled her out to the porch, and dumped a mountain onto the snow out of thin air. Cat treats, dried fish, sacks of premium food from a warehouse that used to supply 11 provinces. Sweetheart, come and eat something. It's very harsh out here. Become my pet and I'll cover food and lodging. That cat looked at the pile. Its throat moved. I watched it swallow. And then it took 3 steps backward. The message could not have been clearer if it had been printed. Joe, think you can buy this cat with a few small favors? Joe are seriously underestimating this cat. Mao Mao is a stray, said Lee Mei-ling. She's very wary. It took me over a month to get anywhere with her. A month is fine for you. I'm worried she'll go across the river and eat Pudgy Wang's village. That was the only part I was actually in a hurry about. I had one useful ally over there, and I did not want him digested, so I did what I would do with any other power in that district. I made a deal. Look, I know you don't trust me yet, but I can feed you. In exchange, you don't touch the villagers across the river, and I pointed south. That animal turned its head and looked where I was pointing. Then it looked at the food, then it looked back at me, and slowly, deliberately, dipped its head. Meow. I am counting that as a signed agreement. The next thing it did nearly put both my women through the window. The 10-meter monster shook itself once and became an ordinary tabby cat, about 4 kilos, and started working through the treats. Brother, said Chen Enran, you're clearly not very good at biology. If it stayed that size, everyone at Tianqing Academy together couldn't have kept its stomach full. And Lee Mei-ling, chewing that over, it appeared and disappeared far too abruptly. Something that large should be impossible to miss, and even a martial arts expert like Teacher Jiang could never find it. Add up how much it actually ate, and the only answer is that it changes size. Which solved my last budget concern, because how much can a tabby cat possibly eat? I did not go near it while it was eating. Anybody who has fed a stray knows that a human approaching a cat mid-meal is not a friend, it is a competitor. I decided to deal with the next day, and I decided to do it myself rather than through the girl, because the whole point was the cat learning who I was. That is how it started. I want to note here, because it matters later, that I did not do any of it out of affection. Meanwhile, 22 kilometers away, Zhang Yue brought a class up onto the surface and found out what the world had become. They did not know the cat had left. If they had known, they would have stayed, because there was food in those storerooms for months. Instead, the cold drove them back down a hole in the snow to wait. Gao Zichen got through to his father and was told to sit tight, and the whole class cheered him. Then everybody else tried to call their families, and not one of them got an answer. Zhang Yue asked herself the right question and did not like it. If his father can rescue them, then even if the son could not call out before, a father with that reach would have come looking weeks ago. And if he cannot rescue them, why has he agreed to? They arrived on 4 dog sleds. Alaskan Malamutes in uniform coats, 7 or 8 men in white helmets, weapons wrapped in white cloth, almost invisible against the ground. Real soldiers, not a militia. She saw that immediately, and she saw one other thing, which the students were too excited to notice. The men looked the group over and murmured to each other and nodded occasionally, and it was not the way you look at survivors. It was the way you look at a delivery. Li Jianjun pulled his mask down and his son did not recognize him for 2 full seconds. The man had been a bureau director with a fat, happy face and a life to match, and 6 weeks had taken so much off him that he looked like somebody else's relative. Dad, why didn't you send anyone for us before? Let's not talk about that now. And then the squad leader got to the point, which was not the children. I hear this school has substantial supplies stockpiled. Show us. We're taking all of it back to base. Jiang Yue went cold. They had been standing there for 10 minutes and nobody had asked a single question about people. And Gao Zichen, who did not want to go down into those tunnels again, said, actually Teacher Jiang has been handling the supply runs. She knows better than I do. He sold out the woman who had spent 6 weeks bleeding for him, in one sentence, to avoid a walk. Even his own classmates looked at him sideways for that. She only sighed and said, follow me, I'll show you the way. Then the students were told to carry boxes. Weren't they here to rescue us? Why are we working? The supplies went onto the sleds and the sleds left, with Li Jianjun escorting them. The people walked. Joe mean we have to walk? Where's the vehicle? The 2 soldiers left behind exchanged a look I would have given a great deal to see, and one of them explained the new world in 3 sentences. Shut your mouths. Anybody who wants to live, follow me. Anybody who doesn't, get out right now. And let me remind you, whoever you used to be, the apocalypse has arrived and your identities have all evaporated. If you want to survive, obey. Then he threw them a bag of energy bars, 10 kilometers. It took most of the day. Nobody picked up anyone who fell. They just waited. Zhang Yue got them holding each other upright and told them the truth, which was that there was no other option left. At the foot of the mountain, a set of iron doors opened in the rock, and behind them was a stairway going down further than the lamps reached. The soldiers stood aside and gestured them in, and every one of those young people walked down there thinking they had been saved. At the bottom, people in protective suits came out with pressure sprayers, the kind you use on a garden, and washed all of them down with disinfectant. To ensure the safety of the shelter, we require thorough disinfection and health checks. Please cooperate. They took blood from every single one of them and locked them in an empty room. Then dinner arrived, and it was a white viscous liquid on a plate, and every one of them ate it because they had not eaten properly in 3 days. The texture was not bad. The taste was a little like yogurt. It was definitely not yogurt. A heavy woman in her 50s came in with glasses on, and Li Jianjun bent double at her shoulder, and she told them that the examinations were clear and that they would now be cleaned and taken to the 4th life pod. They took Gao Zichen out separately, and his classmates were envious, and he made sure they were. Didn't I tell you? My father isn't nobody down here. His father caught his sleeve on the way out and gave him one instruction. Joe, obey your superiors here. Whatever Director Wang tells you, you do it. Understand? He came back several hours later with nothing behind his eyes at all, and he did not sit down for the rest of that evening, and he never once said what had happened. His father's ration was increased that week. And then his father sat down next to him and said the following, and I have been told all of it, and I am giving it to you exactly. If you want to survive here, you have to learn to accept all of this. It's all right. Joel, get used to it. My title of bureau chief is completely useless now. Even with no ordinary people down here, there will still be people who supply and people who hold power. That never stops. Everything that happened today is the first lesson of Shishan. People at the bottom obey the people above them unconditionally or they die. And you should be pleased, because this is probably how you get out of the class you were born into. Down here, you pay with what you have. Right now, all you have is yourself. Here is what Sishan actually was. On the night of the 12th of December, the senior leadership of Tianhai City and their families were notified and moved underground. Li Jianjun only got in because an acquaintance called him at the last minute and he drove there in a panic. For the first few weeks, it was almost civilized. The experts had said 1 or 2 months, so everybody was polite because they were all going to have to work together again afterwards. Then the estimate changed. Ice Age, 3 to 5 years, possibly 30 to 50, which meant that every position, every rank, and every connection any of them had was now worth nothing forever. And within a fortnight, the group that controlled the armed forces removed the base's leadership and took it, and the man who led that took the title, and the first thing he did was write the classification system. 4 pods, 200 meters underground. The first pod is Zhao Wenchang and his family, living at a standard that is not lower than the one they had before the sky flashed. Things nobody in the other 3 pods would dare to dream about are simply on the shelf. The second is his people, plus the top scientists, the doctors, and the technical specialists. Warm, comfortable, real food. The third is the armed forces. Over 1,000 of them, the best equipment in the province, and no shortage of anything. And the fourth is everybody else, which is most of the base. Those people have no value to give, So they give the only thing they have. Up at 6 on a loudspeaker, half an hour to wash, then group activities, then and only then food, then work. The work is a bicycle bolted to the floor with a meter on it. Nobody shouts at you to pedal. Nobody has to. Your output is on the meter and your ration is calculated from the meter, and an adult's quota is 8 hours, and those 8 hours do not include your breaks or your meals. 6 days on, 1 off, staggered so the shop never stops. The room is a cave 3 meters high and over 1,000 square meters across, and there are 1,000 people in it on 1,000 bicycles. From the doorway, it looks like an enormous gym class. Then you look at the faces, and every one of them is blank and stiff and finished, and not one of them stops. Meals are a protein paste which the manual describes as a high-technology meal replacement. Dormitories are a dozen to a room in bunks under dim light. No television, no entertainment of any kind. Phone charging strictly by the clock because a charged phone is a phone somebody uses at night. The floor manager who explained all this to Zhang Yue's class did it in the voice of a woman conducting an inventory because that is what she was doing. One girl started crying at her bicycle, and the manager did not raise her voice at all. It's fine to cry, but you work first. That night the students came apart. I've been on that bike all day, and I'm raw. If this is every day, I'd rather die. We're the elite. Rebuilding the world will depend on us. We're so young. Why should we suffer like this? And their teacher, who had been dismissed by every one of them for 6 weeks, gave them the only answer available. Did you look at the people cycling next to you today? Not one of them was beneath you in the old world. I saw at least 3 bureau chiefs of this city on those bicycles. A world where everybody is happy and comfortable has never existed. And she meant it, and there is a part of that I want to be honest about on her behalf. She did not hate it down there. She was, if anything, relieved. At that academy, she was one woman responsible for 40 children with a monster under the floor, and she had not slept properly in 6 weeks. Here she earned her own food, and for a martial artist that workload is nothing, and above all, it was no longer her job to keep anybody alive. Her students had never once considered that the person protecting them also needed somebody to protect her. The morning assembly is the part I keep coming back to. Good morning, dear family. Today is our 48th day of survival. Let us thank our great leader, Comrade Zhao Wenchang, for leading us this far, 3 times with fists in the air. New arrivals go up on the stage to introduce themselves, and everybody applauds. Zhang Yue stood in that hall and felt her scalp tighten because she had done a security course on exactly this. It is not enthusiasm. It is herd conditioning, and the end state is that no matter how clearly you tell yourself this is hypnosis and this is nonsense, your body starts belonging to the room. It is precisely how extremely intelligent university students end up inside pyramid schemes they used to laugh at. The program runs like this. First, praise for the organization, which means the anthem, which every new arrival is required to memorize within 3 days and is then tested on. Let the light of the rising sun illuminate our dreams in Shishan. Joe and I, me and you, together we will create new glories. Second, group games, actual children's games, radish squat, Pictionary, then calisthenics. Third, to your stations. And it works. That is the horrible part. She watched her own students come out of that assembly slightly different, still annoyed, but chatting with people they had been paired with in the games and calling them co-workers. If we can't resist, one of them said, we may as well accept life as it is. At least we survive. 4 days later, a woman in a suit and dark red glasses came into the generator hall with an escort, and the floor manager folded in half. Miss Jiang Yuning. Is she here? Gao Zichen grabbed her sleeve as she stood up and whispered, Teacher Jiang, don't forget us. Our leader would like to see you. The whole hall started buzzing. Does that mean she's going up? One look from the woman in the glasses and 1,000 people found their pedals again, and on the way out, a soldier read 2 more names off a list. Wang Jian, Cheng Haoran. Come here. 2 more students, taken up to envious looks. I want you to remember that the selection process for going upstairs in Shishan had nothing whatsoever to do with what anybody could do. Zhao Wenchang was about 50 with his gray hair combed neatly, and he stood up when she came in and shook her hand and smiled at her. And Zhang Wei, who had been holding 40 ungrateful teenagers off a monster for 6 weeks with no one to lean on, felt warm for the first time since December. To preserve the seeds of our civilization and keep this base running, I hope you'll lend me your strength. She said yes. She also, privately, had no objection to the 4-pod system because social stratification has existed since the beginning of the species, and she saw no reason to be sentimental about it. They moved her out of the 4th pod that afternoon and into the 2nd, a private room, lighting bright enough that you could forget you were 200 meters under a mountain. Real food, hot water whenever she wanted it. That is how you buy a strong person. Joe, do not threaten them. Joe, give them the first warm room they have had in 2 months and let them work out the rest themselves. It took a week. On the 7th evening, I crouched in my own doorway with a bowl that had treats in it, and premium food, and 2 fresh fish, because no cat alive can hold out against treats, and every person who has ever caught a stray knows it. Mau Mau, I've been feeding you for a week. Look how much you've eaten. From this point on, you're my cat. It finished the bowl and washed its face. It's warm inside. There's a fireplace. Look how well it's burning. It's freezing out here. What are you doing? And it looked past me, through the glass, at the fire. That was the first time I ever saw that animal hesitate. Cats do not handle cold. Something in them still remembers Egypt. I opened the door. Would you like to come in and have a look? I have been told that at that moment I sounded like somebody's grandfather. I have also been told by both women in that house that I had never in my life spoken to either of them the way I spoke to that cat, and that they had noticed, and that they had feelings about it. They were right. I do trust animals more than people, and I can spoil an animal without a single second of suspicion afterwards, and that is worth more to me than it probably sounds. It came in. Then it destroyed a couch worth more than my parents' apartment, and put muddy prints across every floor in that building, and knocked an antique off a shelf. That's fine. Have a look around. This is your home now. Jo Kier watched all of this with her arms folded. It's fortunate that cat can't turn into a woman. I'd have no standing left in this family. And when it had finished exploring, it lay down in front of the fire. I went over and put a hand out toward its head, and it turned around and looked at me. We looked at each other for several seconds. I have negotiated with gang leaders and a hacker and a woman who splits bullets, and none of it was as delicate as that. Then it put its head back down on its paws. I put my hand on it, and it started purring. I would like to report that I said something clever. What actually happened is that I sat on the floor of $1 billion bunker with my hand on a cat, and I smiled, and it was the first genuine one since November. After that, the girls fought over feeding rights, and it accepted their tribute like a tax. But it followed me around the building, and it slept by my head. Around then, Li Meiling stopped defending and started walking back up the attack. She found the source in a few minutes and put it on the big screen. My house was a star. The intruder was a blinking red dot on the border between the southwest of the Xishan district and the northwest of Lujiang, 30 kilometers. Their technique is extremely crude, third-rate engineer at best, and the hardware isn't good, so getting in was easy. The data's encrypted and cracking it will take time, but there really is an organization that size in Xishan. We'll probably run into them. What's meant to happen will happen. I don't go looking for trouble, and I'm not frightened of it. Anybody who comes to disturb my quiet, I take their life. And I was not bluffing for the first time in my life. I had a fortress, a warehouse, a hacker, an engineer, a surgeon, and 3 awakened people counting me. Chen Anran had been busy. By 2050, a person with a printer and a workshop can make a firearm, and ammunition and explosives are not the hard part. She started producing rounds for the sniper rifle and both pistols, which are the 2 things I actually burn. Then she gave me a present, and it changed how I fight. A suppressor for the big rifle. With the ability wrapped around a round, I can double what it does, and with that rifle, I can reach 3,000 meters. The one problem I had was that a rifle that size announces itself across half a district. From now on, she said, extremely pleased with herself, you can plot against somebody and leave without them ever finding out where you were standing. Then I asked whether she could make grenades, mines, and explosives, and she stood up so fast the stool went over. How is that even a question? Brother, you're underestimating me. I thought you were going to ask for something complicated. That's not even as technically demanding as a battery. Gunpowder is a school project. It's sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. Then she added, sniffily, that those things were not much use in modern warfare and might have mattered a century ago. Things are different. After this cold, nearly every aircraft and carrier on this planet is scrap metal. Modern war is people again, and the scale keeps shrinking, which makes mines and explosives useful. She thought about that and got very quiet because she is 17 and had just been told what the rest of her life looks like. So I told her she reminded me of a younger sister and that as long as I was alive, nothing would happen to her. And she cried and nodded at me with her head completely empty. And then I walked out of that workshop taking careful stock of the fact that I had just captured another one. She needs to be entirely mine. Weapons are dangerous objects and they have to stay in the hands of my own people, and if it takes being kind to a teenager to guarantee that, I am extremely comfortable with it. I sent a warning to Elder Zhou and Pudgy Wang the same night. An unidentified force has been detected nearby. Be extremely careful and do not trust anybody. The storm means official organizations cannot administer anything, so anyone who turns up claiming official authority should be treated with extreme caution. And above all, never reveal your ability. This is critical. Remember it. And to Pudgy Wang alone, if you meet something you can't handle, run toward me. He was touched. He was also completely unbothered, because Zujia town had been an unremarkable farming district his whole life, and he could not imagine why anyone would want it. Brother Zhang really is something. If anybody's eyeing anything around here, it's your villa. Then he went back to his comics. Two people were coming down the west road at that moment. Chen Guang was over 2 meters and built like a bear with a rifle wrapped in white cloth, and he sank to his knees in the drifts at every step. Wang Chunhua was a lieutenant of Shishan Base in a thin, close-fitting white suit, no hat, no scarf, at -60, and she was not cold. That should have told anybody watching everything they needed. She rode on the back of a sled dog like she weighed nothing and delivered, on the way, the most accurate weather forecast anybody gave that winter. It can't snow forever. Most of the water in the air has already come down. Without evaporation from somewhere warmer, what would it even form from? I hear the equator is around -20, so from here on it's just cold, and the snowfall gets rarer. Maybe that's the last mercy this world gets. Their job was mapping the country around the base. They had marked more than a dozen sites already. They found Wangdong village, and the dogs started barking, and the whole village came out with tools, because since the night I killed 128 of them, they had lived in permanent fear that I was coming back. Then she held up an identification card. I am a lieutenant of the Tianhai Military District. I am here on behalf of the official organization to locate and assist survivors. Please don't be nervous. She knew exactly what she was doing. Survivors still believed in the state, and the village turned around in front of her like a coin. Sun Kai, whose face had been stone 30 seconds earlier, was suddenly all smiles. Oh, it's the leadership. Welcome, welcome. Whatever else the end of the world took, it did not take that reflex. His reasoning, which he shared with his own people afterwards, was excellent. As long as they represent the government, that is enough. This is a year of great disaster, which is when farmers rise. Connect ourselves to the authorities and the Wang family could become somebody. Besides, it's only some food. Then he stole every achievement in that village in one speech. First of all, it is because the people of Wangdong are self-reliant. Secondly, I, as village chief, played my part. I have always taught them to store plenty of food. In this entire village, not one person has starved to death. Then he waved at the ice buildings. Look at these igloos we built. I had all of them constructed. Every villager present knew who had built them, and not one of them said a word, because he was the chief. He also let slip that 30% of the vegetables in Tianhai City came out of Zujia town, and then heard himself say it, and hurriedly added that a great deal had spoiled, and they were only just getting by. Wang Chunhua looked around a village with a snow castle in it and thought at least 1,000 households. They laid out pickles and dried meat and frozen fish and put everything in the pot, and she ate and made a note. Then she asked the real question. Has anybody in this village experienced any strange changes recently? People whose bodies have altered. If you can provide useful intelligence, the organization will reward you generously. Every pair of eyes in that room went to the floor at the same instant. She read it immediately, because ordinary people cannot manage their own faces. And Sun Kai did the arithmetic in about 4 seconds. It sounds wonderful, but I have not seen a single actual benefit yet, and Wangdong is the most important asset this village has. Without him, who knows what happens to us? I will never hand him over. So he closed the hole with somebody else. His name is Li Wei. He lives in Yunque Manor, just across the river. And then, warming to it, that man is a devil. He killed more than 100 of us single-handedly. Leaders, you have to stand up for us. And the whole village backed him, loudly, because not one of them wanted the lieutenant to keep asking about mutations, which is how the village that had been saved by one boy sold the only other superhuman in the district to buy his anonymity. Wang Chunhua kept her face perfectly still, because the name in her sealed orders was Li Wei, and the section she had been told to focus on was his relationship to the Walmart South China warehouse theft. She asked what his ability was. Nobody knew. Not one person in that village could tell her, because I had killed all of them with traps, a bow, and a rifle, and not one human being outside my own house had ever seen me open a dimensional gate. 2 months of being unbearable about secrecy, and that was the payoff. She gave Sun Kai a title on the spot because it cost her nothing. From now on, you're in charge of Zujia town. Report anything useful directly to me. He was overwhelmed. A lieutenant is an enormous rank in a village. She left with 2 bottles of good liquor and filed a report that read, in full, a large village, Zujia town, discovered. Surviving population approximately 2,000. Substantial grain stored. No unusual individuals found. That is what it sounds like when a place gets added to a supply list. Why did you lie to them? Said Chen Guang on the sled. If we tell them the truth, do you think they'll keep treating us like royalty and handing us intelligence? I understand the logic. I just don't think it's a good thing. They were nice to us. Which is why you'll always be my subordinate. What I told them is exactly what they wanted to hear. They won't resent me. They'll be grateful to me for the hope. They'll find out eventually. By then I'll have new talking points. If we represent the official position, whatever we say is justified. He almost said the true thing then. He almost said, but but can we represent the official position, given that Zishan changed hands when the men with guns removed the leadership, which makes every one of us technically a rebel? He decided instead that he was a soldier, and soldiers obey, which is what he had been trained to decide. They did not go straight at my house. She was better than that. Binoculars first, then the small hours, and Chen Guang carried a military thermal imager, so every board and every trap under my snow lit up like a diagram. Lucky we were warned, he said. We'd have walked right into it. He boosted her, she swung, and they cleared the entire trapped perimeter without touching it. No wonder it belonged to the richest man in the province. It's gaudy, but the defenses are equal to a bunker. For me, she said, there's no such thing as a fortress. Then she walked through my wall. 200 millimeters of alloy, rated to take a direct artillery hit, and she went through it the way you walk through a doorway. Inside, she stood in my living room in the dark and understood everything at once. It is warmer in here than in Xishan base. In the base, a member of the special operations team gets 10 square meters. He has no shortage of food and no shortage of power. Nobody lives like this at a time like this unless they have an enormous quantity of both. She got as far as the stairs. And then a cat screamed at her out of the dark, and she decided that this house mattered far more than the leadership realized, and that she was not going to gamble her career on a corridor she had not mapped. So she left a military knife on my table where I would find it, because she wanted to make an impression and take that building without a fight. The cat woke me at 4 in the morning, howling with its back up, staring at the door. It took me downstairs and jumped onto the table, and there was a black military knife on it. I want to be honest about what happened to me in that moment, because it is the only time that winter I was properly afraid. Somebody had walked into my house without opening anything, which means that on any night they choose, somebody can walk in and end me in my sleep. I pulled the recordings. A woman in white came out of a solid wall and did not slow down doing it. There is an ability like that. Since the mutation started, nothing surprises me for very long, and the recording showed one other thing. She had been heading for the stairs when the cat went off, and after that she had reconsidered. That animal had earned every dried fish it was ever going to get. Mao Mao, come outside with me. We're going to kill some intruders. And that cat stood up, went from 4 kilos to 10 meters, and lay down in front of me. I looked at a back covered in fur like sharpened wire. I'm worried about my backside. The fur along its spine went soft. And don't get excited halfway and put it all back up. It rolled its eyes at me. I am not exaggerating. That animal rolled its eyes at me and made an extremely rude noise, and then it went over the boundary wall in one jump with a man and a sniper rifle on its back and turned northwest across open snow faster than my vehicle can move. 2 kilometers ahead, on a sled, Wang Chenhua was in a genuinely good mood. Old Chen, strictly speaking, there are things you're not entitled to know, but since I'm cheerful, I'll tell you. The Walmart South China warehouse held more than a third of that company's national stock, and that company runs over 800 hypermarkets in this country. The value of what went missing is somewhere over 10 billion, and here's the sentence that tells you the size of my position. Even after all the preparation and mobilization that went into building Xishan, the total reserves of that entire base, which holds tens of thousands of people, do not come to that. At first, the leadership assumed he simply knew something about it. After going to Shujia town and looking at his house myself, I'm certain it's not that simple. Joe think he's got part of the missing goods? Maybe not part, maybe all of it. That's not funny. Where would one man even put it? Nobody has ever explained how the largest warehouse on Earth was emptied in a few hours. Mutants make a lot of impossible things possible. She was already planning the assault. A quarter of A-team would be plenty. However solid his house is, it stops being solid with me there. I cannot carry anything large through a wall, but a bomb is not large. Neither is gas. Any fortress can be opened from the inside. Underneath them, the sled dog had started pulling badly and whining because its mouth was muzzled and it could not do anything else. Neither of them noticed because they were discussing their promotions. 2,000 meters back, lying along the shoulders of a monster, I put the crosshair on her head. Her head went sideways. The smile stayed exactly where it was, and the light went out behind her eyes, and she came off that sled without a sound. 1 second she had been planning her rise to the number 2 position at Xishan base. Then she was cooling on the snow. There is no such thing as safe. An extraordinary person's skull is not measurably harder than anybody else's, and it certainly does not stop around with my hand on it. The suppressor did exactly what it was built for. At that range, the only way to find me was to read the trajectory backward, and there was no sound to read. My second shot missed because the giant moved. Not dodged, moved. His outline blurred and left 3 afterimages hanging in the air behind him, and I lay on a cat in the dark and said, out loud, how many of these people are there? He did something then that I did not expect and have thought about since. He picked her body up and put it into a snow hollow and covered it before he took cover himself. He had worked with that woman a long time and never once said anything because of the difference in their ranks. Then he did the correct tactical thing, which annoyed me. He did not run. He knew he could not win a long-range fight and that running from a sniper is the worst option available, so he dug in to hold me in place and he sent a distress signal. I did the timing in my head. Snow vehicle from Zishan, about 2.5 hours. Sled, 4.5. Pudgy Wong had no transport and would arrive at dawn, so I leaned forward. Mao Mao, go and push that one out into the open. I'll shoot from here. The cat made an extremely pointed noise which I understood as, and where exactly will I be during this? You're armored, he can't hurt you. Be good, and when we get home I'll give you 100 dried fish. It licked a paw. Then it nodded. I should also note for accuracy that cats are extremely territorial and that it had already decided about those two long before I offered it anything. Then it rolled itself into a ball 3 meters across, covered in black spines, and came down that slope like a boulder. He checked behind himself using his phone screen as a mirror, which is a genuinely good habit, and threw himself sideways, and the ball went through where he had been standing and dug a trench several meters deep. Then it unrolled into an animal and came at him in a flat S, and his rounds threw sparks off the spines. He was in a vice, something enormous in front of him and something invisible behind him, and my rounds with the ability on them would have gone through his vest as though it were a coat. He forced his ability one more time to stay ahead of both of us, and when he did it, blood came out of the corner of his mouth. I noticed that. I did not understand it for another 2 days. The cat put him down at the end, and there was a crack, and I could not tell whether it was his vest or something else. He got the barrel up toward its eyes on the way, trying to take it with him, and I ended that from 2,000 meters. Both of the people who had walked into my house that night were finished inside 20 minutes. Afterward, the cat sat on the body and looked at me and made a very small noise because turning into a boulder costs an enormous amount of energy and it had not eaten since dinner. So I took the tins of tuna out of my coat pocket and it opened them itself with one claw and ate all 4 while I did the tidying. Then it meowed at me and turned its face deliberately toward the woman. I put my hand on her shoulder and it went through me like a shock. I cannot describe it any better than this. Something underneath thinking woke up and told me, in a voice that was mine and was not, that I could take what was in her. I put my palm on her forehead, and it came up my arm in a rush, and I have never felt anything like it, before or since, like a starving man finishing a meal, like something that had always been missing arriving. When it stopped, the body under my hand felt like an empty shell, so the powers can be eaten, and here's the part I have not been able to put down. That cat found the body first. It knew what could be taken, and it understood exactly what it was worth. And it did not take it. It called me over and gave it to me. I picked up a 4-kilo animal and kissed the top of its head twice and told it was a very good girl, and it headbutted my chin and climbed down to finish the tuna. The man gave me nothing at all. I tried, and there was nothing there to take, and I could not work out why. I collected both bodies, cleaned what I could, and looked at the sled tracks running nearly 5 kilometers back toward the northwest, which I could do absolutely nothing about. Fine. They already know where I live. Let them come. I would very much like to see who breaks into that building now that the woman who walks through walls is in my pocket. And I want to close one hole before somebody asks, why not just send tanks? Because that city is sealed under 30 meters of snow. Whatever comes at me is coming on foot, and Tianhai has never been a major military region. Its standing garrison was a regiment. Anything organized enough to attack me will arrive carrying what men can carry. All 4 of them were awake in the living room when I got home, because the cat's howl had woken the building, and because I am, as Joe Keir put it once, the load-bearing wall. 2 of them appearing together means they're organized, she said. Killing them may provoke a response. I killed the woman who walks through walls without weighing any consequences at all, because as long as she was alive, this building could be opened. Then I handed out work, Chen Anran, mines. As many as you can build, right around the perimeter. Tell me what you need and I'll go and get it, because I grew up in this city and I know where every chemical plant is. Li Meiling, their phones and their instruments. I want to know what organization this is. Joe Keir, autopsy. Both of them. It is not often that anybody gets 2 superhuman bodies on a table. And then there was Yang Sha, standing at the edge of the room with nothing assigned to her, in a house where one woman was a surgeon, one was a world-class hacker, and one was an engineer. She asked me for a job. She got the autopsy assist, and looking at those 2 on the steel, she went the color of the wall, and she did it anyway, because that woman would rather handle a corpse than be decorative. The intelligence came back inside a day. Zishan shelter, very large, thousands of survivors, extremely rigid hierarchy, an armed force of several hundred, and inside it a unit called the ACE Special Operations Team, made up of former special forces and superhumans, so it was one of the government shelters built to preserve officials in an emergency. and its military was smaller than it sounded because Tianhai never held a major garrison, so 500-odd armed men was probably the whole of it, which meant ordinary soldiers were not a real threat to me, and the ace team only was if there was a second wall walker in it. That is the honest arithmetic, and I want to give the rest of it too, because it is the reason I am not modest about what I have. Every other awakened person I have met pays for their ability with their own body. Pudgy Wang moves 100,000 tons and then cannot breathe. Elder Joe eats like 4 men. A trained soldier could put a knife in Pudgy Wang quietly, and that would be the end of the strongest ice user in the province. I open a door and close it, and it costs me nothing at all, ever. Then Joe Kier called me down to the lab and explained the other half of the world. Their cells had mutated, with activity dozens of times higher than an ordinary person's, and the strongest response of all was in the brain, which is presumably why the thing I took came out through the woman's forehead. Do you understand how important this is? She said, when I said that was interesting. If somebody worked out the principles or managed cell transplantation, it might be possible to make superhumans. Then, honestly, although with what exists now, we could never reproduce a natural one properly, we cannot even clone a human being properly. The probability is something like 0.00001%. And then, however, if somebody used radical methods, the results could be very strange, which brought us to the difference between the two bodies on her table. The woman's mutation was natural, whole body, evenly, elegantly. The man's was localized, and a very large number of his cells were malignant, dying, actively damaging him, and the damage got worse every single time he used the ability. I think he's a manufactured superhuman, and as it stands, he's a defective one. 3 questions closed at the same moment. Why I could take nothing out of him. Why his ability was so ordinary compared to a genuine one, and why a base of that size seemed to have so many awakened people. They are making them. The product is far weaker than the real thing, and it eats the person carrying it, and it can be mass-produced. Which, in a world where an ordinary life is the cheapest thing on the market, is the only specification that matters. To the people who run Zishan base, those men are consumables. I sat with that for a while, and then I decided that sitting still and absorbing this was not in my nature. I called Pudgy Wang, and he came at a run because I always pay him extravagantly for very little, and because my car has a heater in it. On the way to the chemical plant, I made him the only political speech I have ever made. Every organization left in this city is a fragment. They are all fighting each other to stay alive. Nobody represents the government. They aren't a regular army. They are a private armed force. And when everyone is only trying to survive, at some point there stops being any shame in anything. The day they run out of food, Zhuja Town is an enormous granary sitting in the open, and they will take it. Or, to put it politely, expropriate it. What will you do then? But this country controls weapons so strictly. A force like that has to be official. I don't believe they'd go after ordinary people. So I made the offer. If you're worried, move to Yunque Manor. The houses next door are all empty. I'll cover the food and the heating. But what happens to the people in the village? He said it as loyalty. It was not loyalty. He simply did not have the nerve to leave the group, because for a frightened person a crowd feels like safety even when the crowd despises him. We emptied the largest chemical works in Tianhai, machinery included. And on the way home I said one more thing to him, smiling. Fatty, if the day comes and Sishan attacks me, you and your village can stay neutral. But if I find out you've helped them against me, guess what I'll do? He shivered. I'm joking. Don't take it seriously. I know you'd never betray me. He found out that night, from a friend, what his village had done. 2 leaders came yesterday. 6th grandfather looked after them extremely well. He made every household bring out its best, and he says he's the town mayor now. Sun Kai had summoned the heads of every surrounding village and announced himself mayor of Zhuja Town on the strength of one verbal remark from a woman who was already dead, and nobody argued because Wangdong village had a superhuman in it, and that made them the strongest family in the district. They felt they had brought honor to their ancestors and that their names would go into the genealogy in large characters. Did you tell them about the grain? They're higher-ups. Our reserves are an achievement. Why would we hide them? Did you mention Li Wei? That devil murdered 128 of our people. He deserves to die. We can't deal with him, but we have people who can. I've reported his situation in full. They said they would deal with Li Wei seriously. And that young man's legs went out from under him in the middle of his own village. Here is the truth about Wangdong village that its mayor never understood. It was still standing because Pudgy Wang was useful to me, and because 2,000 farmers with shovels were not worth the ammunition. If I had wanted that village gone, it would have been gone in an afternoon, and he had just spent it. Stop talking nonsense, said the mayor. Go home, get some sleep, and forget what you said to me today. Your job is to be Wangdong Village's trump card and follow my orders. Joe don't need ideas of your own. Chen Anran took the dead man's armor apart on a bench. It was lighter and stronger than my police vest, and the cat had bitten it at full force and failed to bite through. This is mass-produced, so it's built to a cost. If I made one specifically for you, it would be considerably better, but it would take more material. Material, I said, is the one thing I have never once been short of. I put half a chemical works on her floor. Don't think about cost. Put in everything you can. I don't care what it's worth. I want the best performance that physics allows. And that girl went bright red and swore to me that she would forge the best armor in the world. Then I went down to the third basement, which nobody in that building is permitted to enter when I am training, because to this day, not one person living under that roof knows exactly what I can do. New target at 500 meters, which I had never attempted. The target came apart, and the sound of the shot did not reach me until after it did, because the arrow was moving faster than sound. I want to make a note here, because it is the most important thing I learned that winter. The power I took off a dead woman in 20 seconds improved me faster than a month of disciplined training had. Then I took out Dragon's Cry, double speed, triple, 4 times, and at 4 times I started drowning in my own body. I put that blade through a wooden training dummy the thickness of a calf and left a face on it like a mirror. 20 minutes and I was starving. I ate 4 energy bars standing up. The main use of that, obviously, is running away. I have a rifle I can hit anything with. Why would I ever choose to be within arm's reach of somebody? So I go on looking clumsy up close, and if I am ever genuinely cornered, that will be a surprise for somebody. Even a lion hunting a rabbit uses everything it has, and I had no idea at that point what had already started happening 200 meters under a mountain 30 kilometers away. The night Wang Chunhua died, a distress signal came into Xishan Base for the first time in its history, and the communications department did not know what to do with it. That organization was less than 2 months old. Nobody had written a procedure for this. So the information minister, a man called Chen Yongjun, sat and looked at it and thought about waking Zhao Wenchang, and thought about what happens to people who wake Zhao Wenchang. Do not strive for merit. Simply avoid mistakes. Zhou may not know anything else, but you must learn to be a non-stick pan. So he passed it to the captain of the ace team instead, because those two were his people, and he would obviously be more anxious about it. Wu Hao is 1.70 m with a crew cut, and he came up the corridor in a green shirt with men behind him who were all taller than him and all walking with their heads down. He had understood the whole maneuver before he reached the door. And at that door stood Sun Jingji, the leader's secretary, with a very pleasant smile. Captain Wu, it's getting late. Please don't disturb the leader's rest. Report it tomorrow. However hard your team works, can it compare with the work our leader does? He has only just gone to bed. Waking him now would be irresponsible to the entire base. Trust your teammates. They can take care of themselves. And then, when he did not move, Captain Wu Feng, do you really believe the safety of 2 special operations members outweighs our leader getting proper rest? If he doesn't rest, the whole base suffers and the lives of thousands are at risk. I hope you can distinguish between what is important and what is not. That is not what I meant. It's simply that at Xishan Base, the leader is above everything. His men went dark red. One of them told me later he had spent that entire conversation deciding exactly which part of that face he was going to hit, and Wu Hao turned around. We're going back. Captain, obey orders. We do not act without permission from our superiors. Whatever those men wanted, the discipline was in their bones, and it held. Sun Jingyi watched them down the corridor, put her smile away, and resumed her position outside that door with perfect posture. On the other side of it, in a room that was honestly not much less impressive than mine, a man in white silk pajamas was slowly working through a cognac worth several 100,000 yuan, explaining the burdens of leadership to 2 young women from Tianqing Academy who had been brought up as personal assistants and who were being extremely appreciative. Xishan Base still faces very serious problems. Energy cannot be sustained. Food is critically short. As leader, I am busy every single day, afraid of doing something wrong and causing people to lose faith in me. Those in positions of power must fulfill their responsibilities. If I do not do certain things, nobody else can. For the survival of this base, I am willing to endure any hardship. Leader, you've been through so much. Maintaining this whole base by yourself must be exhausting. He rewarded them by having both transferred to the second pod, which meant neither of them would ever have to sit on a bicycle again, and they were overjoyed. Several hours after the distress signal, he asked idly who had come looking for him earlier. 2 members of the Special Operations team requested emergency assistance. I named them the Ace team. It means they are my greatest trump card. 2 aces go outside and have to ask the base for help. Did they meet somebody they could not even escape from? He was not upset about the men. He was upset about the branding. Should we send somebody to investigate? It would give Wu Hao an explanation. An explanation? I am the leader of Xishan Base. Soldiers obediently follow orders. Since when does a superior give explanations to a subordinate? Forgive me, leader. I misspoke. Send a few people to look into it. And then his voice changed, and everything that follows comes out of that change. Send a team, but do not send captain-level personnel. We should not waste valuable combat power before we understand what is out there. That is the order that decided the rest of the winter, and I want you to hear what is inside it. The ACE Special Operations Team had 2 kinds of people in it. 7 captains who were naturally awakened, whole-body mutations with room to grow. And everybody else who had been made in a laboratory under that mountain and who were stronger than ordinary men and significantly weaker than the real thing and who broke down. The captains were assets, the rest were stock. Wu Hao asked, reasonably, whether they could send 1 captain to support the 2 people who had already gone missing, and Sun Jingyi explained with a smile that Chen Guang was only a soldier, and that although Wang Chunhua was a captain, her ability was better suited to reconnaissance than combat, and that the captains were far too valuable to risk. Then she adjusted her glasses and left, and her heels went away down the corridor, and 30 men who had been ordered not to save their own were left standing in it. Jiang Yue sat at the back of that room with a new sword she did not want, surrounded by soldiers who had served together for years, and got her first proper look at the organization that had given her a warm room. One of the other captains came and sat by her. Liu Fenghua. Small, not remotely military, with eyes bright enough that looking into them felt like falling. Our existence is like a nuclear weapon. We may never use it. But we have to have it. And then, the world is more complicated than you think. Jove only just arrived. Joe'll understand as time goes on. Everything that woman said had a second floor under it. 2 days later, in the second pod, Zhang Yue ran into 2 of her own students. Zhao Shuying and a girl the class had nicknamed Quiet Mei. Both of them were now on the leader's personal staff, and neither of them had been chosen for anything they could do. And Zhao Shuying, 17 years old, explained the world to her teacher. Teacher Jiang, we're second pod now. Let's stop worrying about the ordinary people down in the 4th. People are not equal. Once you're no longer in the same class, you can't get along the way you used to. Then the other one said the thing that took the floor out. Teacher Jiang, do you have the right to say that? Weren't you the one who abandoned us first? I didn't abandon anyone. Then why did you leave us down there? If our bodies hadn't got us out, we might have disappeared like everybody else. I want to be fair to Jiang Yue here because she is not a villain and she deserves an accurate account. She did not think she had done anything wrong. Society divides labor by ability. Those students were not superhumans, so the generator hall was the correct place for them. What exactly was her offense? That is what she was still telling herself when the word disappeared went past her. After you left, a lot of students disappeared. Nobody knows why. They were taken away and never came back. If you really want to know, look it up yourself, or pretend none of this happened and stop asking. She did the arithmetic. 3rd pod is soldiers. 2nd pod is talent. There is nowhere those children could have been moved to. That night she went down to the 4th, which a captain may do freely because you may always descend and never climb. The night shift was on the bicycles because the base needs power around the clock. And her students saw her and came off those machines like people seeing a rescue helicopter. Teacher Jiang, you came back. Have you come to take us out? It's so hard here, I'm so tired. Several of our classmates have been taken away and none of them came back. Are they dead? What is this place? They were crying and holding her sleeves, and the rumors going around that dormitory were the worst part because they were all different. Some of the children were frightened, some were indifferent, and some of them were envious because one story going around said the ones who left had been collected by rich relatives and were living upstairs in comfort. The only fact anybody had was this. Every so often somebody came and selected 1 or 2 students, and none of them ever came back. Teacher Jiang, I'm scared. What if it's my turn next? And a boy in the next bunk said, what are you afraid of? We have nothing now. Why would anybody want to hurt us? Then the lights went off for the night, for the power saving, and a voice came out of the dark behind her. Teacher Jiang, do you want to know where those students went? Gao Zichen was buttoned to the throat, which nobody does 200 meters underground where it is not cold, and I will leave the reason where he left it. Because of certain work, I get taken up to the 2nd pod sometimes. One day I saw people in white protective suits carrying 2 long bags. They looked like sleeping bags, and the shapes inside were 2 different people, so I followed them, and I watched them take 2 bodies out of those bags and put them into a machine. He had to stop for a moment. One of them had Zhou Mingli's tattoo on his arm. I've been swimming with him 100 times. It was done by a foreign artist. There's no mistaking it. The number of us keeps going down 1 at a time. If this keeps up, we all die. Teacher, please hurry. I might be next. She went that same night because the ACE team was distracted by a rescue operation, and it was the only window she was going to get. Her ability puts her into a meditative state where she moves silently, and even her breathing stops registering. She got as far as the changing area outside the laboratory and waited. 4 people in white suits came through with 2 long bags. Two of them went to the toilets. She put one of them out, took the suit, and walked out beside the remaining pair, and the man waiting waved her over, and the guard at the door did not look up. And inside, one of the technicians laughed and said something that stayed with her for the rest of her life. Another failure. That's the 8th recently. Nothing to be done. Their bodies can't adapt. Adapt to what? She thought. What they took out of that bag was not a person anymore. I am not going to describe what it had become, and if you have read anything else about that base, you can work it out. The laboratory took up a quarter of a hall. In the middle of it stood a machine with a long pipe running out of it, and at that hour there was almost nobody working, and one of the technicians was playing a handheld console. That is the part she could not get past afterwards. The atmosphere in that room was relaxed. Nobody was solemn. Nobody was even quiet. They put what had been a student into that machine and went back to their game. Then a man came in dragging a wooden crate and tipped it into a second hopper, and the crate was full of cockroaches, and several of them went over her boots. There was a warm room off that hall, and it was full of crates like that one, hundreds of them, and the dark moving mass inside every one of them was the base's protein supply. That is what the white paste is. That is what she had eaten on her first night, and what every single person in the 4th pod eats at every meal, and what the 3rd pod is not served, because the 3rd pod gets actual food. She was sick behind a machine, and one of the technicians noticed and thought it was hilarious. She's been here this long and still can't get used to it. Women have a natural fear of cockroaches. Maybe stop putting women in that room. Let them run the machines instead. And standing there in a stolen suit, she thought the thing that turned her. If I had known it would be like this, I would have stayed at Tianqing Academy. At least that monster only ate people. This place is a den of demons. And then, immediately after, and even if I take the children out, where on this earth would I take them? She put the suit back on the unconscious technician so that the woman would wake up assuming she had fainted from exhaustion, and she went back to her warm room in the 2nd pod, and she stopped sleeping. The rescue team reached the place where I killed Wang Chunhua 10 hours after her distress signal because a secretary had decided her leader needed his rest. There was nothing there, no bodies. Not a drop of anything. Before I left, I had made the cat roll around a few times, which erases a battlefield better than any tool I own. 2 possibilities, said the commander. They were taken alive, or they were both killed and the other side had the time and the nerve to clean up afterwards. Then the dogs put their noses down and somebody found the vehicle track. On a snowfield the size of a province, a single line of tracks is a road sign. It ran straight to Yunke Manor 101. 30 fully armed soldiers and 2 modified leaders came up my west approach the next morning. The first one stepped on a board, pulled it off his boot, looked at the nails and started laughing. What era are we in? People still using this? Their boots were special forces issue and the nails did not go through, and a month of snow had packed my boards flat. Seems like whoever we're facing doesn't have much combat skill. Even the commander relaxed, though he did say carefully that this enemy had killed 2 of their own. And so 30 professionals walked into my field chatting and treating it as a joke, and a man's ankle took a steel wire, and a pin came out somewhere under the snow. The first one died there. He was fully equipped. The grenade came up right in front of him. They put fire into my house for a full minute afterwards, and when it stopped, the wall and the glass looked exactly as they had before. Not a chip. Not a white mark. I gave the house an order. Activate the optical protection. Every window in that building went one way. From inside, perfect visibility. From outside, black. I had never turned it on before because it very slightly dims the rooms, and I sat there and thought, finally, a proper opponent. If I never had to deal with professionals, what exactly would have been the point of owning a shelter like this? I told the women they could go down to the basement. We've been through too much together, said Joe Kier. What have I got left to be afraid of? We're one household now, said Yangxia. We face whatever comes together. Dangerous? Isn't that overstating it? Then I turned to her. Bring me a chair. And I sat down in front of a window with rifle rounds coming off it, crossed my legs, and watched the assault on my home with a bag of potato chips. They were good. I want to give them that. They swept the field properly with thermal optics, because a modern army has an entire discipline for this, and they found everything, including the anti-tank mine buried 1.5 meters down. Finding is not the same as removing. The moment they gathered around it, I pressed the button in my other hand. 2 of them simply stopped being there. 3 more went out into the snow and did not get up. Who is he? Their commander shouted. And why does he have hardware that only exists in our military? That is the tragedy of those men, incidentally, and it is not their fault. They had spent their careers learning to fight with aircraft and armor and satellites, and the ice had turned every bit of it into scrap, and they had been sent back 100 years with excellent haircuts. 6 dead, and nobody had seen me. The deputy suggested calling the base for support and got an answer that killed all of them. Absolutely not. We are the rescue team. If we have to ask the base for help, how would that look? They probed properly instead and reached a conclusion that was correct and useless. It is an iron turtle, materials comparable to a modern fortress. Its one flaw is that it has no means of attack, which is good news because it is clearly a purely defensive survival shelter. Then they gathered every ounce of explosive that 30 men were carrying into one pile at the base of my wall, which was enough to take down a 2-story building, and backed off and counted down out loud. I turned on the sound insulation so my people would not lose their eardrums and did not look up. The blast opened a crater in the snow at the corner of my house, and the wall behind it was smooth and new in that unidentifiable black material that looks like marble and behaves like steel without so much as a scorch on it. How is that possible? Not even a mark? Then somebody dug down to check whether the foundations were softer and found the same material going down several meters, and I've been told the silence after that was long, so can't break it head on and can't tunnel under it. At which point, one of the modified leaders, a man called Ma Lei, opened a long black case and took out a heavy anti-materiel rifle. This can kill a tank in one shot. Bulletproof glass? Let's see it stop this. And it left a white scratch on my window. I want to be honest that this was the first moment my confidence moved. That glass is 80 centimeters thick and a man on the ground had marked it. What happens if he fires it 200,000 times? On their side, it was worse. I've knocked bunkers down with this gun. I've taken chunks out of reinforced concrete. What kind of shelter is this? Why doesn't it have a single weakness? They agreed among themselves that it was the most absurd construction project any of them had encountered in their lives, and that every technique they had spent 15 years learning had become a martial art for slaying dragons. Then they came out from cover to reposition, which is what I had been waiting for since the first grenade. Dimensional gate. Open. House. Open the window in front of me. Here is the trick, and it is the single best thing I have ever worked out. The gate is one-directional. Anything coming from outside toward me goes into the pocket. Anything going from inside outward is completely unaffected. So I opened a window and stood in it. 3 of their best marksmen put rounds into my face from under 200 meters, and every one of them disappeared in the air like a coin into a slot, and I killed the man carrying the case first, because I wanted that rifle. Then I worked at a steady pace, one shot then another. Helmets do not stop around with my hand on it, 6 of them inside a few seconds, and that is when it stopped being a battle and started being the thing they still talk about. No, why can't I kill him? He's completely exposed. He has no cover at all. He's one of them. He must be immune to gunfire. Retreat. Retreat now. This is beyond us. That is why the unknown is worth more than firepower. Every mutation is different, so nobody has anything to compare you to, and a man who does not know what you can do fills the gap in himself with whatever frightens him most. Their 2 leaders got clear with a ghosting movement I recognized immediately because I had seen the giant do it, another laboratory product. Their abilities are all identical, which told me the base is not finding superhumans, it is stamping them out. Then I did something I want you to have in full because it is the coldest thing I did that day. I put rounds through the legs of 2 men instead of their heads and left them lying in the snow calling for help. That was the entire point. Somebody always comes for them. And when they moved, I turned the gate around, and every round those 30 men had fired into me that morning came back out of it at once, into that patch of ground, like weather. Their commander stopped it. Nobody moves. This is a siege designed to catch rescuers. Nobody leaves cover. He was right, and he knew he was right, and it was killing him. Then he did the professional thing and put smoke and incendiaries between me and his wounded, which blinded even the thermal optics and got them out. Genuinely well handled. Those were good soldiers with a bad employer. One of the young ones came apart in the snow. He's not human. We can't beat him. And their commander told him to shut up, because we came here to conduct a rescue, and now we are going to turn around and ask the base for help, and how do we face anybody after that? Ma Lei was the sane one. He hasn't come outside, which means he's still wary of us. The unknown is the frightening part. Once you understand it even a little, it stops being so bad. Then he laid out a withdrawal, shoot through the walls of the neighboring villas and pull back inside the buildings, and no marksman on earth can hit what he cannot see. 30 came, 18 left, and the worst part of that report for them was that they had not put a scratch on anybody. I did not chase. My gate only opens on one side, and in open ground, those men would have killed me in under a minute, and I know exactly what I am. I called after them anyway. Go and fetch somebody stronger. It's only when you're all thoroughly frightened that you people finally shut up. Then I stripped the field of every weapon on it, and the prize was that anti-materiel rifle, and I left the bodies where they lay. I would have buried them a month earlier. Now there were 2 reasons not to. Corpses along an approach route work on the mind of the next unit that walks up it, and anybody who comes to collect them is standing still in the open. Li Meiling, in her chair, put her finger on the real problem before I did. Judging by what they brought, they were not equipped to take this place. Everything was light. These were an advance force sent to look at you. However solid this shelter is, if it faces professional soldiers with a full loadout, I think it will be difficult. She was right. The next time, the firepower would be several levels higher, so I explained our actual position to all 4 of them because they had earned it. The 2 floors above ground are the compromise. They traded defense for comfort, for windows and light and a botanical dome. The 3 floors underneath are what this building actually is, at least twice as strong. A direct missile hit does not open the second basement. There is no fortress that cannot be destroyed, but to get through 2 above-ground floors, they have to spend an enormous amount of time and a great many lives. And the moment the surface goes, we abandon it completely and live underground. We would never see daylight again. Everything else down there works. Chen Anran laughed out loud. I knew it. $1 billion shelter, the most expensive on Earth, was never going to be that simple. I flicked her forehead. Don't get comfortable. They want to come at my house? Then it costs them. Make those explosives properly. I intend to teach them something. Down in Xishan, Zhao Wencheng read the report on that raid 3 times without any expression at all and then set it down very slowly, and his secretary of 5 years went cold. She suggested executing the 2 commanders. He looked at her once, and she said afterwards that it felt like falling into an ice cellar. We met a formidable enemy. We can't blame them entirely. We need manpower right now. Then he looked at the file. Li Wei. Who is that? The warehouse supervisor. An insignificant nobody with no education and no background awakens an ability and becomes a problem. This one is lucky, and then, because men like him cannot help it, even when ordinary people get power, they're limited by their own narrow vision. They can't master it. It devours them. They're not comparable to somebody from a distinguished family. And then he sat and thought for 10 minutes and worked out the entire truth about me, and I have never quite forgiven him for it. If he were simply an awakened man, he would have done one of 3 things: tried to please us, run, or asked to join us. Instead, he chose to kill our people and take on Xishan base. Which can only mean he has a secret that absolutely cannot be discovered. Then he put his hand flat on the desk. And what could the biggest secret in the apocalypse be? Only supplies. The goods Walmart lost are in his hands. He hid them with his ability. That was the moment the war started, and here is the number underneath it. Xishan base had, at most, 6 months of supplies for everybody in it. 6 months, and then, in his own words, they would have to optimize personnel or relieve internal pressure by going to war with another shelter. The world's largest warehouse would have carried them 10 years. The order to Wu Hao was to take that building at any cost and bring me back alive, and in exchange he could requisition anything in the base. He did not ask why. He was pleased, in fact. He had not stretched properly in months, and finally an interesting opponent had turned up, and the one thing that base was not short of was weapons. Then his leader had another brilliant idea about food production, and everybody in the room applauded it, and Sun Jingyi felt her stomach move and swallowed it and clapped and said, "Leader, that suggestion is absolutely brilliant. How did none of us think of it?" And then she asked whether he would like ginseng chicken for lunch, since he had been looking tired. They set the forward camp in Zujia town, because it had food and housing, and it was 20 minutes from my front door. And this is where 2 stories start closing on each other, because Jiang Yue volunteered for that mission. She had worked out that the man they were going to kill was the man who had taken Li Meiling. She also knew there were at least 2 more awakened people around him, because she had watched them work at the academy, and Wu Hao did not know that, and she chose not to tell him. She did not want to spend 1 more second in Xishan base. But it is easy to get in, and it is very hard to get out, and if she could get near me, she might be able to talk. Her cover story was flawless. I've only just arrived and made no contribution while enjoying a very high standard of treatment. I would like a chance to prove myself. The villages fell over themselves for those soldiers, not just Guangdong, 5 or 6 villages, competing, bringing their best out of their own cellars to demonstrate loyalty to an organization none of them could name, and the soldiers could not work out why these people were being so enthusiastic and simply noted that it saved them the trouble of using force. Pudgy Wang watched a dozen armed men walk into his village surrounded by his own smiling relatives, and something in his chest twisted into a knot. He called me. "Boss, something's happened. Did the Xishan people turn up?" "Boss, you're really smart." So I told him again, and this time he heard it. They are not an official organization. This whole city has been carved up by factions. That means they are not bound by law and they are not bound by shame. Be careful they don't take your grain. Be much more careful about your own life. Joe cannot reason with the devil. Protect yourself and the people who matter to you. Then, because I am what I am, I think of you as a brother. But if you ever betray me, you know what happens. I had been about to invite him to move into the manor. I changed my mind in the middle of the sentence. Stay in the village for now. I need somebody to keep track of what those people are doing. Boss, I can't do that kind of thing. Those soldiers are terrifying. I get scared just looking at them. That young man can move 100,000 tons of snow and could have killed every soldier in that village without leaving his own doorway, and he was frightened of them, and that is simply who he is. So I took him upstairs to a room the previous owner had built purely for his collection. 80 square meters of it, glass cases wall to wall, limited runs of under 10 sets worldwide. I photographed one shelf and sent it to him. Handle this for me, and I'll give you the complete set of solid gold zodiac figures, the 2035 release, 5 sets ever made. Boss, I will handle this perfectly for you. The happiness of a shut-in is a genuinely simple thing to arrange. He also had a reason of his own by then, and hers was the best thing that happened to anybody in that village. Zhou Jing came running out across the snow to meet him, which he told me was the first time in 5 years that a girl his own age had come toward him on purpose, and she pulled a pair of mittens out of her coat. I knitted these myself. They were ugly. They were obviously handmade and slightly too small, and he wore them for the rest of that winter. Stone Bull, do you think these soldiers coming is a good thing or a bad thing? Before they came, at least we had our own stores and nobody went hungry. But now we have to feed dozens of them. 1 or 2 meals is fine. It's just that we're afraid they'll... She stopped and looked around and did not finish it, because what that village was actually afraid of was that those men would never leave and would take the grain, and that there was nothing anybody could do about it because they had guns. Jing, don't worry. Whatever happens to this village, I will keep you safe. My parents too? Of course. I won't let anyone hurt any of you. And then he went and did something I did not expect, which was argue with the head of his own clan and win. Sun Kai had forbidden him to leave the house, ostensibly to protect the family secret, actually because he was terrified that Xishan would recognize what that boy was and take the village's only asset away. And Pudgy Wang, who had never once talked back to an elder in his life, opened his mouth and discovered the old man folded. Even if you hide me, they'll find out eventually, and then they'll think you are concealing something. It's better if I meet them directly. It shows sincerity. Fine, I'll introduce you, but remember your promise. Don't leave with them. My good grandson, the Wang family needs you. That was the first time in 22 years that man had called him a good grandson. He gave the soldiers a demonstration in the village square, lifting the snow off the ground into a sphere in his palm, and told them, truthfully for once, that he had built every ice house in Wangdong village. 50 professional soldiers with no naturally awakened person among them looked at that fat young man with curiosity and envy in roughly equal measure, and Shen Hong grabbed his shoulders and shook him, because finding a genuine superhuman would offset the disgrace of losing 12 men. Old Wang, go and have them prepare more food and wine. We're drinking with this brother tonight. And the mayor of Zujia town, who had spent a week being important, stood in the snow and watched his superiors ignore him completely in favor of the grandson he had spent 20 years calling useless and did not dare say a word. They loved that boy that night. They told him a naturally born ability has no ceiling. They told him about their own captain, who had been no stronger than any of them and who could now sweep the entire company alone. They told him not to forget his brothers when he made it. And they believed every word he said about hating me, because they knew about the feud between Wangdong village and Li Wei, and they did not know about the deal, and so they assumed the hatred was universal. He said the correct things, that Li Wei is extremely wicked, that he killed more than 100 of us, that he wished he could tear him apart. And somewhere around the 4th cup, he asked a slightly drunk demolition specialist how you go about blowing up a building like that, and got the whole answer. Joe survey the terrain in detail. Ju upload the data to professional engineers and blasting experts. They analyze it and identify the correct charge points and the exact quantity required. Too much or too little, and the result is wrong. Oh, he said. I see. Professional. Truly professional. That fat coward had gotten more useful intelligence out of an enemy camp in one evening than any of my traps had gotten me all month, and when I asked him afterward whether he had considered joining Xishan instead, he gave me the only answer in this entire story that I did not have a cynical explanation for. Boss, I trust my gut. The way those soldiers look at the villagers of Wangdong, they look at them like livestock. It makes me uncomfortable. You're not a gentleman, but at least you're a person with real feelings. You're a lot more reliable than those people, whoever they actually are. Zhou won't regret today, fatty. Then I went home and prepared for a demolition. Explosives were always going to be their answer. I am sure Xishan had enough to flatten 10 of my houses. But somebody has to carry it, and somebody has to place it, and that means people have to come within arm's reach of my building, and at that point we are playing on my ground. I told the house we were abandoning the surface. Everything above ground went into the pocket in about 20 minutes, and all 5 of us moved down. Li Meiling came to me with the one piece of bad news. Their network security is excellent. I've tried many times and they block me every time. It isn't that I'm not good enough. Even a great cook can't make a meal without rice. To get into their system, I need a medium. They run an internal local network. Unless I can connect to it directly or get a Trojan onto a device inside, I can't break in. I said that was interesting and filed it, and thought no more about it that day, and that turned out to be the most important sentence anybody said to me that month. Then Chen and Ran came up out of the workshop with 3 things. First, a number. Based on the materials and the wall thickness, she estimated they would need between 300 and 800 kilograms of explosive, probably 500. I asked whether I could shoot the delivery on the road and blow it up in transit. No, TNT is extremely stable. Bullets don't set it off. Fire doesn't set it off. It needs a detonator. Fine, I said. Then we stay home and play defense. And privately, I will have to use the second plan. Second, an optic. The heavy rifle I had taken off that dead man is rated to 1,850 meters. With my ability on the round, it will reach 5,000. The problem was never the bullet, it was my eyes. She built me a sight in an afternoon. And third, she brought out a white combat suit. It was an exact copy of what the soldiers of Zishan Base wear. Same cut, same shade, same helmet profile. Except that the material was alloy throughout, and an ordinary sniper round would struggle with it, and it cost at least 20 times what theirs did. I don't understand, she said. Why does it have to look like theirs? I picked it up and turned it over. That part is very important. Joe'll understand when the time comes. Then I put 50-odd charges into the snow around my house, all of them on the remote, which is not a secret and does not need to be. Even if they know it is a minefield, they still have to cross it. Yunque Manor is a neighborhood of extremely rich people, which means the one thing it is not short of is cameras. I repaired the wiring across the whole estate, put it on my own power, and had my hacker take the security network, and after that I could watch every street in that community from a chair. And I did not tell Elder Joe any of it, and I did not call him in. I left him out there. If it went badly, an unexpected arrival is worth more than a defender. 50 men came out of Shishan on the appointed morning. Team A, the pick of several hundred, 12 of them modified, 4 naturally awakened captains, including the commander. Their orders were to take the shelter and bring in Li Wei. A death order, in their language, meaning it does not come back unfulfilled, and they brought the base's only functioning snowmobile, which in a world where gasoline cannot be replaced, is close to a sacred object, because it had to carry 2 heavy crates and the chassis was sitting down in the snow under the weight. Somewhere behind the column, a woman with a tang sword rode along, having decided nothing at all. Her actual objective was to get her students out of that mountain. If I could survive an attack by Zishan Base, she would consider talking to me. If I could not, she would need another plan. Pudgy Wong watched 50 men in white come up out of the snow with their weapons wrapped in cloth and swallowed and prayed that whatever was about to happen would stay on my side of the river. Wu Hao took his helmet off in the village square. Ordinary square face, nothing remarkable about him at all. That man is not easy to deal with. We misjudged him, so none of you need to blame yourselves. Then his eyes changed. But the person who killed my brothers is not walking away from this. Now that we are here, his fate is decided. He also tried to clap Pudgy Wang on the shoulder in a friendly way and knocked him flat on his back in front of 50 soldiers, who laughed for some time, and Wu Hao stood there genuinely puzzled by how a man could be that weak. Then he helped him up. Sorry, brother, Joran awakened, aren't you? Not bad. I'll report your situation to the base once this operation is over. Those men have real contempt for cowards. It is in their bones. Which is why not one of them ever considered that the trembling fat boy in the corner of their briefing was reporting every word of it to the man they had come to kill. They did not let the mayor of Sujia Town into the meeting at all. One soldier came over and told him to arrange food and accommodation. Inside, an engineer projected a 3-dimensional model of my house onto the wall of a village hall, and their demolition officer put his finger on a spot at the base of my north wall. Based on the engineer's calculations, we blast from here. To bring down that wall, we need 500 kilograms of TNT equivalent. Then he smiled. We brought 1,000, so we get 2 attempts. Their plan was good. I want to be fair about that, because they had me read almost exactly right. He is a marksman first, but he has no military background and used to run a warehouse, so the marksmanship is an ability, and an ability that locks onto targets is a serious problem. Fortunately, it depends on his line of sight. So we blanket the approach in smoke and incendiaries, and he cannot use it. He has a second thing that ignores bullets and even sends them back, so we do not engage him at all. We go quietly to the wall, place the charges, and withdraw. And then their captain said the sentence that everything turned on. I don't believe one man's ability can be that comprehensive. If he's a master at long range, he must be weak up close. So we blow a hole and go in, and it's over in minutes. They gave themselves 3 hours. Wu Hao said he would prefer one. Down in the basement, I was reading a paper book. An old novel about ordinary lives in an ordinary province, which I had taken out of the library. Those ordinary days are gone forever now. And the ordinary world is buried under ice, and the only thing the book and the world still have in common is that people are stubborn and will try to live anyway. Jo Kier was next to me with her feet tucked under her and her head on my shoulder. And on the wall, in 100 camera windows at once, white smoke started rolling in from every direction. I closed the book. They're here. She got up without a word and fetched my shoes and crouched down to help me put them on. All of you stay down here. Do not come up. One thing they did not know, and it decided the whole day. Since I had taken what was inside Wang Chunhua, my gate had gotten much bigger. I had tested it in the basement with a hand grenade. It swallows a blast wave. They burned my minefield out with detonating cord rather than clearing it by hand, which is faster and completely correct. And every charge Chen Enran had spent a week building went off harmlessly in sequence. I did not resent that. Professionals are professionals. If you sit down against a professional, you should expect to lose pieces, and the only reason I had beaten Shenhong's people at all was that I had cheated. Then I put the house on maximum sound insulation and additionally put on a pair of industrial ear defenders, which made me effectively deaf and which I considered entirely justified given that somebody outside was about to place 500 kilograms of TNT against my wall. The smoke did not bother me. The smoke was to stop me sniping, and I was watching the whole estate through cameras I had wired up a fortnight earlier. The demolition team came in with heavy charges on their backs, laid them exactly where the engineer's model said, set the detonators, and pulled out. 500 kilograms against my north wall in under 4 minutes. Genuinely impressive work. And then they left. I stood there and looked at the pile of explosives sitting against my house, completely unguarded, and one very simple thought arrived. Joe just walked away and left it there? Well, of course they did. If they stayed with it, they would be standing next to 500 kilograms of TNT. I think, from the very beginning, I had been overcomplicating this. Up on the hill, somebody reported that the charges were set and the team was clear. Easier than expected, and I thought this Li Wei must be somebody, given how many of our brothers he's killed. He pressed the button, and everybody put their hands over their ears. And nothing happened. He pressed it again. Then several more times. That's impossible. We checked everything. There's nothing wrong with the setup. They sent men back down to look, and the men came back on the radio in a voice I would pay money to have recorded. The explosives are gone. What do you mean gone? They're not here. The corner is empty. Joe set them up yourselves. Are you telling me we've seen a ghost, or did you eat them? On my side of that wall, I was standing in front of 500 kilograms of high explosive that had arrived in my pocket for free, absolutely lost for words. Was that not a bit too easy? I did not want it to be that easy either. Those people had piled a fortune in ordnance against my house and gone home. They are all wonderful men. Their demolition team nearly came apart over it. That is 500 kilos. He could not have moved it that fast, and even if he moved it, there is a detonator inside it, so it goes off wherever it is, and there was no sound at all. Those men had been doing that job for 15 years and had never encountered anything like it. It was Wu Hao who put it together in about 90 seconds. He used his ability to stop it detonating. His power is spatial. He's put the explosives into some other space so the signal never reaches them. And with that sentence, their entire war became impossible. To demolish that building, they had to bring explosives to it and set them off remotely. But the instant the explosives are at the building, I take them. Somebody suggested artillery. Somebody else pointed out that a large caliber gun cannot be transported across 30 kilometers of snow and that a small one is pointless. Somebody suggested a missile and was reminded that a city garrison does not have the authority to fire one and that nobody had any idea whether I would eat that too. An indestructible building and a man who absorbs any attack that reaches him. There is no manual for that. And then their academician spoke, and he was the only person on that hill who found the real answer. He had been a physicist at the Tianhai Institute before somebody recruited him under a mountain. His ability may be evidence for a multiverse, but energy is conserved. The energy of an explosion does not vanish for no reason. It can only be transferred. So all he is doing is absorbing what exists and moving it somewhere else. Then he looked up. What happens if too much energy is absorbed at once? And Wu Hao finished it for him. It breaks. He took your explosives before they went off. He may not be able to take them once they already have, so they bundled the remaining 500 kilograms into a single charge on a 30-second timer, laid down covering fire across the whole house so I would be looking the wrong way, and then Guo Qiang took his suit off in -60. Every muscle on him started moving under the skin like something alive, and then he swelled, and silver hair came out of the pores, and in about 4 seconds there was a silverback ape 6 meters tall standing in the snow. He and Wu Hao threw 500 kilograms of high explosive 2 kilometers. If you miss, I'll have to go back for more. Relax, boss. I came first in grenade throwing. I opened a gate over my own roof, several tens of square meters of it, and I did something I had never tried, which was partition the pocket so that whatever came in would not be sharing a room with everything I own. The bundle went in, and then, inside, it started to expand. Time in that place runs far slower than out here. It does not stop. My gate shattered. The whole building moved and I nearly went off my feet, and I had not seen it coming, and for one full second I did not know what to do. Most of that blast stayed inside as raw energy, sealed, because the pocket bled off only as much pressure as it had to, which is to say, I now had 500 kilograms of explosion in my pocket with nowhere to be. I filed that. House, damage report. Analysis complete. Damage detected at the southwest corner. Damage rate 22.6%. Outside, an entire face of cladding had come off in a sheet, and there were cracks in my window several centimeters long, which meant that to actually open my house, they would have to hit the same spot exactly 3 more times. They had used 1,000 kilograms, getting to 22%. The bad news was on my side. My gate was gone. I could feel my ability draining away into rebuilding it, and until it came back, I was a man in a house. So I went downstairs and did not come up, and I would not have come up if they had leveled the surface. On the hill, they were looking through binoculars at a wall with its face off and its structure completely intact. That was 500 kilograms. A 30-story building would be gone. This is not scientific, said the academician. By our calculations, that is impossible. Unless he absorbed most of it. Every captain in that group went quiet because they were all extremely powerful people who had just understood that a man could eat a blast that would erase all of them. And then Wu Hao made the mistake that killed his unit. It worked. It just needs doing a few more times. And note this, his defense is extraordinary, and he has spent this entire battle hiding inside and not daring to come out, which tells us he is good at defense and bad at attack. If somebody could do both, they simply should not exist. They sent the vehicle back to base for more explosive and set a rotating watch, because nobody can stand out there indefinitely, and the rest of them went back to the village to be fed. Downstairs, my women were frightened, and I told them everything was fine and explained nothing at all about my ability, because I do not explain it to anybody unless there is no alternative. What I did do was eat. My power runs on food, and rebuilding that gate was burning through me, so Yangsha kept bringing plates and Zhou Qier worked on my shoulders, and for the first time it was completely clear to all 5 of us that everything in that building rested on one man not dying. The shockwave had flattened a dozen villas around us and killed most of my cameras. Pudgy Wang called in from the village with the only intelligence that mattered. Boss, that was terrifying. I thought the whole manor had been leveled. And listen, some of them left the village heading west, and the rest came back and started demanding food. Judging by how they're settling in, they're planning to stay a long time. I sat with that for a while, and then I started smiling, and I have to be honest about why. 65 soldiers were now living in a farming village and eating out of its granary, and there was nothing I needed to do about that at all. Let him be strong. The breeze still crosses the ridge. Let him be arrogant. The moon still lies on the river. I am not coming out to fight you, no matter what you bring. Come in, if you can. And I want to record the one thing I was most grateful for that day. If I had hesitated on the night that woman walked out of my wall, my impregnable shelter would have been a joke by morning. Elder Zhou called that evening, having heard the blast from 30 kilometers away. They what? What right do they have to attack you? Isn't it their job to protect us? And I had to say the thing that took something out of that old soldier. Uncle, they aren't what you were. The apocalypse changes what words mean. What's left out there is an armed group that swears loyalty only to itself. Apart from being better disciplined and having started out inside the official structure, they are not meaningfully different from the Tianhe gang or the Mad Wolves we cleared out of Building 25. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he was coming. I told him no, and I told him why. They outnumber you enormously, they are equipped, and several of them are awakened. Even a hero loses to a pack. Zhou saved my life. Zhou gave me the life I have now. I'm not standing here watching, and I've actually been on a battlefield. I genuinely do not take these boys seriously. We compromised. He would wait, and he would come when I called, and until then, Xishan Base would not know he existed, which left me with 3 cards nobody had counted. Me, a veteran who can catch a charging Mao Mao with his bare hands, and who ordinary firearms cannot hurt, and a cat. Meanwhile, in Sujia town, a soldier told the mayor to make room and to prepare enough food for 65 people every day. Here is the arithmetic that decided the ending of this story. Those men were superhuman or close to it, and every one of them ate like 4 farmers. 65 soldiers eating 5 portions each is over 300 people's worth of food every day, taken out of a village that had been very carefully rationing itself since December. When Sun Kai tried to ask how long, he was told that how and when are military secrets, and that all the villagers needed to do was provide food and lodging, since we're avenging you, aren't we? Then he went and took it out on his grandson. Stone Bull, hurry up and build the snow houses. They're for the leadership of Xishan Base, so do your best work. And Pudgy Wang built them and did not say another word to anybody about anything because he had finally understood that nothing he said would wake those people up. However strong he was, to them, he was still the fat, useless one. He decided to keep himself and one family alive and let the rest of it happen. I put my people on watch rotations in front of the camera wall, with Chen An Ran on the reliable shift, and she took the cat with her because a cat notices things 4 hours before a person does. I paid the cat in several boxes of dried fish. I want to note that the rate had gone up considerably since the 2-fish era. At dawn the cat woke me. There was movement on the hill. 2,400 meters. They kept that distance because they knew I was a marksman, and they did not know how much of a marksman because nobody who found out had gone home. I could have opened up. I waited, because opening the window is what lets a blast in. And then Wu Hao turned his head and looked directly at me. Through one-way glass, at 2.5 kilometers, on instinct alone. Our eyes met somewhere in the middle of that distance and I felt it happen. He's watching us, he said. His intuition was frightening from the first day to the last. Beside him stood the third captain, Gao Meifeng, whose eyes were an unpleasant ice blue, which turned out to matter later. And then he said something that made him a person to me rather than a problem. If it were possible, I'd genuinely like to recruit him. His ability is very promising. What about our dead brothers? Soldiers die on battlefields. That's the arrangement. And this is the man the leader specifically wants taken alive. They came back the next morning with a fresh 500 kilograms and did the same throw. I did not try to catch it. Instead, I shouted something extremely childish, which I am glad nobody was present to hear, and I opened the gate and let out the previous explosion. All of it. The blast I had been storing since they broke my gate, released in one direction, into the sky over my house. The charge that was supposed to land on my roof got picked up by that wall of force and thrown back the way it came. TNT is very stable. It did not go off in the air. It flew 2 kilometers, landed, rolled a little way down a slope, and sat there for a few seconds while the timer they had set finished counting. The snow melted for 1,000 meters in every direction. The men lying in ambush at the foot of that hill were a few hundred meters from where it stopped. Gao Meifeng saved the ones who lived by throwing up a sheet of ice, and she came out from behind it barely able to stand. I watched the light of it from my window, and I could not stop laughing, because I had only meant to deflect the thing, and the result was so much better than the intention. Hot weapons really are magnificent. I simply used them better than the people who brought them. And on that hill, a man who had spent 3 months keeping his unit alive watched 23 of them die inside his own plan, and went down on his knees in the snow and made a noise I could hear at 2 kilometers. Zhou cannot resent an enemy for being cruel in a war. It was their method, used on them. If they wanted somebody to blame, they could blame whoever thought of it. 23, including 3 of the modified. Elites of an elite unit, dead in a device thrown by their own captain, and not one of them ever saw my face. Life is a fragile thing. However gifted you are, however elevated, once you stop, you are simply an object in the snow that somebody has to move. Their academician then closed their last working idea for them. He absorbs and reflects. He clearly still had energy stored from the first attempt. He probably only used part of it. Continuing this plan is not going to work. Then it was my turn. I had been waiting for that sentence for 2 days. The snow around my house was gone entirely, and the trees and half the neighborhood were burning, and Yunque Manor, the most expensive address in Tianhai City, had been mostly erased by its own attackers. House. Open the window. Gate in the opening. Heavy rifle on the sill. New optic. 2,000 meters. First round at Wu Hao. He felt the air change and moved his head, and it cut the air beside his ear. Second round into the silverback, straight between the eyes, and I watched with real interest as he stood there, dug the round out with his fingers, and threw it on the ground, swearing at me, tank grade, wonderful. And then 2 of their snipers fired on me from 2 different angles at once, and both rounds went into my gate, and I turned it around and sent both of them back along their own trajectories. Those men were extremely good. Their aim was perfect, which is why the rounds that came back were perfect too. Gravity meant they did not go into the barrels. They went into the men holding them. Neither of them ever knew what killed them. Then something came at my house across open ground faster than my eye could follow, and hit the wall. Not a thing. A person. 6 seconds earlier, I had been holding my crosshair on his head. He stood in the crater he had just made with his own fist and looked at me through the glass. I saw fury and arrogance in his face. He told somebody afterward what he saw in mine, which was boredom, as though everything happening was a game I had already finished. I put the rifle on him at 2 meters and he was simply gone before my finger closed. Nothing that big should move like that. I have only ever seen insects do it. And then, in the silence, the house spoke. Shelter wall damaged. Damage rate 0.028%. I'll break your shell eventually. Come on then, if you dare. For the record, I could probably beat that man. His speed is his weakness as much as his strength. If I read his line correctly and put a gate on it, he is finished in a second. If he goes around it, I am finished in a second. I make it evenly matched. which is precisely why I was never, under any circumstances, going outside. Time was on my side and nowhere else. I can live in that building for the rest of my life. Sishan Base could not keep 60 men in a field forever. Then Wu Hao did the smartest thing anybody on that side did. Joe think I lost my head charging that wall? I was measuring it, and I found a way to damage it. Captain, Joe don't mean with your fists. Guns and explosives have stopped working on him. Sometimes the most primitive method is the one that works. And then he laid out the observation that had been sitting in front of all of us for a week. When the demolition team walked up to that wall, why didn't he take the men along with the explosives? If his ability were that good, he would have swallowed the entire team. He didn't. So it is limited when it comes to people. His spatial ability is not effective as an attack. His only real damage comes from that rifle and from reflecting our shots, which means it is entirely possible to take his house apart by hand. Their academicians said that even for superhumans, punching through that wall would take years. Then it takes years. And Zhang Yue, sitting on the edge of that meeting, said she had no objections because she already had a plan of her own and needed to look cooperative. The unit walked back into Shujia town, having lost 25 men in 2 days, and a village came out to meet them. Captain Wu, was it a great victory? We heard the explosion. His house must be rubble. As expected of Captain Wu, a great victory on the first move. The flattery went on for a while, and the longer it went on, the worse those men's faces got, because it landed on them exactly like mockery. Shut up, all of you. Then, quieter. Prepare more food than usual. We fought hard today, so make it better food. And the whispering started behind them, and the soldiers heard every word of it, because they hear better than people. Looks like they lost. They can't even handle one man, but they're a regular army. Look at the gear, all those men, and they lost to one person. That's a bit embarrassing. One of the soldiers offered to go and teach the villagers a lesson. No need. Keeping them means food and labor. If we're going to deal with them, it waits until Li Wei is finished. The base needs to replenish its workforce anyway. They can go and contribute then. They're lucky. In the old days, I'd have shot a few by now. And they meant it. And they had the record for it. In the first weeks, when survivors from around that mountain tried to get into the shelter, those men killed all of them on Zhao Wenchang's order. When the fourth pod rioted over rations, those men put it down. By that point, to them, killing a person was the same as killing a fish. Inside the village, the counting began. Mayor, Joe said 2 days. It's been a week. They lost. So this war continues. Who knows how long? One of them eats what my whole family eats in a day. Shujia town cannot carry this. There is an old line about how easy it is to invite a god into your house and how hard it is to get him to leave. Pudgy Wang called me for the 3rd time that week, and I gave him the forecast. This is the polite phase. They're still being nice to you. It doesn't stay like that. Then I told him the thing that made him go quiet. A hungry army in history always ends the same way. First they take the grain, then they take the livestock, then they take the people. For labor, for the mines, for whatever else they need bodies for. Jove got 1,000 people in that town. To them that isn't a town. That's a labor supply. And then, because I did need him where he was, but if I were you, I'd have run already. Jove got an ability. Joe could live well anywhere. Why are you babysitting a bunch of stupid villagers? Boss, they won't dare touch you. And if it ever goes properly wrong, come to me. I've got you. The house gave me the full damage report that night, and I want it in the record. Damage by firearms, 0.00001%. Damage by impact from an unidentified object, 0.028%. And on the 3-dimensional model, at the north wall, a shallow print of a fist. Wu Hao then, without question the strongest person I have ever met. It made me wonder whether Sishan had a method that could raise a person's strength and whether I would use it. And then I remembered 2 bodies on a steel table and what one of them had been paying, and the thought went away, and it has never come back. If it were not for staying alive, I would rather be an ordinary man with a quiet life. I want that on the record too, whatever else is on it. We had a beer that evening. Yang Xia brought it up with a tin of stew, and everybody got a glass, and for about an hour there was no war on. Chen Anran said she understood the alloy and could repair the wall, though she would need certain materials and would eventually have to work outside. Take your time, we're not in a hurry. 3 days later, in the middle of lunch, Li Meiling's phone rang, and every sound in that room stopped, because by then, a phone ringing meant nothing good had ever happened. Meiling, this is teacher Zhang Yue. My students and I need help. Could you let me speak to Li Wei? My first thought was that it was a trap. When force fails, you get the girl in the wheelchair to open a door for a teacher. So I asked for the file first and got it. Zhang Yue, 27. National-level martial artist, over 300 styles and a dozen foreign combat systems, best with blades and grappling. Former personal bodyguard, recruited by Tianqing Academy on 3 million a year. She seems cold on the outside, but she's warm on the inside. I asked which of those two things was a physical description, and Chen Anran did not understand the question, and Li Meiling nearly fell out of her chair. Then, the useful part. Good person, extremely stubborn. Otherwise, she could have survived the apocalypse comfortably on her own, instead of dragging 40 classmates behind her. If it weren't for teacher Jiang, our whole class would have been Mao Mao's dinner. At which point Mao Mao, asleep on a couch in the middle of the afternoon, opened her mouth in an enormous yawn and filled the room with the smell of fish. I took the call. She was in a house in Suzhou that Pudgy Wang had built for her personally, which is a detail I did not learn until much later and which I still find funny. And she was carrying 2 phones, because when she arrived at Shishan base they took her phone for inspection and she assumed they would put software on it, so she handed over one and kept the other in her boot. Her offer was simple. I am currently a team leader in the special operations team. I think you need my help. In exchange, you get me and my students out. Zhou people at Shishan base can't be short of anything. Aren't all Tianqing students privileged? At a time like this, past status is worth nothing. Then I asked her to tell me about the inside of that base on the grounds that whether or not we made a deal, free intelligence is free, and she told the whole room, the 4 pods, the bicycles, the morning assembly and the anthem, the students who kept getting selected and never came back, the white paste which comes out of cockroach farms and out of a machine into which they feed what is left of the experiments that fail, while technicians play handheld games 6 meters away. Every woman at that table went gray. I ate my lunch, because what I heard was not horror, what I heard was data. They are producing that paste, which means their actual reserves are thin. People who think of themselves as the upper class do not abandon appearances that fast unless the alternative is losing their own standard of living. They are cutting up bodies with localized mutations, which means they are running experiments to manufacture superhumans, and the trigger they are using is the same one that made all of us: extreme stress and the edge of death. The missing students were taken for those experiments, and since the odds of an awakening are somewhere near 0, almost none of them were ever coming back. And then I said the thing that made 3 people move closer to me. There are 2,000 living people in Zuzhou town. If I'm right, a large part of that town is eventually going to be walked into that laboratory to find out what artificial mutation feels like. Then Zhang Yue asked me to take her students in, all 30-odd of them. Your shelter is enormous. Zhou could easily accommodate dozens of people. I don't believe you'd want to watch young people suffer. I have rarely enjoyed a sentence more. I am finally seeing how stubborn your teacher can be. She's very naive, said Zhou Kier with feeling. The building can hold dozens of people. The question is on what basis? There are probably many kind people in this world who would give up part of what they have for strangers. My name is definitely not on that list. I don't let anyone into my shelter. She fell back to shelter and supplies, and there I said there was room to negotiate. And then I turned around to the girl in the wheelchair, Meiling. Zhou said that if we could plant a Trojan, you could get into the entire Shishan base network. She sat up so fast her chair rocked. Brother, are you planning to use teacher Jiang to counterattack? I can't spend this entire winter on defense. If I control their network, I'll know exactly what they have, and if I ever need to use that, it will be the most important card in my hand. Jiang Yue agreed to work against the base from inside it, and she did not even hesitate because by then she wanted that place destroyed more than I did. Her own problem was harder than mine. Getting 1 or 2 people out of a base like that is difficult. Getting 30-odd out at once requires a moment when the entire base is looking somewhere else. So we find that moment, she said. Meanwhile, under the mountain, Wu Hao was reporting a second failure to a man in a silk-lined study, and the temperature in that room dropped by 10 degrees. Zhao Wenchang did not shout at him. He needed him. The captain proposed the manual plan. Captains attacking that wall in rotation indefinitely. Approximately how long? 6 months. So for 6 months, this base's defense is stripped. What if we're invaded? What if there's unrest inside? If we take him, we run for 5 more years. And then his leader asked the question that shows exactly why that man ran a shelter and Wu Hao ran a squad. And what happens in 5 years? The captain had no answer, because since December, almost nobody has thought further ahead than the next meal. There is no shortage of supplies out there. There is a shortage of access. It is all under 30 meters of snow, and we cannot get to it. But I am extremely interested in this man's ability. He is a natural warehouse. If we could get him to join us, we could run this base for 50 years. Then he explained his real problem, which was the most human thing anybody in Shishan ever said out loud. We have 1 working snow vehicle. Its capacity is inadequate. Even if we excavate a site, how do we move the goods across 20 kilometers of snow? These are things that were not problems at all in a modern society, and they have become the whole of our lives. Joe want to negotiate with him? Wu Hao's face moved. Dozens of our brothers are dead. Is that simply to be passed over? Everything is for the development of the base. Joe must prioritize the overall situation. Yes, I will obey all your orders. And here is why the next 3 days were the way they were. Zhao Wenchang understood that going to a man who has just beaten you puts you in a weak position. So before he offered terms, he needed pressure. Keep attacking. In fact, increase the firepower. Improve our position for the negotiation. For 3 days and nights they shelled, burned, and grenaded a building they already knew they could not open. We had the noise cancelling on, and I had 2 informants inside their camp, so I knew precisely how much of it was theater. Compared with a special operations unit fighting in the open at -60, I was living in a warm room with plenty of food, a hot bath whenever I wanted one, and pleasant company. On the 4th morning, the video call came through, and when it did, I finally understood exactly why they had been shooting at a wall for 3 days. Talking means negotiating. A middle-aged man in a Zhongshan suit with his hair combed straight back. He smiled at me warmly for about 4 seconds, and then he opened his eyes properly, and something came out of that face that put a chill through me across 30 kilometers of cable. Mr. Li Wei, did you kill the people from our base? Now, that man had spent 30 years inside officialdom, and he was extremely good at running a room. I was a warehouse supervisor with average schooling who had never even been a white-collar worker, and in the old world I would not have been permitted in the same building, so I did not fight him on his ground. I dragged him onto mine. Without saying a word, I pulled a military knife out of the air and put it through my table. Do you recognize this? Your people left it in my house. Even in peacetime, breaking into a man's home and leaving a weapon behind is grounds for whatever happens next, and everybody is frightened these days. Your people came to threaten me in my own home. So what if I killed them? His entire face changed, and I know exactly what he was thinking, because it is what men like that always think. What is the difference between this behavior and a vagrant's? How vulgar. Then he tried the version he had prepared. They didn't hurt you. They were saying hello, in their way, letting you know there were other survivors nearby. We at Zishan base often help the survivors we find, and leaving a marker was intended to put your mind at ease so that we could assist you later. How could you repay kindness with hostility? I want you to appreciate the artistry there. 2 armed operatives break into a man's home at 4 in the morning and leave a combat knife on his table, and that is a greeting card. Joe should have gone into film. No matter what you believe, wasn't it a mistake to kill people before you understood the facts? And I gave him the only answer that has ever worked on that kind of man. I don't care what you think. I care what I think. I say they were invaders, so they were invaders. So what? I killed them. That's all. Because his plan was to reason with me and then out-talk me and then leave me holding some kind of moral debt. Joe cannot take a man hostage with morals if he does not have any. It's a few people, I said. Why are you making such a fuss? A beginner throwing wild punches can beat a master, and I watched that man's composure come apart against it. Joe sent an armed force to my door. Joe have been attacking my house with guns and explosives every day for a week, and you want to tell me I'm in the wrong? How can a person be that shameless? Then he gave me a look I have seen before. Not anger. The other one. The look a senior manager gives a warehouse supervisor across a meeting table when the supervisor has said something inconvenient. I have hated that look my whole life. It is the end of the world, and he was still doing it, so I put both feet up on my desk, which from his side of the screen meant 2 large feet in black socks arriving in his face. Joe, I do not believe anybody had insulted that man in 20 years. Get your people off my land right now, or none of them survive, and then I'll contact the other forces in Tianhai City and let them know that Zishan base is standing empty. Do you think anybody might take an interest? That was a complete bluff. I did not know one single person in any other faction, but in a city that had held 20 million people, somebody is always still alive, and he knew that better than I did, and I watched him take it seriously. Then he came at the supplies directly. So many. Joe couldn't use them in 10 lifetimes. Why keep them? I don't have any supplies. I don't know what you're talking about. Enjoy good things quietly. People are afraid of becoming famous the way pigs are afraid of getting fat. Then he tried the part he had clearly prepared, and it was magnificent. Has the education this country gave you been wasted? To dedicate oneself to public service, to contribute to the country and its people, is the duty of every citizen. Do you know how many elderly, how many women and children in Zishan base are struggling to eat? Where is your sense of responsibility? I want to say what I did not say out loud, because I could not say it without exposing my source. There is no shortage of supplies down there. There is uneven distribution. If everyone in that base ate the same paste, it could carry twice the population. He eats real food in a warm study and lectures me about dedication. What I actually said was shorter. Stop with the grand pronouncements. If I were the kind of person you're describing, I'd have been dead before the apocalypse started. And that is not a figure of speech. Elder Joe, in The Life I Do Not Talk About, gave all his food to the elderly and to a mother and a child, and then sat down in his booth and starved. That is what that speech buys you. For what it is worth, there is a kind part of me. It was simply not a part that survives out here, so I sealed it up myself, and the only people who ever see it are the 5 living under my roof and 1 cat. So he stopped appealing to my better nature and started appealing to the real one. Then let's talk about interests. Give me half, keep half. And then he made the offer that almost worked. Do you know what the greatest happiness in the world is for a man? It isn't money and it isn't women, it's power. Come to Sishan Base and I'll make you my second. Joe will control the fate of thousands of people. Everyone will lower their head when they see you. Everyone will work to please you. Even if you break wind, people will follow you around to smell it. Joe will get anything you want without asking. A glance will be enough. And I sat there and I felt it. Because I know exactly what he was talking about. As a junior, you spend every day managing the moods of a man 1 level above you. Then after 4 years, I became a supervisor with 8 people under me, and I found out what power tastes like. Joe mentions something in passing, and other people spend a week on it. At dinner, the menu bends to what you like, and the fish head points at you. At karaoke, the girl sits next to you, and that is only the power available to a man who runs a warehouse. I listened to him, and honestly, I was homesick. Before all this, I'd have loved to be a junior leader with a little power. In a functioning society, the benefits of leadership massively outweigh the risks. Now the risk and the reward walk in together. I have no interest in your mess, and even less interest in being your number 2. Because going to Sishan Base means going onto somebody else's ground, and on somebody else's ground I am at their mercy, and that is the one thing I will not do. I like my life. I won't join any faction, and I won't be controlled by anybody. Withdraw your people and I'll forget the rest. We go our separate ways. Then he stopped being pleasant. I'm offering you this chance because I value your talent. If you can't appreciate it, I won't hold back. Joe sent all those people with guns and explosives. Ask them whether they've scratched a hair on my head. They took heavy casualties, so it isn't you giving me a chance. It's me giving you one. Old Zhao, stop now. Joe cannot beat me. The old Chen is what did it. I saw it land. I only need to deploy 1 missile to reduce you, and that shelter to ash. My heart did stop for a second. If a missile ever came down on that building, my pocket would not hold that. That is simply true. So I applauded him. Really? This is the first I've heard of Tianhai City having missile authority. Impressive. Truly impressive. Then I did the arithmetic out loud, because that is the only weapon I have that never runs out. Tianhai has no major military region. Zhou are the head of a local separatist force sitting in a hole. So let's have a bet. I bet your base has no missiles. If I lose, you get my life and nothing else. If I win, I keep my life and you lose nothing. How's that for a wager? He could not win that bet in any direction. What he wanted was the supplies and the ability. If he could actually fire a missile, he would get a crater and spend a missile getting it. Fine, if you want war, I'll give you war. Joe started it, Joe carry it. Then I moved everybody down to the 3rd basement, because being right about a bluff and being safe are different things. And Li Meiling pressed a small black and gold crystal into my hand. Just get this connected to their internal network. I'll handle everything after that. Which meant I needed somebody inside Shishan's camp, and I already knew exactly who and roughly how, and I did not tell anybody for another 2 weeks. Zhao Wenchang's order to his captain was short. I don't care what methods he uses or what it costs. Bring that shelter down. Li Wei's life or death is irrelevant. And Wu Hao, I am told, was privately relieved, because if I had accepted that offer, I would have outranked him, and he would have had to live as a man who lost his unit and never got to answer for it. Then he went and took the phones. Every one of the 1,000-odd people in Zhuja town was assembled in the square with soldiers around the edge holding rifles, and a very reasonable speech was delivered. We are here to help you. Across the river lives a monstrous killer. From now on, everybody hands over all communication devices, so our operational plans are not leaked. When Li Wei is dealt with, everything will be returned intact. Concealment will be treated as treason, and the villagers were relieved. Joe could see it. They had been braced for something much worse, and it turned out to be only phones, and a lot of them smiled. I have thought about that a great deal. The greatest virtue of people is obedience, and as long as you do not actually kill them, there is very little they will not absorb. Pudgy Wang stood in that queue with his heart going like a bird, and then he did the one competent thing he had been doing every day for a month. He deleted me. He had been clearing our chat history nightly since the day he agreed to spy, and he had put a shortcut on his home screen to remove a contact in one press, because he is a coward, and cowards prepare. They took his phone, and there was nothing on it. Then the actual plan came out, and it was not stupid. It was the worst thing anybody thought of that winter. The attacks on my house were now a decoy. The real approach was a tunnel, 1,500 meters of it, dug from outside the blast zone to a point under my foundations, followed by 2,000 kilograms of explosive. Zhang Yue went white in that briefing. Joe want the people of Shujia town to dig it. In this cold, Joe'll kill hundreds of them. I am doing this for their own good. Li Wei has already slaughtered hundreds of them, and once we leave, they are defenseless against him. The sacrifice of some is necessary for the final victory. We are soldiers. The first rule of soldiers is to obey orders. I'm not a soldier. Zhou have been one since you joined this team. Unless you have a better way to open that building, execute the order. I got her report that evening, and I want to be completely honest with you about what I felt, because this is the part of my own story I like the least. I had thought of that method myself and dismissed it, because a tunnel is easy to counter. Zhou simply collapse it. What I decided instead was to let them dig. Let them dig past halfway. Let them get within 300 meters, and then take the tunnel down and think about the look on their faces. They aren't digging it themselves, she said. They've got the villagers doing it. If people die, it will be innocent villagers. Act quickly. She did not know what Shujia town had done to me. She did not know they had traded my address for a title, or that their mayor had personally set an armed unit on my house, or that when the soldiers came, they competed with 5 other villages to feed them. I did not want to save that town. I had been waiting to watch it get exactly what it had bought, so I stopped her with kindness. Teacher Jiang, you're right, but if I collapse that tunnel now, I expose you. Every phone in that town has been confiscated. Only you and the special operations team can reach the outside. The moment I act, they suspect you within an hour. I'm not sacrificing you for the lives of those villagers. And then, because I could not help myself, I offered her the alternative. Go and talk to Wu Hao, have a serious conversation, beg him to abandon the plan, or fight him and force him to agree. At least if you lose, he probably won't kill you, which is better than being found out as a spy. She had nothing to say to that. If she had been alone, she could have walked out of that camp any night she liked. The students in the 4th pod were the chain, and then I gave her the absolution, which is the worst thing I did in the whole war. The people sending them to die are Shishan base, not you. Zhou have nothing to blame yourself for. I watched a decent person's guilt get lighter because I told her it could be, and I did it on purpose, and it worked. Then casually, by the way, which house are you in Shujia town? Why, do you intend to come looking for me? Who knows, but if I get the chance, I'll need you to do something. It's the key to whether you and your students get out. The landmark she gave me was the anime ice castle a fat young man had built with his own hands. Everything in this story eventually touches everything else. For the next month, the siege was theater. Every day the captains came and roared and hammered on the blind side of my wall where no rifle could reach them, while 50 men pretended to storm a building nobody was attacking. Wu Hao left a shallow dent, the silverback left less. Zhang Yue left a very neat scratch and then convincingly ran out of strength and withdrew. Inside, I sat cross-legged on a calfskin couch watching all of it on a screen with a woman on each side peeling sunflower seeds and pecans and putting them in my mouth. Water. Yang Xia had a cup in my hand before I finished the word, and Zhou Kier, half a second slower, gave her a look that could strip paint. So you see, I told the room, the outside world is extremely dangerous and full of very strange people. We must never go out casually. We can eat and drink in here. Isn't that wonderful? I knew exactly how far that tunnel had gotten, incidentally, and I want to explain how, because it is my favorite trick of the whole siege. Sound travels faster and further through solids than through air. They were digging through frozen ground. One receiver in my foundations and a computer, and I could read their progress to within a few meters. It is a small thing. Most useful things are. Somebody has to be told what happened in that tunnel, so it may as well be me. Almost 1,000 people worked it. 20 at a time at the face, half-hour shifts, because that is as long as a person lasts. The hardest part was the permafrost layer, which had to be broken by hand. The deeper it went, the thinner the air. There was no oxygen equipment. Air went down a rubber hose, pumped by a man on the surface turning a crank. The first one to die was Feng Yong, 52, a construction worker, of a heart attack. That is not an incurable condition. It requires rapid transfer to a facility with decent medicine. Shishan Base has such a facility, 200 meters under a mountain. Nobody was going to complicate their day for a villager, so he was sentenced to death by the fact of who he was, and nobody in that camp thought of it as a decision. Somebody threw down a shovel and shouted that this was inhuman, that they were being treated like cattle, and other tools started hitting the snow. A soldier lifted his rifle, not at anybody, just enough, and the whole thing stopped. Then the second, then the third. Some collapsed at the face, some finished a shift, went home, got into bed, and did not wake up. Those people were already spending everything they had on simply not freezing, and the work was the last straw, and after the first week, bodies came out of that tunnel most days. Wu Hao's instruction on the matter, delivered while eating, pick a few ringleaders and make an example. Some people don't understand until they see it, and have their own village chiefs and mayors run the labor. They manage their own people far better than we ever could. 3 men were taken away one morning and did not come back, and after that, nobody put down a shovel again. I want to be fair to that man, because he is the most interesting person in this entire story, and I have thought about him more than I have thought about Zhao Wenchang. He pulled a thin worker out of the line one afternoon and made him lift his head. How old are you? 13. And he went off like a bomb. Didn't I say nobody under 16 works? Do you not understand that children are the future of this nation? I don't care how tight the schedule is, we have a bottom line. Take him home right now. This is a battlefield. The boy looked at him with tears in his eyes and something close to worship. Zhang Yue watched a man who was killing a village at the rate of 3 people a day send a 13-year-old home and then be genuinely proud of himself, and she told me afterwards that she had no idea how to think about him at all. He has his own internal logic and it is completely consistent. Whatever he does, he never once feels he was wrong. When he sacrifices other people, he always has a reason, and the reason is not an excuse because he believes it. Pure evil frightens people. So does pure conviction. I am no longer sure which one is worse. The night they had that conversation by the fire, he told her his creed, and I am going to give it to you because it explains their entire organization. A good soldier does not need thoughts of his own, not about fighting, about strategy. In a war, the worst thing is individual will overriding collective will. Even if you know something is wrong, everybody must move in the same direction, or there is no chance of winning. Internal division is the fatal flaw in any organization. And if you know it's wrong and go anyway, the planet is round. Walk far enough in the wrong direction, and you come back around eventually. And if you fail? If all these people die of cold and exhaustion, who is responsible? He was quiet for a while. I'll take responsibility. I'll remember the ones who died, and I'll live on for them. And he smiled when he said it, and he meant every word. By the 10th day, the tunnel was 500 meters and 32 people from Sujia town were dead. By the 17th, it was 700 meters and the count was over 100 and the villagers had gone completely blank. Most of them had stopped even remembering why they were digging. They went out every day at gunpoint and dug, and some of them came back. That was the fortnight I spent playing cards. We went through every game any of us knew. Li Meiling has close to a photographic memory, so she rapidly became unbeatable, and since money means nothing, the loser had to perform a talent or tell an embarrassing story. Sometimes we went down to the stadium level and played badminton. Occasionally I went upstairs, opened a window, swore at the sky, and fired a few rounds so the performance outside had somebody to perform to. And in the middle of that, Sun Kai went to ask the soldiers whether they might eat a little less, and came home having agreed to double their rations. It is the best piece of extortion I have ever seen, and I have some standards. He walked in and was greeted like an old friend and invited to sit down at a table with a mountain of food on it, which was the daily allowance of 5 people, each of whom eats what a dozen villagers eat, because their abilities run on calories. Old Wang, Jove had a hard time lately, but you're the mayor. With great power comes great responsibility. Then, before the man could get his request out, speaking of food, I have to say something. The quality has been getting worse every day. Look at this. We've been eating fish for a week. We're soldiers. Joe can't skimp on us. Bring more red meat. The mayor of Zhuja town sat there with his mouth open, having arrived to ask for less. Well, all right, since you're all working so hard, we'll leave you alone. I'll take the team out tomorrow. And then, while the relief was still on his face, but be on high alert once we go. We've been attacking that man's shelter from your town. Given his character, he isn't going to let that go. We can hold him off while we're here. But once we all leave, who exactly do you think he'll come for? So you see, we can't leave. We have to stay and protect you, which means that from tomorrow, rations are doubled. People will starve. And then the sentence that ended the argument, delivered in a completely level voice. If the villagers die, you Wang family people still live here. If we soldiers die, not one blade of grass survives in Sujia town. So my request is acceptable, isn't it? That night the whole town cursed until it was hoarse. And the next morning they served the food exactly as ordered. Because even robbed, they were still eating something. Even worked to death, it was not 100% certain that it would be them. People do not move until they are absolutely at the end, and they were not at the end yet. Meanwhile, I had noticed something in one of Zhang Yue's reports and asked about it as casually as I could manage. There seemed to be fewer people attacking my house lately, only you superhumans. Where has everybody gone? Most of them are on standby in Sujia town, keeping order. It's really just to prevent a riot and make it easy to suppress one. Oh, I said, I understand. I got up at 7 the next morning and pulled the covers off a cat that yawned at me and stretched into a shape a cat should not be able to make. Get up. Shall I take you out for a walk? Then I dressed properly for the first time in my life. Underneath, the white bodysuit, the exact copy of what Wang Chunhua had been wearing, with the gold zip pulls and the small gold sword on the chest and the heating elements built through it. On top, the combat suit, an exact reproduction of Zishan Bei's special operations issue, down to the stitching, made of alloy that cost 20 times theirs, white boots, a helmet with a communicator, tactical goggles and anti-fog, and a visor nobody can see through. I spent half an hour checking weapons. Then I took a beef and cheeseburger out of the pocket, warmed a cup of soy milk in the kitchen, ate breakfast at a leisurely pace, put the cat on my shoulder, and went down to the 3rd basement. There is a tunnel under that building that nobody else knows about. Not my women, not Chen Anran, who has been in every other room down there. Under the floor at the left front corner of the stadium, 3rd row, 4th column, a yellow key, a mechanical lock, then a 2nd door, then a 3rd, and at the bottom a gray door on iris and palm that would hold against artillery, 2.5 kilometers of it coming out behind the low hills north of the manor in a stand of dead trees. There is an electric motorbike parked at the door, because electric is quiet, and it starts on a retina scan and has no key at all. The exit was under snow. When I got out and turned around to look at what I had come out of, it was a tall stone slab. That man had disguised his emergency exit as a gravestone. There may well be a cemetery under my house. I have decided not to investigate. Mao Mao went up to 10 meters and pushed the snow back over the grave marker with her paws, and we went north. The math was simple. Every day the captains came to my house to keep up the show. They had to come, or I would know something else was happening, which meant that whoever was left in Zhuja Town was ordinary. And in close quarters against ordinary soldiers, that cat is about 10 times more useful than I am. There were 4 sentries around the village. The first one saw a white combat suit with a captain's gold star on the shoulder come out of the tree line, and he straightened up and said, "Team leader." I nodded at him slowly. 4 sentries. Then the bodies went into my pocket and the snow went over the rest. I could have simply killed everyone in that village with the cat. I did not, because noise brings 4 captains across a river in 5 minutes, and I had come there to work, not to be a hero. Then I walked through their camp. Nobody looked twice. The helmet was slightly odd, and the white suit was unmistakable, and the only genuinely strange thing about me was the very large tabby cat walking at my heel, since by that point in the winter, cats were food. Zhang Yue had given me the location of every billet, so I did not have to search. Behind the first door, 6 men were playing cards for cigarettes. "Your Majesty, do you want it or not? If not, I'm running." "Run, I'll blow you up." Zor carrying a bomb. Somebody glanced up at me and asked whether the helmet was not uncomfortable, and went back to his hand. 4 times speed, and Dragon's Cry. That was 4 seconds. The cat took the last 2 before either of them made a sound. After that, it was a procedure. Walk in as their colleague, use the ability, clean the room. Next door. The next room was communications. 2 women and a man in gold-rimmed glasses, all 3 of whom saluted me. And somewhere around the 14th, the military dogs in the kennel started up, because well-trained dogs never bark for nothing, and there was a great deal of blood on my boots. The alarm went up across that camp inside a minute, and here is the part I still enjoy. Not one of them noticed that the enemy they were forming a perimeter against was wearing their uniform and standing in their formation. I took the gold star off my shoulder and joined a squad, and because there was an unknown intruder, every single soldier in that village put on his tactical helmet. So there we all were on a white road, 60 seconds after a massacre, 30 men in identical white suits and identical helmets, all pointing rifles at each other, with nobody able to tell whether the person under any given visor was a friend. Their squad leader solved it in about 15 seconds, and I have genuine respect for him. On my mark. Everybody make the concealment signal. Special operations hand signs are not something an outsider can fake. Everybody's hands moved at once except mine. Then 30 men fired at me from 4 meters, and every round went into the gate, and I gave all of it back at the same time. 7 or 8 of them went down in their own volley, and from a window across the square, a fat young man rubbed his eyes very hard and said, out loud, "Boss?" Then their leader shouted the only correct order anybody gave in that whole war. "Don't fire. His ability works on firearms, not on people. Melee." He was right. My pocket cannot take a living person on my initiative. That does not mean a knife is going to work. 4 of them came at once from 4 corners, 2 of them modified and therefore faster. That is my one real weakness. The gate opens in one direction. 4 attackers from 4 angles is a genuine problem, but I did not come alone. I ignored the 2 behind me completely and put the gate in front, and the 2 in front went into it, and I shut it because any longer inside than a few seconds and there is nothing to come out. And the 2 behind me looked up in time to see the light go out of the sky. When it comes to raw speed, nothing beats a cat. The rest of them ran, and chasing is not my strength, so I said one word and let something that enjoys chasing go and do it. Then I walked to a house shaped like a cartoon castle, went inside and put a small black and gold crystal and a SIM card under the bed. That was the entire purpose of the raid. Everything else was housekeeping. Mao Mao, we're leaving. 5 minutes maximum before 4 captains came back across that river, and I had no intention of being there. I got about 200 meters before a fat man came galloping through the snow behind me shouting, "Boss! Wait! Boss! Didn't you come here to find me?" I looked at him. He worked it out and his face fell, and then about a second and a half later he brightened right back up. "Ha ha ha, I knew it. Zhou definitely wanted to see me too, right? I don't have time. Either you leave with me now, or you find your own way to me later." And I threw him a new phone, because Zhang Yue had told me weeks ago why he had gone silent. He hesitated. He wanted to bring some people. So he ran back to the house of a girl who had knitted him a pair of ugly mittens and stopped outside the wall because he could hear the family talking inside. "Mum, so many people have died out there. Will we be all right?" Silly girl. It was their own people killing their own people. It's got nothing to do with us. Otherwise, I'll go and find that fat boy. A few nice words and he'll protect us. He's slow, but he's capable. Jing, why don't you just marry him? And then the girl's voice. "Mum, what nonsense is that? He's fat and he's ugly. If you hadn't told me to get close to him, I'd never have spoken to him at all. If I had to lie in the same bed as him, I'd have nightmares every night. Looking at that greasy fat face makes me want to be sick." And then, kindly, to reassure her mother, "Don't worry, that idiot is genuinely stupid. Show him the smallest kindness and he's overjoyed. Dead fat otaku are the easiest people in the world to handle. Their heads are full of fantasies. All a woman has to do is be slightly nice and they'll hand over everything they've got." He stood outside a wall in the snow and got that in full. So he was the hero she saw. That is what he had been the whole time. And then he did the thing that makes me like him more than anybody else in this story. He knocked anyway. "Jing, come with me. The village isn't safe. If you trust me, I'll take you somewhere else. With me there, I'll keep you safe." "Sorry, Stone Bull. Isn't that a bit risky? This isn't a drama. Why make it look like we're eloping?" She smiled at him gently while she said it, and there was pity all through it, the kind you look down at somebody with. And then she took his hand and looked up into his face. "But even if something happens, you'll protect us, won't you?" He told me. He nodded. He does not remember doing it. Then he watched her go back inside, and he stood there for a moment, and then he turned around and ran out of that village without stopping. Running away is shameful, and it is useful. And as for Zhou Jing, he called me at a dead sprint. "Boss, I've thought it through. I'm coming with you." He could have left at any point in the previous 2 months, by the way. A man who commands ice and snow can live anywhere in a world made of it. The only thing that had ever held him in that village was a girl who had been assigned to be nice to him. Wu Hao heard the shooting from across the river and could not raise his own camp on the radio, which for a unit that disciplined is impossible unless something has gone very wrong. He left the others to keep hammering my wall and came back with 5 men at a speed nothing that size should manage. I am not going to describe what he found. There is one detail I will give you, because he told somebody about it later, and it got back to me. One of his men had died reaching out, and his right hand was still pointing across the river toward my house. Here's the count. He brought 50. With the survivors of the rescue team, 60-something. The bomb they threw at me killed 22 of them. Everything left in Zujitown died that morning. He had 13 men, including himself, and that is the moment the best soldier in that province broke. The noise he made flattened people standing 30 meters away and brought snow down off the roofs. Who did it? Who killed my brothers? He picked up an old man by the throat, and the old man was too frightened to produce a single word, and that cost him his life. Then he went through 7 or 8 more villagers while they were still trying to answer him, and he kept going until he was tired. Those people had invited that unit in. They had fed them out of their own stores and competed with 5 other villages to do it. They had dug his tunnel and buried 100 of their own in it, and they died at his hands anyway, without having done one single thing wrong. And then he looked around at what he had done and realized he had perhaps gone a little far and explained himself. "Look at you all. I only wanted to ask whether you'd seen the murderer. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Joe know how many of my brothers died. I'm in a terrible mood. It's all right. Nobody needs to be frightened." He genuinely believed that covered it. Then, in the same breath, "And if nobody talks, then you did it, and everybody in this town dies." A girl finally gave him what he wanted. The one who killed them was wearing the same clothes as you. He did all of it by himself. And he had a strange cat that could grow bigger than a house. "See," said Wu Hao, "I am a very fair man. As long as you honestly tell me what you saw, I won't kill innocent people." I have turned that sentence over a great many times. Then he worked out the rest in under a minute because he was always the smartest one there. Space ability. Li Wei. He was in the shelter, so how did he get out? "Captain, could there be another passage?" "Yes. Of course there is. No competent shelter has only one exit. Ours has at least 2, not counting the leader's private route. Find that road and we get inside." And then he turned to a square full of people whose relatives were lying in it. "Remember, it was not I, Wu Hao, who killed your family today. It was Li Wei. He caused all of this, and I will avenge you. They lowered their heads and said nothing, and every one of them had privately reclassified him as something worse than me. At least I had only ever hit back. They had done everything in their power to please him, and he treated them like livestock anyway. On the way home, Pudgy Wang looked back at the tracks my motorbike had left in the snow. Boss, those are really obvious. Won't they find the passage? Unless they're complete idiots, they will find it. That's not a good thing. I can't wait for them to come. I have never once fought a battle I wasn't prepared for. I had left that trail on purpose. Back at their camp, Wu Hao was staring at the same tracks and not trusting them. We've fought that man a dozen times. When have you ever seen him take a loss? He would not leave a hole that obvious unless he wanted us in it. But the snow was going to cover it by nightfall, and of a 60-strong elite team he now had 13, and each of those was worth 30 ordinary soldiers. Then he asked the question I had been dreading for a month. Use your brains. What made Li Wei confident enough to come out and hit our headquarters? There is a traitor. Somebody gave him our dispositions. Otherwise, cautious as he is, he never leaves that building. And if our intelligence is being leaked, what exactly is the point of continuing to dig? Every villager's phone had been confiscated and scanned. The village hated me, which left only one place the leak could be. And the newest member of the special operations team, who had publicly objected to his plan and who was close to nobody, was standing right there. Teacher Jiang, could you let me check your phone? The temperature in that room dropped. Captain Wu, are you saying you doubt me? She had on the way back hidden the phone she used to contact me inside a hollow in a dead tree on nothing more than instinct. So she pulled out the official one and tossed it to him. If you want to investigate, then investigate thoroughly. And under her bed, 6 meters away, lay a black and gold crystal and a SIM card that had been there since that morning. She handed the phone over with so much contempt that Wu Hao started to doubt himself, and then somebody in that tent said 6 words that saved her life. Where's that fat lad called Wang? A man who vanishes on the morning of an attack is an informant, and the person who confirmed it, who told them she had known Pudgy Wang was leaving Sujia town, was Zhou Jing. Wu Hao put his fist through a snow house and swore he would kill that traitor personally, and Zhang Yue let out a breath she had been holding for 4 minutes. Sun Kai looked him in the eye for the first and last time. Captain Wu, hasn't Sujia town been good enough to you? Why did you kill our people? I didn't kill them. Li Wei killed all of them. If he hadn't come and murdered my brothers, and if your Wang family hadn't known and failed to report it, would I have been that angry? So blame Li Wei. Cooperate with my work. I am here to avenge you. He said it with his face shining. It is not sophistry when the man believes it. The wolves had moved into the sheep's village, and they were not leaving until every sheep was gone. The next morning he assembled 1,000 people in the square and picked out 100. Jolot, come with me. If it goes smoothly, there'll be a large reward. Nobody ran, because in that cold, running anywhere without preparation is a slower way of dying. Zujia town had become a prison with no walls. He followed my motorbike tracks for 2.5 hours, all the way around the hills, and stopped in front of a large stone slab in the snow. So that's where it was, and then he did the thing that tells you everything about him. Would you mind going down and scouting ahead first? He had been caught by me too many times, and he had started to be afraid. 100 farmers went into a narrow shaft carrying radios in single file, like a flock being moved. Halfway down, 2 metal shutters came out of the ceiling, front and back, then the flame system that Kai Ching had once demonstrated to house guests by throwing in a live chicken. The camera feed on the surface lasted about 4 more seconds. Wu Hao watched 100 people from the village he was protecting die in my corridor and had one thought, which he said out loud. What a ruthless man. He really did have a backup plan. If I hadn't had the sense to send the Sujia people in first, several more of my team would be dead. Zhang Yue felt something about that, and then noticed that she felt less than she would have a month earlier. The mind adapts to anything if you give it long enough. That is the most frightening thing I learned all winter, and I learned it about myself. Then Gao Meifeng put her hands out and the falling snow stopped in midair and poured itself into my tunnel. The ice went down the shaft, hit the burning section, melted, ran deeper, and refroze. The passage slopes down, said their academician, delighted. Fill it with water and let the temperature do the rest, and that door never opens again. He can't even burn it out. They still had no way into my building. But my emergency exit was now a 2.5-kilometer plug of solid ice, and that was, I have to admit, extremely good work. Not one of the 100 came back. It was announced in the square in a level voice. Zujia town went into another round of grieving, and in the middle of it somebody came over and said they were hungry and asked for food to be brought quickly and not to delay. He did not bother pretending anymore. That evening, the families of the dead pulled white cloth out of their cupboards and held funerals in the snow. On my side of the river, we were holding a welcome party. Pudgy Wang could not get over the place. Palace-grade housing, hot food, and 4 beautiful women in one building, and a man who had just killed 100 people sitting in the middle of it eating stewed beef. He had also just had his heart taken apart, so he had views. The more beautiful a woman is, the more likely she is to lie. Instead of wasting time talking to real women, I should spend more time on anime. At least anime girls never lied to me. Then he got about 4 drinks in and worked out something I had not told anybody. Boss, apart from me, do you have another informant in Sujia town? I know your personality. Zhou would never take a risk like leaving this building unless you were certain. Then he named her himself. She saw me in that camp and pretended not to know me, and she knew exactly what I was to you. So she isn't loyal to Sishan. You're smarter than you look. Let's drink to that. An hour later, he was face down on the table crying about a girl. I thought she liked me. She treated me like a fool. Does love really just fade? And Li Meiling, without lifting her head from her glass, said, how lame. I want to be honest that I intended to move him out to a neighboring villa as soon as the war ended. I do not enjoy other men living in my house. 3 days later, the cat woke everybody at dawn and Chen Anran came running. There are people coming. They're very strange. I think there are zombies outside. Several hundred meters south, a group was crawling toward the house at a speed that was not a walking speed. Zoom in, and they were not zombies. They were people from Sujia town, gray-faced, stiff, moving because something behind them was making them move. I could not see a single captain on any camera, which told me exactly where the captains were. And then Pudgy Wang, standing at my shoulder with a borrowed vest and helmet, went completely still. He had found Zhou Jing in that crowd. We have to kill all of them, I said. All of them? If this building is opened, do you think any of us survives? And I want to say the true thing, since I have said all the others. If I could have avoided it, I would have. But there is no version of that morning where I do nothing and my house is still standing at noon. I did not make him shoot. I started. The sound that came up the slope was the worst thing I have ever heard through triple glazing. Stone Bull, it's your 4th aunt, don't shoot. We're your own people, how can you fire on us? And loudest, a girl's voice. Stone Bull, save me. Joe like me, don't you? I'll marry you. I'll be your wife. Just save me. Then one of them went down, and the coat came open, and I saw what was strapped underneath. Every single one of them was carrying explosives. Wu Hao had been unable to open my house with 2,000 kilograms of TNT, so he had solved the delivery problem by putting the charges inside people, because a person walks, and my ability cannot take a person. I stopped firing. Fatty, look at what they're wearing. He looked for a long time. Those animals. I told you what they were, so to deal with them we have to be worse. And then I did the coldest thing in this whole account, and I did it deliberately, and it was not about loyalty. I held out the pistol. The situation's clear. Joe know what needs doing. He stared at it for a long time, then he took it. They're all going to die anyway. It isn't my fault, I'm the one sending them. Blame the bastards at Zishan base. He fired the first shot the way you pull off a plaster, and then something happened that I had counted on, and that I am not going to pretend was accidental. He started enjoying it. His second aunt went down, the one whose family had money and who used to stand in his parents' kitchen listing her children's achievements and calling him a good-for-nothing to his face. He told me afterwards that when she fell, he felt something come loose in his chest. I know exactly why. That young man had lived his whole life in a village where nobody respected him. He got a superhuman ability and spent 2 months solving that village's problems, and it changed nothing because what actually hurt was never the work. It was the looks, the disdain, the pity, the eyes sliding past him. He had spent 1,000 nights telling himself he was imagining it. He knew better than anybody that he was not. And now the lives of every person who had ever looked at him that way were in his hands. I handed him a fresh magazine and then an assault rifle. Use this one, it's more fun. Don't hold it up there, keep your other hand down. The recoil's serious. The ones who tried to run back died first, because Wu Hao's people were directly behind them putting rounds through anybody who turned around. And when the first of them fell that way, Pudgy Wang screamed at the hillside that they were killing their own villagers, that they were animals. Zhang Yue, standing 4 meters from him, later told me she had genuinely not known what to say to that. 100 people, every one of them, including Zhou Jing. And he stood there afterwards looking down at her and told me in a completely level voice that he felt calm and that looking at her now, he could not understand what he had ever seen in her and that honestly, she was not even that pretty. Then, after a pause, "Boss, sorry, my aim's a bit off. I wasted a lot of your bullets. It's fine, consider it practice. Bullets are cheap. People have an inexplicable reverence for ammunition. It is one of the most affordable things in the world. Up on the hill, Wu Hao's last idea had failed, and their academician, who did not report to him, said the thing out loud. We're nearly out of weapons and ammunition, and we have no soldier units left. There is no point staying here. Do you think we can even go back? His voice had gone. He was tired. He said maybe he should just die here, and put a pistol to his own head, and 3 men took it off him without any difficulty at all. Jiang Yue watched an extraordinarily capable fighter allow his own weapon to be taken away by ordinary hands and stopped respecting him at that exact moment. He never intended to die. He needed everybody to see him decline too. And then the academician offered the consolation prize that killed Sujia Town. It wasn't entirely fruitless. As long as we bring these people back, that's enough of an explanation for the leader. Because Zishan Base is permanently short of bodies, for the experiments and for the bicycles. Before they left, Wu Hao detonated everything strapped to the 100 dead in my snow. The flash would have blinded a man without glass in front of him. I shut my eyes. Pudgy Wang did not, and his eyes ran for 2 days afterwards. Down in the village, Sun Kai sat and thought for a long time and reached a conclusion that I consider the moral of this entire war. It would not have mattered what he chose. Zujia Town had a large population and a great deal of food, and no force capable of protecting either. Faced with a superhuman like me or an organization like Zishan, the outcome was always the same. This is not a civilized society anymore. Strength is the only argument left. Nobody in that square said anything when the soldiers came back. They stood in silence and looked at them, and one of the survivors said it was like a cemetery watching grave robbers. The numbers. 60 soldiers had eaten what 500 or 600 villagers eat. Over 400 people were dead, killed directly, worked to death in the tunnel, or gone in the night for reasons nobody recorded. Shuja Town had barely lost anybody to the cold that whole winter. It lost 1/3 of its population to being helpful. We're leaving this place, said Wu Hao, and light came back into 1,000 faces. Do you need help getting ready? Absolutely. Have them pack their everyday belongings and prepare to come back to Zishan Base with us. I mean everyone aged 16 to 35. The mayor's smile stayed on his face for about 3 seconds after he stopped meaning it. Those are our lifeblood. If they go, we're left with the old, the women, and the children. How do we survive? In the apocalypse, it's unrealistic to expect everyone to survive. Be selfless. Make sure the ones in the best physical condition live on to continue your family line. The selection criterion was stated openly because at that point, nobody was pretending. Experiments and generator work both require healthy bodies. Too old or too young is a waste of food. And Wu Hao, I am told, said that he was a man of conscience who would never take a life without a reason, and he genuinely believes that about himself to this day. Some of them shouted, "What about our families? If you take us, take them. If I have to abandon my family, I would rather stay here and die with them." He fired once into the air and explained that this was an order and not a consultation. A few men broke their own legs with stones rather than be taken. It did not save them. More than 400 people, every one of them the pillar of a household, said goodbye across a line drawn in the snow, and most of them did not have the courage to cross it to hold anybody. Should we take the food as well? Leave it for now. The purpose of this trip is people. If we need it later, we'll come back for some. Captain, you really are too kind. The old and the young stood and watched them go until they were out of sight, and then they started to cry. At Zishan Base, they were greeted as a triumph because I had killed every communications soldier in that camp, and nobody underground yet knew that half the special operations team no longer existed. Captain, you found so many survivors. That's a huge achievement. Now the 4th pod won't be short of labor. It goes through people quite fast. Besides the ones consumed in experiments, a lot of them choose to end things because they can't cope with the drop in status, which causes real inconvenience for everybody else. Without people at the bottom doing the work, the people at the top can't enjoy the service. Then Zhao Wenchang broke a glass on his desk. I gave you half the elite of this base and this is what you bring me? Do you know how long it takes to make those 50 men? They are worth 1,000 ordinary soldiers. Zhou are the sinner of Shishan Base. Wu Hao stood at attention through all of it. Then he knelt on the floor, put his hands on his knees, and asked to be executed if his leader thought it appropriate, and otherwise to be given the chance to kill me personally. He got a week's confinement because you do not throw away a knife that sharp, and then the order went out about the 400 people from Zujia Town. Don't wait, we urgently need troops. Run the experiments immediately. If the catalysis fails, implant Wu Hao's cells. Rushing it will drop the success rate. We might not get 1 in 30. It doesn't matter. What I need is fighting power, not manpower. There are still plenty of survivors in this city, and we can replenish the population whenever we like. Only military strength gives us a voice here. Then he said what he actually wanted, and it was not Sishan. What I want is the whole of Tianhai City. And then he sat and thought about a man surnamed Zhu. Because Zhao Wenchang had 1 card left that was not a bluff. The commander of the Jiangnan military region owed him a very large personal favor and had promised to repay it once. Jiangnan is one of the 6 major military regions of this country, and Jiangnan can launch a missile. That was his deterrent, held back for years, meant for other factions. I had won half of that bet, and I did not know it. He called me one more time, from a position of nothing, and I greeted him cheerfully. Old Zhao, long time no see. I want to record this conversation because I enjoyed it more than anything else that happened to me that year. Stop making trouble. Jove lost a lot of your elite. It can't be a good time for you either. And listen to me. If you ever do open my shelter, I'll destroy every supply inside it and leave you nothing. Zhou cannot win this. I'm willing to coexist. Zhou will submit. Old Zhao, have you taken something? Zhou lost. I won. Zhou can't touch me, and you still want me to be your subordinate? All right, I'll take you under my wing instead. Zhou, stay put down there, and if anything happens, use my name and I'll protect you. Zhu are courting death. I may not run a military region, but that doesn't mean I can't get my hands on that hardware. You're an ordinary man. Zhou have no idea how relationships work at our level. If you could do it, why haven't you? Why wait until now? Go on, demonstrate it. If you really have that, I'll follow you and I won't be embarrassed about it. Do you know how important that is? How could I possibly demonstrate it to you? And something in the way he said it made the hair go up on my arms. He was not lying. Give me a few days to think. One day. If you haven't submitted in one day, I will level that building. He hung up, and then he closed his eyes and put his hands together and prayed that I would be sensible because he genuinely did not want to spend his one favor on me. I put the phone down and made the only decision available. I cannot beat a missile. I can, however, not be there. Everybody pack. We're leaving. An ordinary missile might not beat 500 kilograms of TNT. But they know what that building is, which means they will requisition something built to punch through, and I am not gambling 5 lives on a maybe. The packing took 4 hours, mostly because everything in that villa was the most expensive object of its kind, and 4 women had opinions about all of it. There's no need to be attached. If we want something, we go to a shopping mall and take it. Even the best jewelry is worthless now. But these things hold so many memories. What memories? Yang Xiao went red and whispered a list of furniture into my ear. Ah, I understand. Never mind, we can make more of those anywhere. When we finally went out through the airlock, all 5 of them tried to take a deep breath of fresh air and nearly froze their own mouths. Everything green out there had died months ago. The air is thinner now, and it has no smell at all. Yang Xia had kept a whole dome of plants alive under that house for 2 months, and none of us had thought about why the air inside tasted like anything. She cried a little about leaving her garden. I have plenty of seed. Zhou can plant more. I will nurture your seed extremely well. Everybody within earshot went very quiet, and I want it on the record that I did not start that one. 2 snow vehicles, both of which I had rebuilt with steel and armored glass, with Chen and Ran driving the second one considerably better than I drive the first. We went home to Yuelu. The city on the way was silent from end to end. Nothing moved anywhere. I did not see one living figure between the manor and my old compound, and the wind was the only sound in 20 kilometers. Elder Zhou came down and hit me on the back hard enough to move me, and hit Pudgy Wang hard enough to fold him, and stood there grinning like a man 20 years younger. Lin Min had cleaned out every apartment on that floor and started talking about getting a second mahjong set because a well-fed woman with nothing to do and nobody to talk to had been slowly going insane in a steel box, and 5 new people was the best news she had had since December. And then Joe Kier and I walked back into apartment 2401, and both of us stopped in the doorway. Everything in there had cost me 8 million yuan. It had held off a gangster with a bat, a mob of 100, a battering ram, a locksmith, and an explosive charge. It was where a woman had washed her hair for the first time in 3 weeks and cried in my shower. It was where I had watched 300 cameras and learned what my neighbors actually were. Standing in it after Yunquei Manor, it looked very small, and the white walls felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the heating. Elder Joe and I smoked at the window that night. After you left, they thought it was safe and came to me. First they tried my conscience, but after that month I'm not a saint anymore, so I said no. Then he told me he would move next door and give me back the safe house, and I told him not to be ridiculous since I am not short of housing. Things are beyond my control, I said. I just want a quiet life. I don't want to offend anybody. Why does it keep finding me? And that old man gave me the truest answer anybody has given me. Because you have too many good things. Look at me. I don't have that problem. That's the world. Do well, and people covet you. Do badly, and people look down on you. Joe can't stop anybody being envious of you, even if you've never done anything wrong. I laughed and said that if I ever got strong enough, I would take Xishan base apart myself. We both treated that as a joke. It was the last time either of us did. Then he told me about the cult. Several hundred people had appeared around the district over the past month, dressed like ascetics, calling themselves the Bake Shoe Sect, which means the white snow. I was not surprised. That is what people have always done with disasters they cannot survive. A thunder god, a rain god, a plague god, now a snow god. In chaos, religion grows faster than anything else because people need something to hold while they endure. Their leader is called Grand Edict. He found me, and he knew immediately what I was. He said he could develop my ability and make me stronger. And you said? I said no. Joe told me not to trust the kindness of strangers. That's right. He went to look for other people in the compound, though, which meant Building 18. I drove over the next day, and I noticed something on both sides of the road that I did not like. Small mounds of packed snow, the shape and size of graves. It is possible that somebody was burying rubbish very neatly. Nobody in that world had that kind of public spirit. The snow had reached the 6th floor, so the 6th floor window was the front door now. I fired 2 rounds into the air. I am told that the sound went through that building like a physical thing, and that somebody said, "It's Li Wei, he's back," and that several people started praying. Li Jian came down alone. He left a message on his phone for the others first, and told his wife that if anything happened to him, nobody was to avenge him, and everybody was to stay and protect the last hope. He had been thin the last time. Now without the glasses, I might not have known he was a living man. I've been gone over a month, and this building still has people in it. That's a miracle. How? Mainly the seed you left. Zhou grew a crop? In a month? In this? And I put my hand on the pistol under my coat, because there is exactly one way to grow wheat in 8 weeks at -60, and it means there is an awakened person in that building. Then he went down on his knees in the snow. I'm sorry. We failed to protect the child you left with us. I know you're angry. We did everything we could. If you want to kill somebody, kill me. Please don't hurt anyone else. They're innocent. And from the 6th floor window, people started climbing out. Old Guy came first, the retired professor who had caught my seed in his shirt. Li Jian is our only hope, he said. Take me instead. I've lived long enough. Then another one. Let me do it. Then another. I'm single. I'm not afraid. 60-odd starving people came down a snowbank in the dark trying to be killed in place of an accountant. I stood there and looked at it, and I did not know what to do with my face. Who said I wanted any of you dead? Because the child had died, of course. A 9-month-old in a building with no formula and no heating. I had left her there because she was a burden, and because I could not make myself do the other thing. And that entire building had spent weeks in terror of the day I came back, because they had assumed she mattered to me. Li Jian was so moved by my mercy that he decided I was, underneath everything, a kind and compassionate man. I let him keep that. Then he showed me the growing rooms. 3 of them, on the 9th floor, packed with wheat and barley and something green I did not recognize, all of it thriving under lamps. It is not growing in soil. There is no soil. It is growing in a compost that building has been making out of every organic thing left in it, and out of what is under those neat mounds in the snow outside. So you're feeding your fields with what's left of this district. Yes, practical, repulsive, but practical. Then he told me about the seed between his eyebrows. The Baishu people had come in their worst week, when they had been discussing whether to send out a suicide squad for food. Their leader put a small white seed against Li Jian's forehead, and he felt as though he had been dropped into an ice cellar, and then he felt burning, and then there was something new in him. They asked for nothing, only that we believe in the snow god. I do not believe in free lunches. Free things are always the most expensive. His ability is that he grows plants out of his own body. He rolled his sleeve up, and I understood that his arm is not really an arm anymore, and I am not going to describe it. He made a demonstration for me, and one green shoot came out of him with his blood on it, and his face went the color of paper, and I told him that was enough. If I had to rate that gift, I would call it one of the worst I have seen. The cost is everything, and the output is a crop. But if you keep doing this, you'll die. In a situation like this, we die anyway if we do nothing. I might as well do something so my wife and my son survive. And when he said his wife and his son, his whole face changed. That is the thing they call love. I sat there in a stairwell in the dark and felt something close to admiration, and something else that I have not examined too carefully, which is that one day I might do the same. I did not tell him the other thing I was thinking, that white seed will have side effects. Nobody hands out power for a prayer. And if what had come out of that man today had been a combat ability instead of farming, I would have killed him in his own stairwell before he finished the sentence. He collapsed against the wall after I left and found that his shirt was soaked through. For me, it had been a social call. For every person in Building 18, it had been an hour standing on the edge of the world. Meanwhile, 200 meters under a mountain, 400 people from Sujia town were standing in a corridor in gray clothes with electronic restraints on their wrists, in a line against the wall, waiting to be walked into a laboratory. They had not been told anything. In the upper pods, it was not even a secret. The experiments were discussed openly at lunch. Zhang Yue walked past that queue and thought about lambs, and then she noticed something else, and it changed everything. The second pod was barely guarded. Zhao Wenchang had reasoned that unrest could only ever come from the fourth pod because everybody in the upper pods was a beneficiary and had no reason to rebel. So the level containing every critical department in that base had a light patrol, and half of that patrol had just been redeployed to escort 400 prisoners, and then a soldier stopped her in the corridor and took his helmet off. Ye Xiaotian, one of her own students, taken away weeks earlier. I was the only successful subject out of everybody who was taken. And the others? They're all dead. They had discovered that a gift wakes up on the edge of death. So the first stage is to walk a person up to that edge over and over. I am not going to tell you how. If that fails, they implant mutant cells directly, and if your body does not reject them and you are not eaten from the inside, you come out with something like the donor's ability and with permanent damage and a shorter life. He had a mark on his chest like the scar left where a graft is taken. If I gave you a way out of this place, would you want it? I dream about it. It would be better if we could destroy it. And because of the manpower shortage, that boy had been reassigned to patrol the second pod on the corridor outside the information department. A former protective detail agent with a friendly guard on the door and a base that had sent half its soldiers away. My last conversation with Zhao Wenchang lasted about 40 seconds. A day has passed. What's your answer? It hasn't changed. Joe think you can make me submit. Joe can't. Fine, then wait to be destroyed along with your shelter. And he hung up on me, which is how I knew the missile was real. Men like that do not stop talking while they still need something. I sat there and made my peace with it. Let the building go. As long as people are alive, it does not matter. I have supplies and I have my people and I can be anywhere in this world. And then my phone buzzed again. I've done what you asked. Now I hope you'll keep your promise and get us out. I read it 3 times. It worked? I had given her that crystal on a whim. I did not expect anything from it. I had written the entire scheme off in my head as a lottery ticket, and a woman had walked into the information department of the most defended installation in this province and put my chip in their network. No wonder she used to guard people for a living. Mailing, good news, we're in. And that girl went across her keyboard like somebody sitting down at a piano. Brother, I have complete control of the Xishan base network. That fast? Under 10 minutes. She explained with some contempt that if they had not been on an isolated network, she would have been in weeks ago, and that all she had ever needed was a key for that door. Purely technically, she said, what do their technicians have that compares to me? She is not wrong, incidentally. Every genuinely good programmer in this country worked for private companies because the money in government offices was never close, and so their software was outsourced to the lowest bidder. It's like looking down on them from God's position. We see every operation. They can't detect us. And then she pulled up an intercepted call. Old Zhu, I need your help. I need you to hit a target in Tianhai City with a missile. Old Zhao, think about this properly. I can only repay that favor once. I know. I'll have the department send you the coordinates. Set it for 12 o'clock tomorrow night. No problem. So it was not a bluff, and I had been ready to lose that bet with my life. Brother, look at our luck. They haven't sent the coordinates yet. Because Xishan Base has no satellite positioning authority of its own, so their coordinates have to be verified through several departments and then sent up by hand, and the whole thing was sitting in the inbox of Zhao Wenchang's secretary, an organization that runs like a government agency at the end of the world, cumbersome, slow, and about to be fatal. Then Li Meiling looked up at me with an expression I have learned to be careful of. Brother, shall we play a fun game? Why don't we change the coordinates to Xishan Base? Let them bomb themselves. Everybody in that apartment except me was manipulated by that girl daily, and I want to be clear that I was only exempt because I was paying attention. Can you? It doesn't matter what they send, it matters what the other side receives. I can hold their message and send Xishan's coordinates from their own machine. Then she gave me the bad news attached to the good. That base is 100 meters down and built properly. A missile does not open it. A bunker buster designed for exactly that job does real damage, but nobody destroys a facility like that with one shot. So I went up to the 20th floor of my old building where the charcoal from my ability practice is still on the floor and sat by the window and looked at the snow for a while. Here is the whole of it. I do not want conflict with anybody. I wanted to live in a warm building with people I like and never go outside again. But the thing between me and Xishan Base had gone past any point of return, and even if I dodged this missile, Zhao Wenchang had spent 30 years building relationships across this entire country. Zhou cannot guard against a thief forever. The thief only has to be lucky once. 2 roads. Abandon the shelter and disappear, or destroy Xishan Base and be finished with it. And a building like Yunkei Manor 101 does not exist twice. If there were another one in this province, some other awakened person is already living in it. So I counted what I had. 500 kilograms of TNT taken off their own demolition team, plus several hundred kilograms Chen Anran had built me, close to 1,000. If we cannot destroy Xishan Base and we can kill the people inside it, that is the same outcome. I am not an adventurous man. But being attacked, humiliated, besieged for a month, and then slinking away in disgrace is not my style either. I do not go looking for trouble, and I am not frightened of it. And when that missile lands, there will be a short window of chaos, and that window will not open twice. I spent the next hours reading their personnel files, because we owned their network now, and I want to give you the numbers so the rest makes sense. 512 regular soldiers, conscripts mostly, and very little threat to a combat type awakened. 64 members of the ACE Special Operations team, and that figure already has the 50-odd people I had killed removed from it. I had personally taken almost half of their elite. 6 naturally awakened captains left, not counting Zhang Yue, and 13 modified. The modified are made by transplanting Wu Hao's cells. The few who survive get something like his ability, badly. Their growth potential is essentially zero, the damage is permanent, and their life expectancy is significantly below an ordinary person's. Then the captains, which I read like a card game. Wu Hao, enhancement type. Codename Superman, which is not modest and is not wrong. All physical functions raised roughly tenfold. Speed 5 stars, strength 5 stars, overall 5 stars, rated S. That man put a dent in a wall that shrugged off 500 kilos of TNT with his bare hand. His weakness is on the sheet if you read it properly. No ranged attack whatsoever. Keep enough distance, and he is a very fast man in deep snow. Bang Zun, emission type, codename Fireman, rated B. And I laughed out loud when I read it, because waking up a fire ability in an ice age is one of the crueler jokes this world has told. Gao Meifang, control type, ice, rated A. Ding Jiang, Beastman, codename Poisonous Beast, corrosive body fluids, a minus. Guo Qiang, Beastman, Frost Giant Ape, rated A, and Liu Fenghua, spiritual type, codename Witch, and that codename is deliberate misdirection. Her actual ability is deep hypnosis via brainwaves. She can simulate death and she can cause brain death, and it works best through eye contact. Speed 1 star, strength 1 star, rated A-. I read that entry 3 times, and then I read it again. Their own classification has 6 categories: enhancement, beastman, control, emission, mental, and special, which is the box for everybody they cannot categorize. I am in the last box. It is the only place I have ever fitted. Then I called everybody into the living room of a safe house on the 24th floor of a dead building and told them we were going to take Xishan Base apart. Elder Zhou did not hesitate for 1 second. Instead of waiting to be killed, we take the initiative, and this time, we use their own weapons on them. Li Wei, I owe you too much. If you're attacking that base, I'm with you to the end. Pudgy Wang took longer. Can we actually beat them? They have superhumans and an army. And don't forget how many people in Sujia town died at their hands. Don't you want to avenge your own villagers? Ah, actually, it's fine. I was never really close to anybody in that village. I have never wanted to grab a person's face so badly in my life. And then, without any change in tone, he said the other thing. But boss, if you're fighting, I'm fighting. Following you, I eat well and I sleep warm. And if something happened to you, there'd be no point in me being alive out here on my own. The most important thing in life is picking the right platform. I've decided to gamble. And he put his fist up, and his eyes were clearer than I had ever seen them. I told Jiang Yue almost nothing. I told her to hide somewhere safe before midnight the following night, that she would have her chance then, and that we would be waiting outside. I did not tell her the plan, and I want to be honest about why. She is an indecisive person about exactly one thing. If she had known I intended to bring down Xishan Base, she might have refused, because it would mean the deaths of thousands of people down there. The plan itself was 3 moves. The missile lands at midnight and shakes that mountain like an earthquake. Li Meiling, sitting in a warm room 20 kilometers away, cuts the power at the same moment, and everything in that base stops. Then Zhang Yue leads her students out of the 4th pod. And with a captain of the special operations team openly running for the exit, several thousand people who have spent 2 months on bicycles will understand that the moment has come and they will not go back to their bunks. All I have to provide is a fuse. They detonate themselves. And those are not passive people, by the way. Everybody in the 4th pod was somebody in Tianhai City before December. Ambitious, hard, used to getting their way. Nobody like that is content to peddle a generator forever. But won't Teacher Jiang and the students be in terrible danger? The people who start a riot are always the ones who meet the soldiers. To get freedom, there have to be sacrifices. They can work that out for themselves. And then, while all of that is happening, 3 men and a cat in stolen uniforms walk into the 2nd pod and leave 1,000 kilograms of their own explosive in a quiet corner. Are we going to kill everybody in Xishan Base? Pudgy Wang laughed after he said it because he thought he had made a joke, and then he saw my face and the laugh stopped in his throat. At minimum, we remove their leadership and take out 80% of the population, ideally all of them. Chen Anran had done the engineering for me, and it was worse than I expected in the best way. 1,000 kilograms in the second pod does not just collapse a section, it destroys the power system, the water system, and the air circulation, and it seals the escape routes. Any one of those failing makes survival underground very difficult. All of them failing at once, plus an explosion that eats the oxygen in a sealed volume, means that most people who are nowhere near the blast still do not see morning. Every link connects to the next one. Even if one fails, the others finish the job. I took 2 white combat suits out of the pocket, off men whose names I never learned, for Elder Joe and Pudgy Wang. And I gave them the rule twice, once before we left and once in the vehicle. Completing the mission is the second most important thing. The first thing is to stay alive. That night, we all took melatonin so we would actually sleep and set alarms and got up at 10 in the morning. At lunch, we went over it again, and the cat got on the table and ate with everybody, which nobody comments on anymore. The women came to see us off. Lin Min straightened Elder Joe's collar and could not let go of it. Zhou Qir and Yang Xia held on to me and told me to come back. Don't worry, my greatest strength is that I value my own life. And Pudgy Wang, who had nobody, took out his phone and opened an app. And a small drawn girl appeared and told him in Japanese to do his best, and he told her very seriously that he would complete the mission and come back safely. I did not laugh at him, and I am not going to now. At 11:25, we stopped 3 kilometers out and injected stimulants. Do these have side effects? Certainly. That's a problem for later. First, stay alive. At the base, in the 4th pod, Jiang Yue used her captain's authority to gather every student she had left and told them to put on the clothes they had arrived in because it was -50 outside. Teacher Jiang, are we running away? Don't say anything else. Just do exactly what I tell you. In the dark down there, she said, every one of them had light in their eyes. And in his study, in light yellow pajamas, Zhao Wenchang sat in front of a screen showing a 3-dimensional model of my house, waiting for the words target destroyed, and decided that a moment that good should not be enjoyed alone. So he sent for Wu Hao, not because he needed him, because he wanted his best soldier to watch him solve the problem his best soldier could not. He even took the opportunity to remind him that even in an apocalypse, an army still holds real power, and that awakened people are not invincible. A man like that cannot let a subordinate be strong without saying something about it. At the Zhongnan headquarters in Nanjing, a middle-aged man in uniform pressed a launch button. A heavy bunker buster came out of a silo and went southeast, and its flame drew a line across the sky over half a province, and all over Tianhai City, people who had not seen anything move in the sky for 3 months came out onto balconies and stood there watching it with their heads back. I was crouched behind a snowbank with 2 men and a cat. Jiang Yue was standing in a corridor with a phone in one hand and a sword hilt in the other. Zhao Wenchang was leaning toward a monitor with a smile on his face. All 4 of us were waiting for the same object. Shishan Base's radar found it at 200 kilometers, which at that speed is not a warning, it is a countdown. What is that? It's a missile. It came from Nanjing. What are they doing? Report it immediately. I saw a light come over the horizon and drop like a meteor into the western hills. The sound was not what people expect. A bunker buster goes hundreds of meters into the ground before it does anything at all. So what came back was a low thud out of the earth, and then the whole snowfield moved under us like water under a boat. Mei Ling, go. Her finger had been resting on that key for 11 minutes. Every light in Sishan Base went out at once. Every system stopped. And 200 meters underground, in the dark, several thousand people started screaming. Zhao Wenchang went off his chair onto the floor, and Wu Hao picked him up. What's happening? Why is this happening? Leader, we have been hit by a missile. And that man, who did not know his network belonged to a teenage girl in a wheelchair, arrived at the only conclusion available to him. Ren Min. That bastard set me up. He gave good orders after that, which is the frustrating thing about him. Gather the special operations team, protect this level, and watch the 4th pod, and if anybody down there makes trouble, kill them where they stand. We came in through the front. There were soldiers on the entrance, and there were not soldiers on the entrance about 30 seconds later. Elite troops are still just troops. Then it was down to her. In the 4th pod, people had been thrown out of their bunks in the dark, and the crying was general, and then every light died and the crying became something else. And a woman with a phone in one hand went down that corridor with a dozen students holding hands behind her, and I have been told by 3 different people that in that darkness, with the light held out in front of her and the sword in her other hand, she looked exactly like the woman in that French painting who carries the flag over the barricade. 2 sentries got in the way. There were 2 flashes of blue, and then there were no sentries. They came up 100 meters of stairs because the elevator only answers to the leader. And then there was light ahead, and the students started laughing because it had to be the exit. She stopped and put her arm out. It was not the exit. It was more than 30 fully armed special operations troops with their weapons up, and a woman in dark red glasses standing in front of them. Miss Zhang, it seems everything I said to you was wasted. The leader is wise. He knew somebody would use the chaos. But do you imagine you're the first to try? Joe are not the first group, and you will not be the last, and all of you end the same way. Then she adjusted her glasses and gave the order for what to do with them. 30 rifles and a dozen unarmed teenagers in a corridor. She could have gone through those men alone. She could not have gone through them with children behind her. And then a soldier fell forward with a small hole in the top of his helmet. Those helmets stop pistols, and they stop rifles. They do not stop what I was carrying. We had come in behind them. By the time it was over, Zhang Yue looked up the corridor and met my eyes, and it was the first time that woman had ever looked at me with anything except contempt. Thank you for the support. You're welcome. Chu earned it. Sun Jingyi ended up backed into a corner explaining that she was only a secretary and that everything had been the leader's orders. I did not touch her. One of the students did. A boy called Ye Xiaotian, who had been taken out of the 4th pod weeks earlier as an experimental subject and had come back as the 1 in 30 who lived. He did not say anything to her at all. He did not need to. She recognized him, and that was the last thing she recognized. Zhang Yue took a long look at the cat on my shoulder, and the cat looked back at her, and I watched both of them work out where they had met. I gave her 2 backpacks with high-energy food and heating fuel and told her to send the students 5 kilometers southeast and hide. And then I recruited her properly. If we simply run, they will come after us the moment they've put down the riot. Joe know that better than anyone, especially now that you've killed this many of them. So we finish it tonight. We destroy Xishan base, and then neither of us ever has to think about it again. She stood there and did the arithmetic. There were still thousands of people alive down there. All right. I'll help you. She watched her students walk out through the door that meant living, and only then let her breath out. Inside, the base had come apart exactly as designed. The 4th pod had broken into the 3rd and the 2nd. They were not running for the exit, because outside was -60 and running meant dying. They had gone the other way. They intended to take the place. Nobody stopped us in that corridor. People moved aside for us on their own, because we were wearing the uniform of the Special Operations Team, and where the uniform was not enough, 2 rounds into the ceiling were. The 2nd pod was quiet, because everybody who mattered was elsewhere. Elder Zhou and Pudgy Wang went along the corridors sticking yellow packages onto every corner and every door frame in plain sight where anybody could see them, and I walked to a dead-end storage corridor at the far end and put down 2 enormous bundles. Zhang Yue recognized them. They had sat in her camp for a month. Zhou kept it. Of course. I never waste a grain of rice. Let's see how they like their own explosive. She asked me something on the way back, and it is the only thing anybody said that night that I have kept. Why not just kill Zhao Wenchang, cut off the head? Without him the base stops functioning. Killing one Zhao Wenchang only clears a space for the next one. The problem was never that man, it's the whole arrangement. The right thing to do with a place like this is to remove it, or it just goes on producing him. She opened her mouth to argue and then did not, because she agreed. We got about 4 corridors before somebody worked it out, and what gave us away was the cat. Nobody at Xishan base keeps cats. There were a few in the first week. They stopped being cats. The soldiers who came at us learned what a dimensional gate does in a corridor 2 meters wide, which is that it does everything. Nothing crossed it, not one round. And Zhang Yue, who had spent a month studying that ability from the other side and finding it unbearable, discovered what it feels like to stand behind it. Shen Hong recognized the effect and screamed at his men not to fire. He was about half a second late, and I gave all of it back. Then I threw several dozen grenades out of the pocket with the pins already gone, which is a thing I had been waiting 2 months to do. The lights overhead began to flicker. They're restoring the power. If the systems come back, we lose the chaos. And from somewhere above us, an order came down that Li Wei was to be taken alive or dead. The 5 men who came for me next were Shen Hong, Ma Lei, and 3 others, all of them carrying Wu Hao's cells, all of them survivors of the raid on my house. Zhou died here today, and Elder Zhou stepped in front of me and grew. His combat suit came apart at the seams. He put on half a meter and a great deal else, and when those 5 hit him, he swung one arm and sent all 5 of them down the corridor. A half-built copy does not compare to the real thing. His mutation is still developing and will keep getting stronger. Theirs eats the healthy cells it was implanted into and only gets weaker. Is that it? I want to fight a proper one. I'd rather never fight anybody again in my life. Then the corridor lit up orange. Fang Zun came around the corner with a captain's star on his shoulder and put a rolling wall of fire down the passage. The gate ate it, and he kept going, and I understood the problem about 4 seconds too late. He was not trying to kill me. He was pinning me. Once that plane is open, it does not move, which means that as long as he keeps the fire coming, I am standing exactly where I am until his friends arrive. And the joke I had made about his file stopped being funny. Fire control is worthless in an ice age, and it is devastating in a sealed corridor. The heat was coming through the walls. The concrete had started to go red, so I used the thing I had packed for exactly this. Fatty, your turn. And my gate opened the other way and vomited out about 40 tons of snow. I had spent 2 days filling a compartment of my pocket with winter because Pudgy Wang's ability only works where there is ice, and I was taking him underground. He came past me with both hands glowing and put a blizzard down that corridor, and Fang Zun's face changed completely because their intelligence files had almost nothing about the fat boy from Wangdong village. Nobody had ever seen him fight. 2 months of being underestimated for being a coward cashed in at once. Then something crossed 30 meters of corridor faster than my eye could follow, and Elder Joe threw a punch at it on pure instinct. The other man did not dodge. He met it. Elder Joe went backwards 7 or 8 steps and hit the floor, and his right arm was at an angle that arms do not go to. One punch. Wu Hao did not follow up, and it was not mercy. The instant Elder Joe went down, I had put the gate between us, and that man's intuition told him what it was without ever having seen it. It's fine, said Elder Joe from the floor holding his arm. It just feels like being hit by a train. I gave him a second stimulant. That drug can be used 3 times, and the price for the third is 2 weeks of being unable to stand up, and I had stopped caring about the invoice. Then, from behind Wu Hao, a woman walked forward and said my name softly, and I looked at her. Of course I looked at her. Somebody says your name and you turn your head. That is 100,000 years of instinct. Her pupils were very deep, and I had the sensation of falling into them. And then Liu Fenghua screamed and went down on her knees with both hands over her eyes, convulsing, and Wu Hao and everybody behind her went glassy and stopped moving. Sorry, I said. My pocket reflects brainwaves too, which is not magic. A brainwave is transmitted physically, and anything transmitted physically does not cross that plane, and I had read her file 3 times the night before, precisely so that I would recognize the 10 seconds in which she would try it. Mao Mao. The cat went up to the size the ceiling allowed, and Zhang Yue took my hand, turned once in the air and came down in front of me on that animal's back like she had been doing it for years, and we went for the surface. Behind us, I threw out every remaining grenade and every decoy charge and pressed the switch. Boss, the big one wasn't in that, was it? No, those were all smoke. I'll do the big one when we're outside. Wu Hao came out of the hypnosis first, on will alone, and Gao Mei Fang's ice had covered the whole group when my decoys went off, so all 6 of them lived through it. Then they chased us. He came up that 100-meter stair like weather. Go Qiang turned into an ice ape and carried Gao Mei Fang under one arm. Ding Jiang came apart and reassembled into something that dragged its knuckles and dripped, and it picked up the other 2 captains and ran. 6 of the most dangerous people alive in this province, in a single moving mass, 40 meters behind a cat carrying 4 passengers. Boss, drop the bomb. Stop them. No, I'm not that kind of despicable person. If they want to chase me, let them chase me. Nobody believed that for 1 second, including me. The truth is that the pocket has more uses than any of them had seen, and the moment I showed one, they would start guarding against it. Also, I needed them out of that stairwell and up on the surface. We came out into open snow, and Wu Hao stopped 10 meters away and did not attack, because at 10 meters, with his speed, I could not get on a vehicle, and he knew it. My gate is invincible in one direction. He can simply not be in that direction. The cat with 4 people on her back was not going to outrun anything. Every captain we have is here, he said. Where exactly are you running now? There's no shell out here for you to hide in. I looked at that man, and at the 5 behind him, and at a mountain with a hole in it, and I said the only honest thing I said that night. When does this stop? And then I took the detonator out of my right-hand pocket and pressed it several times while he was still talking. He felt it before he understood it. I watched him feel it. What is that thing? I did not answer. I kept pressing. A few seconds later, the ground behind him made a sound that came up through the soles of our boots, and the snowfield split open in a dozen places at once, and then all 6 of them felt warmth on their backs at -60. The warmth turned into something else, and a column of fire came out of the passage mouth and knocked every person on that hillside off their feet. 1,000 kilograms in the second pod destroys the second pod. Even if the structure holds, everything in it stops existing, and there is no power system, no water system, and no air circulation. And a blast that size in a sealed volume takes the oxygen with it. From that night, Zishan Base can be crossed off the map of Tianhai City. Joe, remember the explosives you left against my wall? I added a bit and gave it all back. Yours is very good quality. Zhang Yue took a long breath and did not celebrate. She had just watched thousands of people die, and some of them were her students, and 2 of them were the girls she had personally tied up and locked in a wardrobe 2 nights earlier with sleeping pills so that they would not be able to raise the alarm. She had made sure that wardrobe would not suffocate them. There are not many things in this world that go the way anybody wants. Getting the best available outcome is already an achievement, and afterwards, with nothing left down there to protect, her killing intent got very clean. Wu Hao stood up out of the snow, and I watched a man have to physically stop himself from running back into a hole full of of poison and no oxygen because going down there right then would have been suicide. Fine, he said. I'll kill you first, then I'll go back for them. I want to explain my position honestly because what I did next looked insane and was not. With Zhang Yue on my side, we were not weaker than them. Their hypnotist was on the floor. Their fire user was standing in an ice field. Their ape and their poison thing had to close the distance. But those are 6 professional soldiers who have trained together for years, and we were 4 strangers with a cat, and in a coordinated fight, we lose. I had said this out loud to Elder Zhou and Pudgy Wang 2 days earlier, and both of them had told me I had lost my mind. They're professionals. In a team fight, we can't match them, so if it comes to it, I'll ask for single combat against their leader. They have no idea what I actually am. They think I'm a coward who can only defend, which means he'll say yes, and one-on-one, I have a chance. So I said it. Wu Hao, all you want is me. There's no reason to spend your brothers on it. Settle it one-on-one. Do you dare? And I set the terms. If a dozen of us fight, you'll win and it'll cost you most of what you have left. If I win, you let us go and nobody talks about grievances again. If I lose, do whatever you want with me. Then I added the part that made it sound sincere, although I'm well aware you won't let me live either way. Are you insane? Zhang Yue said. Do you have any idea how strong he is? I did. I had the file. That man can take a fighter aircraft apart with his hands and had once fought every other awakened in the special operations team simultaneously without losing. His own people told him not to agree. They told him I was obviously up to something and that they should just rush us. And Wu Hao stood there in the snow and looked at me for a long time, because he had his own reasons, and they had nothing to do with tactics. He said yes, and he said yes for good reasons. He had watched Zhang Yue fight and knew that he was probably the only person on his side who could reliably beat her. He had seen a middle-aged man grow half a meter and throw 5 modified soldiers down a corridor. He had just watched the harmless fat one put a blizzard into a sealed passage, and he knew perfectly well that underground was the fat one's worst ground, and the open snowfield was his best, and there was a mutated cat the size of a truck standing behind me. He was confident he would win a general fight. He was afraid of what it would cost him, and he had already lost 50 men that month, and he could not forgive himself for one more. So we agreed. A gully a few hundred meters away. Nobody interferes. It does not end until one of us is dead. His entire read on me was that I absorb physical attacks and give them back, and that if he moved faster than I could reposition the plane, he wins. In the face of absolute power, he said, schemes are meaningless. That is a lovely sentence, and it is the reason he is not here. While we walked out to that gully, the 2 groups stood facing each other in the snow, and Gao Meifang decided to enjoy herself a little. Did you know some awakened people can devour the power of others? Very few. Our captain has killed 3 enemy superhumans personally and taken all of it. His ability is stronger than anybody's. That man of yours is dead meat. And the cat sitting at Elder Zhou's feet looked at her for a long moment, and Pudgy Wang said with total confidence, no, our boss won't lose, because our boss is extremely afraid of dying. He would never risk his life. I am told the special operations team had no reply to that at all. The gully had knee-deep snow in it, which affects both of us equally, so I stopped worrying about it. Wu Hao stood about 12 meters away. I opened with delay because that is what I had. Do we have to do this? I'm not a fighter. My ability is mostly support. Zhou Dai here today. I never wanted this. You people forced me into it. Honestly, I used to have a dream, which was that when the apocalypse came, I would. Stop rambling. Delaying will not change your fate. I clenched my fists in genuine frustration at having been read. So I tried the other one. If I die, I hope you'll keep your word and spare my friends. They're innocent. I give you my word, I won't harm them. And my cat, if you don't want to eat it, just release it into the wild. Maybe one of my friends will look after it. Are you a woman? Do you ever stop talking? Fine, let's fight. For the record, I had injected my remaining 2 doses of stimulant on the walk over, so at that moment I was in better condition than I have ever been in my life. He stamped once and came at me across 12 meters of deep snow like something fired out of a tube. 4 times speed. His plan was to be faster than I could switch the direction of the door and put a knife in my chest. And a fully loaded heavy goods truck came out of the air above him and hit him in the head. I want you to picture his face. He had seen the gate absorb things. He had seen it reflect things. It had not occurred to any of them in 2 months that a man who can put a warehouse in his pocket can also take one out. Then I opened it wider. Pickups, a Bentley, 2 Rolls Royces, the excavator, industrial lathes, every vehicle and every machine I had collected out of boredom over 3 months coming down out of nothing into a gully in a continuous stream like a tipper unloading. He cut a car in half in midair with that sword. Good blade, I said, and kept unloading. And then I got to the part I had bought specifically, because 2 days before that fight I had gone shopping, several supermarkets and 2 department stores, and what I filled a compartment with was not weapons, toys, wooden furniture, and about 900 packs of women's underwear. I want to describe the mechanics honestly, because it is the single most effective thing I have ever done to another human being. The wind in that gully was strong, cars he could cut, a lathe he could punch aside. But bright, light, floating fabric released above him by the hundred does not go where he wants it to go. It flew around his head, it settled on his shoulders. 2 pieces of black lace got onto his forearm and would not come off, and every time he tried to pull them away with the other hand, he lost half a second and got more of it. Softness against hardness. He could destroy a 5-ton truck with one arm, and he was completely helpless against a bra. Clownish, he said. This is clownish behavior. He is correct. It was. Then I sent down 50 drums of gasoline with the lids off, and when the last of them was in the air, I put 1 tracer round into the ground underneath. I was not trying to burn him. I know exactly what he is. The fire took his visibility, which took his thermal imaging, which was the point. He stood in the middle of it with flames on his shoulders and did not bother to put them out. Joe may be a genius at defense, but your offense is a circus act. And then I dropped 120 barrels of high-strength latex paint on him. That one took planning. I had bought out 3 trade suppliers. It went over his head, his shoulders, and most importantly, the visor of his tactical helmet, and every time he wiped it, it spread, and his gloves started sticking to his own face. Because I had made a decision before we walked into that gully, and I want it stated plainly, since it is the entire content of my character. I am not a fighter. Close combat is not my trade. I cannot beat that man, and I know I cannot beat that man, so I do not try to beat him. I annoy him until he cannot use what makes him dangerous. My one advantage over Wu Hao was information. He knew nothing about my abilities. I had read his entire file because a girl in a wheelchair owned his organization's network. He tore his combat suit off in strips and threw his helmet into the fire. Joe dare display your pathetic tricks in front of an expert. Die. Meanwhile, the 50 barrels of gasoline he had let burn had melted the snow in that gully into slush and then refrozen it, so he was now moving through several centimeters of water over sheet ice. His own fire, not mine. And then I opened the gate one more time and sent down about 300 barrels with no lids on at all, and the wind took what was inside them and put it through the whole gully. There was a smell of the sea strong enough to come through the gasoline. And I watched a man who had walked into artillery fire without changing expression clamp both hands over his own mouth and nose in genuine terror. Everybody has a weakness. Nobody is invincible. Captain Wu Feng, invulnerable to blades and bullets, has a severe seafood allergy, and Zishan Base keeps meticulous medical records on all personnel. That is what their network was actually worth. I had spent 2 days grinding 30-odd varieties of dried seafood into powder on the theory that one of them would be his, and I want to be honest about how I felt doing it, because I did not feel ashamed. Even without the allergy, I had other options prepared. Poison, quicklime, anything at all. Every human being has a weak point, and every human being can be killed, and given enough intelligence and enough preparation time, the smallest defect becomes fatal. The best method is whichever method works. He came for me, and I turned around and ran, and I threw underwear and children's plush toys over my shoulder the entire way, like a man handing out free samples. We did that for about 90 seconds. Then his face went the color of raw liver and swelled until his eyes closed, and he got both hands on his own throat, and he went down in the slush. I stopped at 30 meters and looked at him. Then I walked back another 30 meters, lit a small fire, took several chocolate bars out of the pocket and ate them, and the gully was completely silent. 10 minutes later, the corpse leapt up and screamed my name. He had been faking. Of course he had. A super soldier carries antihistamines, and he had taken his the moment he went down, and the plan was to lure me over and finish it in one movement. He had not accounted for the fact that I would sit down at a safe distance and have a snack. His medication treated the symptom. The powder was still in the air. I could wait. He could not. I swallowed the last piece of chocolate and started running again. I want to say this plainly because people are strange about it. I did not stand and fight him. I ran away. I am not in the business of honor. If I win by outlasting you, why on earth would I stop and give you a chance? An allergy is the purest weakness there is. It is not a flaw of character or training. It is a thing built into a man before he was born, and no amount of being invincible touches it. I sat by my fire for half an hour after he stopped moving. Then I shot him in the head with an armor-piercing round from 100 meters. Then I took a heavy truck out of the air and dropped it on him. And only then did I walk over with the sword, and I did the last part quickly, and I am not going to describe it. I am aware of how that sounds. It also means I am still here. Then I put my palm on him and took what was inside. If the first one had been a stream, this was a river. He had absorbed 3 superhumans himself over the past 2 months, and every bit of that came across to me at once. And my vision went strange, not dark, blurred, and then blurred with enormous clarity, which is not a phrase that means anything until it happens to you. I looked at a wrecked car 20 meters away and let out something I did not have a name for. The air in front of me turned like water going down a drain, and that car came apart in the middle. I stood in a burning gully full of ruined machinery and women's underwear and said out loud to nobody, "That's a distortion. I can twist space." I named it that afternoon, and I'm not telling you what I named it because I was extremely pleased with myself, and it does not survive being said out loud in daylight. It burns a fortune in energy. One use empties out about half of me, and 3 in a row is my ceiling. It reaches about 300 meters, which makes it useless for ambush work and better than a rifle inside that range. But it cuts a car in half from 300 meters with nothing visible in between. I had spent 3 months as a man who could only be attacked. That gap was now closed. Then I sat down and ate everything I had left, because that is how the ability recharges, and I looked out at the mouth of the gully and thought about who exactly was standing in the dark now. Outside, an hour had gone by. At -60, standing still at 1 in the morning, waiting. And the special operations team's mood had begun to move in a very specific direction. Why isn't it over? Shouldn't it be quick? The captain would never toy with somebody. A trained soldier only ever thinks about ending it fast. And on the other side, Elder Joe and Pudgy Wang were slowly starting to grin, because the longer that fight went on, the more it looked like every single thing they knew about me. There was a gap between those two groups that nobody standing in that snow could see. Zishan Base's entire intelligence file had been leaked weeks earlier. Every hour of that month, I had known things about them, and they had known nothing about me. I did not come out through the mouth of the gully. I climbed the side of it and came out on the ridge above them and radioed my people first. "Don't react. Don't look up. Wait for my signal." The relief in Elder Joe's voice was the nicest thing I heard that year. I picked Gao Meifeng first because she was the ice user and the one who could actually neutralize Pudgy Wang, and she had almost no physical strength at all. The air around her twisted, and she was down before anybody understood there had been an attack. Then I stood up on that cliff and held up a helmet and a sword. "Wu Hao is dead. I killed him." Pudgy Wang put a wall of snow across the sky like a wave breaking. Elder Joe went in shouting. The cat went in without shouting, which is worse. Zhang Yue drew. Their captain was dead. Their ice user was dead. Their hypnotist was still bleeding from the eyes. Their fire user was standing in a snowfield, which left an ape and a poison thing, and morale had already left with the first name on that list. It was not a battle after that, and I am not going to pretend it was one. I want to give the honest reason I gave the order I gave, which was kill all of them, leave nobody. It was not righteousness. Those people had come at my house over and over for a month and put a missile on my address, and I wanted every one of them to stop existing so that I could go back to living quietly. Afterwards, I took what I could from the bodies, and it was much less than Wu Hao, because these things scale. Fighting weak opponents does not make you strong, and I did not take anything in front of Zhang Yue, and I did not offer her the chance to try it either. Elder Joe and Pudgy Wang both had a go and got nothing at all. "Not everybody has it," said Elder Joe cheerfully. "We're just not as gifted as you." Then the cat looked up at me and made a specific noise, and I understood the question. "Can you take it too?" She narrowed her eyes at me, which in that animal means yes. "Then take what's yours." She came back to my shoulder as 4 kilos of tabby afterwards, washing one paw, and her breath was so bad I had to hold her at arm's length. "Can we leave now?" said Zhang Yue. "Where exactly are you putting us?" "Sujia town." There was no version of that answer where I said my house. "Let a dozen extremely well-educated teenagers go and learn to fish through ice on the Lu River. Don't rush, never be impatient. We finish the job properly first." Then I emptied the pocket into the mouth of the Sishan base entrance. Every wrecked truck, every ruined machine, every piece of scrap I had used in that gully went down that shaft in a heap, and then I detonated the rest of my charges on top of it. That entrance is now geology. Joe really haven't left anybody alive. Call it insurance. And then I did the second thing, which came out of the base's own structural diagrams. There is an emergency passage running out of the first pod. There is exactly one person in that organization who would have had one built. I put the vehicle lights up the slope, and there were 3 figures running through the snow. Zhao Wenchang had gone out through his private exit the moment the lights failed, and he had not gone to look for his wife or his children, and there had been no vehicle available, so the leader of Zishan Base was crossing a snowfield on foot with 2 bodyguards. "You're an important man. Why did you leave without saying goodbye?" He tried 3 arguments, and I remember all of them. That killing him would upset the balance between the districts of Tianhai City, and that if he died, there was no telling what would come into the space he left, and that I would face something far worse. That one actually landed. I did not know enough about that city to be sure he was wrong, and I have thought about it many times since. that these are chaotic times, and chaotic times require harsh measures, and that if he had not done what he did, everyone would have died. And finally, that I was extraordinarily talented, and that with my ability and his connections, we could make Xishan Base into something enormous, and that being king of Tianhai City would be simple. I don't need it. He opened his mouth to keep going. He did not finish. His bodyguards came at me with the pins already out of their grenades, and I put both hands out through the gate and caught what they threw and closed it, and the explosion happened somewhere that is not here. Both of them found that surprising. My control over the space is getting better. Then I waited until all three of them had burned down to ash, and then I went along and scattered the ash, and my own people stood watching me do it for several minutes. Isn't that a little excessive? I remove every possible danger. Everyone. And then I said the only unkind thing I said to Zhang Yue that night, and I meant it as information. If you had thought properly about consequences before you went into Xishan Base, none of this would have happened. She did not answer, but something behind her face moved, and after that she started understanding me, which is not the same as liking me. The drive home was quiet. 3 injections is too many, and all 3 of us were about to spend several days unable to stand up. I could feel the invoice arriving. Zhang Yue asked whether I could come back and collect them later. Teacher Zhang, I fulfilled our agreement. I got you out. As a courtesy, we'll also provide some food and lodging. Any further requests? And I rubbed my fingers together. We'll need to come with sufficient benefits attached. I thought we were friends by now. That's precisely why we set clear prices. That way nothing gets damaged. She was too proud to ask for her own sword back, which I still have. She went back to her students that night and told them Sujia Town and ice fishing, and every one of those young people had already worked out that Li Meiling and Chen Anran were living in my villa and asked her to arrange the same for them, and pointed out that it was cold outside and their hands would get frostbitten. She told them no. She told them that Li Meiling is my girlfriend's cousin and Chen Anran is her closest friend, and both of them have a profession, and asked whether any of them had either of those things. They were extremely unhappy about it because they were not stupid and they understood perfectly, and understanding is not the same as accepting. At home, there were 4 women waiting on an open radio channel who started cheering when they heard our voices. I invited Elder Zhou and Lin Min to move to Yunquei Manor since the estate is full of empty mansions and we may as well be able to reach each other in under a minute. After a fight like that, he said, I've felt what standing together is worth, and honestly, it's just the 2 of us over there, and sometimes I do get frightened. And I gave all of them the thing I had been carrying since the missile. Tianhai City cannot possibly have contained only one Xishan base. That was in Zhao Wenchang's last words. This was a city of 20 million people. Even a 5% survival rate is a million human beings. Think about how many awakened that implies. Think about how many armed groups. Then, because they had all gone quiet, but we don't need to panic. Xishan base was enormous and we took it apart. From now on we live together, and at our current strength, I am not frightened of anybody. At the villa, Chen Anran hung back from the group, and I noticed and went over and picked her up in a hug. None of this would have happened without you. I only helped with a small thing. Don't underestimate yourself. You're very important to me. And from a wheelchair somewhere behind me came a voice with a distinct edge on it, pointing out that the biggest contributor was obviously Meiling, since without her hacking, there would have been no operation at all. Which is true, and I want it in the record properly. I did not destroy Xishan Base. A missile launched from Nanjing destroyed Xishan Base. Everything I did that night was possible because an 18-year-old who cannot walk sat in a warm room and changed 4 numbers in a message. A genius who reaches the top of one narrow field is sometimes worth more than any superhuman. I spent the next 4 days flat on my back. Stimulants are alone. The better it feels going in, the worse the collection, and I had taken the maximum dose in one night. 4 days of legs that would not carry me, and a head full of wet sand, with 2 women taking turns bringing food to the bed. Pudgy Wang, in the villa next door, spent the same 4 days alone in bed reading comics, with Yang Xia delivering his meals to the door and no further service of any kind. He has also, since Zhou Jing, developed a distinct nervousness around women. At home, he only really talks to me. He was extremely pleased to move out and live with his figures and his body pillows, and I gave him a generator, a console, and a crate of collectibles, and as a friend, that is about the best I can do for him. Also, incidentally, I never paid Pudgy Wang his gold Zodiac set, which had been the price for a month of spying. So I did that on the 5th day, standing up for the first time. 12 solid gold figures, the 2035 release, 5 sets made worldwide out of a dead billionaire's collection room. He put them on a shelf in his new villa and rearranged them for 2 hours and then rang me to ask whether he could have a spotlight. And I paid the cat as well because I had made a promise on the back of a monster at 2,000 meters and I had counted it. 100 dried fish. I put all 100 on the floor of the living room in a heap and stood back, and that animal walked around it twice with her tail up like a woman inspecting a delivery and then lay down in the middle of it and began the work. She did not finish. She has been rationing them ever since, and I am not permitted to touch the pile. We started building a wall. That came out of a joke. Elder Joe said that without reinforced concrete, we would be building fortifications out of snow. And I looked at him. Because the Lu River is 400 meters from my front door and it is 2 meters of solid ice, and at these temperatures ice does not melt, and it is trivially easy to repair, and if you run steel bar through it as reinforcement you have a curtain wall. Chen Enran did the drawings. She raised the sensible objection, which was that fortification on that scale needs machinery, labor, and material transport. What exactly do you think we're short of? I move the materials, Elder Joe is the labor, Pudgy Wang shapes ice and snow, and so, near enough, can you? If we need something cut, we call Zhang Yue. Mao Mao can carry the heavy pieces. She looked at the list for a while. We're 5 people and a cat, and every one of us can do something nobody else can. This is actually possible. And it is not only about defense, Elder Joe said, because a wall with no teeth is a target, so we planned firing positions into it. We were 3 grown men standing over a drawing, arguing about wall thickness at 1 in the morning, and I know exactly how that looks. Men will build anything if you let them. Pudgy Wang said the thing that made me push it faster. There can't be a stronger force in this city than Shishan Base was. Jove missed something. Shishan Base was wiped out by us. Nobody else knows that. To everybody out there, we are a handful of ordinary people who are not worth taking seriously. Then let's build the wall immediately. Honestly, I'm quite scared. Zhang Yue came to the door the following week, and I had been waiting for it because it is not difficult for a martial artist to take 15 students out of a base, and it is impossible for a martial artist to feed them. She arrived in a down jacket that did not fit her, dirty, with the sleeves too long, and it took me 2 seconds to understand that it had come off a body and that nothing in this world can be washed anymore. Why aren't you wearing the combat suit? The temperature control uses electricity. And I sat there feeling like an idiot because we have never once been short of power, and I had genuinely stopped noticing that this is not normal. Out in the rest of the country, the authorities still push a trickle of electricity down the lines every day, enough to warm food, and most people will not spend it on a phone anymore. I had Joe Kier make her a cappuccino. She hates cappuccino. She drinks espresso for the figure. She took a mouthful of hot milky coffee with 2 sugars in it, and I watched a national-level martial artist come very close to crying over it. Then I gave her what I owed her. I opened the gate in her living room and put a meter-high pile of food on her floor, bread and buns and dried meat and chicken feet, most of it things I do not personally like. That's half a month for you and the students. As agreed. She told me later that she had come expecting to be refused because Zishan Base no longer existed and she had nothing left to trade with, and that me simply paying what I had promised was the reason she began to think of me as a person. And then I did the thing I had planned all week. It must be very hard, one woman looking after that many students. She stopped moving because 15 people depended on her absolutely, and not one of them had ever once asked whether she was tired. She is 27. Somewhere under the sword and the professional ethics is a woman who occasionally needs somebody to be kind to her, and nobody had been in 3 months. She looked up and gave me a smile that I did not deserve at all. Then I made her the offer. You're working too hard. Let me help, and I'll need an adequate price in exchange. So you do want something. Obviously. She relaxed. That was the version of me she understood. Then I pointed at her. I want you. She went scarlet, came off the sofa, and got 6 paces of distance between us before her back hit the wall. Jove gone too far. I would never sell myself. I leaned back and looked at her with total confusion. I was asking you to be my tutor and teach me martial arts. What exactly is vulgar about that? There was a silence of considerable quality. Oh, I said, slapping my forehead. Joe thought I meant Teacher Jiang. What on earth are you thinking about? You're a teacher. She could not speak for some time. Do you think I'm that kind of man? Joe underestimate me. Well, take the tutoring job or don't. I won't force you. Joe can go. No, wait. I'll do it. The rate was 2.5 hours daily in exchange for food for 10 people a day. She asked for more since there are 16 of them. Teacher Zhang, understand my position. This isn't a one-off delivery. It's food for 10 people every single day. And you wouldn't want your students getting lazy and living entirely off me, would you? That is the reason I gave. Here is the real one, and I have never said it to her. People who eat well start having ideas, and a hope you can see and never quite reach is the most reliable leash ever invented. She has been coming every day since. She makes me practice taking hits, which is exactly as pleasant as it sounds, and after 2.5 hours, I cannot lift my arms. Joe killed Wu Hao, she said once. There can't be many people left who could threaten you. And I want this one on the record, because everything else I have told you might give the wrong impression. I beat Wu Hao because I had his medical file and he did not know my name. I beat him with information and 2 days of shopping. If two people who know nothing about each other meet somewhere neither of them chose, I have absolutely no confidence at all. If my gate had failed to reach him even once, I would have died in that gully in under a second. This world is full of surprises. Nobody should ever gamble with their own life. Li Meiling has been working on her, incidentally, inviting her to move in, pointing out, very reasonably, that grown students should learn to survive on their own, and that it would be selfish of them to stop her. Every word of it is true, and every word of it is a trap, and that girl knows exactly what she is doing, and I let her do it. I also let her look through what was left of Xishan Bas's databases, and she came back with the shape of the world. There are 4 large militarized shelters under Tianhai City: Xishan, Qingpu, Sunny, and Zhaoyu. All of them built years ago by the authorities, all of them with arsenals and stockpiles, and the other 3 are still standing. There is also a 5th thing. A large population has gathered in the Tianfeng and Chenglan districts, enough to matter, and there is almost nothing in the files about them. None of those organizations knows much about any of the others. Everybody has been too busy staying alive. I don't think this is going to go as smoothly as I'd like, I said. I have a feeling we'll meet them soon. Nothing in this world is an accident. We had just detonated a missile and 1,000 kilograms of TNT under a mountain and made a hole in the map where a power used to be, and holes get filled. Nobody knows what happens next, but I know one thing. Once we're strong enough, nobody will dare come near us. Come on, we're going back to Xishan to take every weapon out of that arsenal. At the buried entrance to Xishan base, on the morning we drove out there, 2 groups of people were already standing in the snow. Both of them in white, dyed to disappear against the ground. One group wore combat suits almost identical to Xishan issue, and the only difference was the insignia. Where Xishan wore a golden sword, these people wore a blue wave. The other group was not uniform at all. Thick white down jackets in a dozen different cuts, the kind of thing you get when you empty a shopping mall in a hurry. Both groups had their weapons up. Neither of them was looking at the mountain. They were looking at each other, and a tall man with a very cold face said, "This entrance is completely blocked. It doesn't look like we'll be getting anything out of down there." The tall one was Chen Guoliang from Chaoyu Base, which is why his people wear a blue wave. The short wiry one was Wang Tian, and his people wear nothing at all because they are the Bai Shui sect, and that is how I learned that the ascetics who had been walking around my old compound offering people power were a faction. Neither of them had the first idea who had done any of this. They stood over the ruin of Xishan Base, agreeing that Zhao Wenchang must have offended the Jiangnan military region somehow, and that he had it coming. They were also both there for the same reason. When a power that size disappears, what it leaves behind is not peace. It is a vacancy. A whole district of factories and supermarkets and living people that 4 organizations had been carefully not touching, suddenly unowned. Wang Tian left. He looked at 3 armed strangers, a monster and 200 kilometers between himself and his own territory, and said the Bai Shu sect advocates peace and has no wish to fight anybody, and walked away smiling. He is the only person in this entire account who has never once made a mistake in front of me. Chen Guoliang stayed because he saw my vehicle. He looked at the golden sword on my chest and decided we were the remnants of a dead organization and that remnants can be robbed. Joe can leave. The car stays. Learn the rule. In a world like this, might is right. I can kill all of you, so you do what I tell you. Then he pulled his gloves off, and his hands lit up dark blue, and he explained that he was an awakened one, and that killing insects like us was nothing. I stood there behind a visor, looking at a man threatening 3 superhumans and a mutated predator, and I genuinely could not make my face work. Even Elder Joe was offended. I have never in my life met anybody this arrogant. Joe have now. I don't want trouble, I said. But if you're looking to die, there's not much I can do. He never saw anything. He told the world afterwards, by the way his body fell, that the last thing he experienced was the sky arriving at a strange angle. 300 meters is my range, and he had walked to 12. The rest of them the cat handled, and afterward, she shook out one paw with an expression of distaste because there had been only one awakened in that group, and ordinary people do not interest her. What I took out of him was so thin it was almost insulting. A recent awakening with no idea what he had, which told me something useful about Chaoyu Base. Namely that they have never fought anybody, and that at their base this level of person is considered frightening. We dug the entrance out in half an hour, and the cat went first, because animals know about air. I am going to describe one thing from under that mountain and then move on. The fourth pod has a dark green iron door with 3 locks on the outside. During the riot, the residents of the fourth pod were driven back inside and it was sealed. There were still thousands of people behind it when the power went, and the water, and then the air. I stood in front of that door with my hands in my pockets and felt the back of my neck go cold, which does not happen to me often anymore. Then I told myself the thing I always tell myself, which is that they were not going to survive that place anyway, and I walked on. We found the arsenal on the second sublevel, and I stopped being able to think for about 4 seconds. An attack helicopter parked in the middle of a hall the size of a football pitch, more than a dozen tanks and armored vehicles and artillery pieces, crates of weapons and ammunition stacked to the ceiling. That was not Sishan Base's stock, that was the entire Tianhai City garrison, moved underground on the first night. Elder Joe walked the rows with his hand over his mouth and said it was enough to equip a full modern division. He found a Gatling gun intended to be bolted to an aircraft and carried it around in his arms like a man holding a baby, and I promised him a second one. Pudgy Wang lay face down across the hull of a tank and informed me, grinning, that this specific model was his wife. I have been told there are games that turn tanks into cartoon girls. Being called strange by that young man was a genuinely disorienting experience. All fear comes from insufficient firepower. I opened the gate and took the entire depot. There was also a warehouse, and the door beat Elder Joe's fist, which delighted me, because a door that good means the contents are intact. He cut it with a torch, since he did welding for years on that gate in Yuelu, and I have never done a day of manual work in my life. Inside was a supermarket's worth of food, which is nothing to me, and under a blue tarpaulin at the back were steel bar and cement in quantities that could build 2 basements. Military grade, enough for a wall. I told the other 2 to divide the food between them, and both of them refused. Take the lion's share, said Elder Joe. Without you, we would never have dreamed of touching Zishan Base. And how much can 2 people eat, said Pudgy Wang. One man couldn't finish this in 20 years. So I told them I consider them my own people, and that I never forget my own when something good turns up, and that since carrying it is inconvenient, I would store it for them. Both of them were extremely moved. And there is a joke in there that I have decided to enjoy privately, which is that Zhao Wencheng spent his last month of life trying to take my warehouse, and his warehouse is now in my pocket. There were also cockroaches down there, large ones, out of the farms, alive in a sealed dead building with no light. Pudgy Wang screamed and fell over, which was the only good thing that happened underground, and then he said something that has bothered me ever since. These things are insane. If one of them ever mutated, I don't know how you'd kill it. If a cat can change, why not a cockroach? Everything else in this city is a pet, and pets are extremely bad at disasters. Those things are not. And somewhere in the dark behind us, the cat stopped, and turned around, and made a noise I had never heard her make, with her eyes fixed on nothing at all. I looked. There was nothing there. The feeling of being watched went away as soon as I looked, which is worse. Finish loading and let's go. I don't like this place. Then Pudgy Wang buried it. He put both hands out, and every ton of snow on that hillside came down into the shaft and filled several hundred meters of it, because I do not enjoy the idea of somebody else finding something I missed. We started the wall the day after, a circle 500 meters in radius around my house and the 2 neighboring villas, 20 meters high, 10 meters thick, steel bar and ice. That was Elder Joe's joke, and it turned out to be the answer. There is a river 400 meters away with 2 meters of ice on it. At these temperatures, ice does not melt, it thickens, and it repairs itself. And if you run a steel frame through it, you have a curtain wall that a tank round will not open. Everybody had exactly one job, and every one of those jobs was impossible for anybody else. Chen Anran had the drawings and ran the site. Pudgy Wang put his hands flat on the river and cut blocks the size of rooms straight out of it and floated them up into the air, 10 at a time, until he had to sit down. I moved them, because moving things is what I am for. Zhang Yue trimmed them. One draw of that sword, and a shapeless 20-ton block became a clean hexahedron, and she did that for 6 hours a day without a word of complaint, and Elder Joe picked them up and drove them into the frozen ground like a man hammering in tent pegs. Zhou Kier and Yang Xia ran hot drinks up and down the line, and Li Meiling sat in the control room watching all of us on the cameras and telling us when a course was out of true. Work that would take a construction company a season took 5 people, and a cat about 9 days, and then we armed it. 30 heavy machine guns, 5 autocannons, 6 artillery pieces, 2 tanks, and 4 armored vehicles set into the wall as fixed positions. All of it wired back to a console in my basement, and roughly half of the heavy equipment still in my pocket where nobody could see it. I want to say something about those 9 days because there were not many like them. Everybody worked outside at -50 in proper clothing, and after an hour of it, people were actually warm, which in that world is an obscene luxury. Pudgy Wang sang. Zhang Yue laughed at something Chen Anran said and then looked surprised at herself. Elder Joe drove ice blocks into the ground and shouted the count like a man on a parade square. I have killed a very large number of people. I would like the record to show that I also built something. Zhang Yue moved in during that week, and I am not going to pretend it happened by accident. Her students had eaten half a month of food in 4 days because when you have been living on protein paste, you do not think about tomorrow. After that, she was carrying 15 people on a 10-person ration, and she would not eat at my table because they were hungry, and she came every day anyway to teach me to take a punch. Then one morning, she walked past the Lu River and saw the women and the children and the old people of Zujia town out on the ice with hand tools, digging for fish, because every able-bodied man in that town died at Zishan base, and she walked past her own students who had not tried. The scene at her camp that evening was short. They asked why she had come back empty-handed. They said I was a liar. And when she told them that nobody owed them anything and that they should use their own hands, they turned on Li Meiling and Chen Anran instead, at volume, for the crime of living somewhere warm. I bought her milk tea 2 years ago, and now she won't help me. My family and the Yangs are distant relatives, and she is a selfish woman. Chen Anran and Li Meiling owed those people nothing whatsoever. What they had actually done was be bullied by them for 4 years, and it did not matter, because it is never scarcity that people cannot bear. It is somebody else having more. Zhang Yue stood in that snow hut looking at 15 prestigious, expensively educated young people, and could not tell them apart from any street gang she had ever removed a client from. From now on, I'm living at the shelter. And they told her she was abandoning them, and that she was selfish, and finally one of them said that she had led them into Zishan base, and led them out, and was now leaving them, and asked whether that was what a teacher does. She told me afterwards that this was the sentence. She walked out and did not look back. I made her interview for it. Obviously I did. I asked the only question that mattered, which is whether, one day, to protect the people in that house, she could kill somebody she believed was innocent. She thought about it and gave me an honest answer, which was yes if it was survival, and no if it was appetite, which is a better answer than I would have given, and it was enough. What I actually wanted was not a martial artist with a conscience. What I wanted was somebody who would swing when I said swing. In my heart, the ideal subordinate is Wu Hao, and the joke is on both of us, because a man like that only ever belongs to whoever he decided to belong to first. She had one condition. She would not harm her own people. Of course not, I said. I'm not a monster. That night she sat down at my table and looked at roast chicken and fried fish and braised pork and mutton soup, and her hands shook picking up the chopsticks, and she ate until she made herself ill. She had eaten better at Zishan base than she had in 3 months, and it had still not been anything like that table. And Zhou Kier put her to bed, gave her something for her stomach, and pulled a blanket over her, and Zhang Yue cried, because it was the first time since December that anybody had taken care of her. I did the rest myself the following evening, and this is the part of this account I find hardest to say out loud. I went to her room and asked whether she was all right, and she told me about her life. Martial arts from the age of 3, 2 roads for somebody like her, films or a school, and she wanted neither, so she took the third one and became a bodyguard on 3 million a year. Do you have any concept of 3 million? I do. It's about 20 years of my salary. And then she said the thing I had been waiting a week for. Then it all came, and everything went. Family, friends, status, money. All I had left was a responsibility to protect those students. That sense of mission is the only thing that kept me alive. I've wondered whether I should be more selfish, but if I lose the last thing I believe in, I don't know what I'm for. She was crying by then, and I understood her completely, and here is what I understood. She was never protecting those students. She was protecting the last thing that made her existence make sense. So I took her hand. Joe used to be alone. Joe aren't now. We're your companions. We're your family. Everybody in this house is an adult. We can understand you and be patient with you, not like those children. If you need something to believe in, then from now on, let us be it. If you have no faith, build another one. If you have nothing to carry, carry us. Every word of that was true, and every word of it was a leash, and I want to be honest that in my own head, the sentence was shorter. Come and be my dog. She had never held a man's hand before, at 27, because of the job. She told me those were the cheesiest words anybody had ever said to her. They worked anyway. They usually do. Then I stopped, because there is a point past which sincerity starts to look like a man working, and I have never once crossed it, and I gave Li Meiling her instruction on my way past her door. I've played the good one. Joe play the other one. It would be best if Teacher Jiang gave up on those students completely so that I can handle the problem without complications. Of course, brother. I have to do my part. I am not afraid of that girl betraying me. At Tianqing Academy, she killed more of her own classmates than I ever have. 2 days later, I took Chen Anran out to a building materials plant for the wall repairs, and we ran into 3 modified off-road vehicles with tracks, skis, steel plate, and machine guns bolted onto them. My engineer looked at them through the glass and made a noise like she had been stabbed. What is that? That's a disaster. It hurts to look at. It'll do 20 kilometers an hour and burn 5 times what we burn. And that is when I worked out who they were, from fuel alone. Sishan Base could barely run one snow vehicle because gasoline had become the rarest thing in the province. Anybody driving 3 of those 200 kilometers from home has an oil refinery, Yangsheng Base, all the way across the city. I went up to them with my hands open and introduced myself as Li Haifeng, captain of the Sishan Base Special Operations Team, because these days, a dead organization's name is safer than your own, and because those combat suits only exist in 4 places and cannot be faked by outsiders. Their captain was a heavy man with a black beard called Jin Biao with a crimson flame on his shoulder. He let me into the plant for half an hour and warned me generously that Sishan Base had fallen and its remnants were no match for his people. And then, when my back was turned, he put his hand in his pocket at a speed you would have to be looking for to see and fired into my spine. I do not give a stranger my back. Ever. Since I took what was in Wuhao, my sense of the space around me has become something close to a 6th sense, and the gate was open behind me before his finger closed, and a cat the size of a truck came around from my left and stood between me and a dozen rifles. They shot her for 4 solid seconds, and it did not matter. She has evolved since the academy. She shook her head once, and the rounds went somewhere else. Then every one of those men pulled a metal syringe out of his coat and put it into his own thigh, and red lines came up under their skin, and their speed went up several times over. That is what Yangsheng Base has that Sishan did not. A combat drug that gives an ordinary man something close to a modified human with no requirement on the body at all. It did not help them because they were not fighting a man, they were fighting a cat. And at equal size, there is nothing on this planet that outruns a cat. Jin Biao's pistol threw actual fire, which was interesting, and 5 burning rounds vanished 3 meters in front of my face. You're one of us too. Let me show you my gun. 2 gold desert eagles out of the air, and I told Chen Anran to cover her ears first, which she has never let me forget. They dodged. All of them, properly, with real training. It does not work. That is the part nobody understands until it is too late. My rounds curve. Once I have looked at you, unless you can outrun a bullet, moving is decoration. Every one of them died with confusion on his face, which is the expression I get most often. The tree may wish to be still, but the wind will not stop. I am a pacifist, and people keep making me do this. I took their syringes, their satellite phones for the data, their vehicles so that nobody would find them here and work out what happened. And their bodies into the pocket, because a body is a message, and I did not want to send one yet. I had now killed people from Chaoyu Base and people from Yangsheng Base inside 2 weeks, and the only real question was how long it would take either of them to find out. On the drive home, Chen Anran asked whether we should tell everybody. Not yet. I'll push the construction schedule instead. I don't want to panic. She was quiet for less than a second and then nodded hard and followed me into the house like a well-behaved child, and I wanted on the record that I noticed exactly what I had just done to a 17-year-old and did it anyway, because the truth is that I did not want Zhang Yue to know. If she believed danger was months away, she would settle. If she believed it was days away, she would go back across that river to stand in front of 15 people who despise her, and I would lose the most useful blade in this province. And there is a second half to it which I have said out loud to exactly one person. 2 organizations are going to come here looking for whoever killed their people. Between my wall and their line of march sits Sujia Town, and in Sujia Town sit 15 students who cannot fish, cannot work, and have already started taking food off widows in exchange for chores. I do not have to do anything at all. I even told Zhang Yue, unprompted, that if real danger ever came, her students could move to the perimeter of my property. She looked at me as though the sun had changed direction. Elder Zhou and Pudgy Wang and Chen Anran all looked at me the same way. And Li Meiling sat in her chair with her chin on her hand and smiled at me with open admiration because she was the only person in that room who could hear the second sentence. Yunke Manor is a long way from Shujia Town. Even a small delay would be enough. She got sold on it anyway. That is what people are. They do not want the truth. They want a reason. Then, because I am thorough, I gave her one more. I saw one of her students through the long glass one afternoon, going into a snow hut at the east end of the village with a woman from the town following him. So I went and found Zhang Yue and apologized to her. I've been unfair to your students. I just watched one of them helping a poor local family. I thought I should say so, and I pointed across the river. What she found in that hut was Gao Zichen, who had taken control of that camp by being the largest, and a widow on her knees at his stove doing his chores for half a ration, and on the table, half eaten, the exact meal Zhang Yue had carried across the ice the day before. Didn't you say there wasn't enough food? Then why is it being used for this? And that young man looked at his teacher and said the sentence that ended it. Teacher Jiang, can't you just obediently bring us food and stop caring so much? Joe can only ever bring us enough to starve slowly, so we have to find our own way regardless. In that case, what we do with it is none of your business, is it? Then he asked her to leave, because she was bothering him. He was not even worried. He knew exactly what she was. She is his teacher. How could a woman like that ever actually abandon a student? And the woman at the stove looked up at her without one trace of shame in her face, because morality and dignity and embarrassment are things you can afford in a heated room. Zhang Yue came out of that hut, took her hat off, and let the wind hit her face, and told me later that it was not as cold as the inside of her chest. I was standing at the vehicle when she came back across the ice. Reality is heavy, Teacher Jiang. She did not argue with me. She gave me a small, terrible smile. Do you think I'm stupid? And then she answered it herself. Yes, I was. Really very stupid. I told her I would not interfere with whatever she decided next, and that I respected her choice, and she walked past me swaying slightly, and she locked herself in her room for the rest of that day. 200 kilometers east, on the other side of that dead city, a woman in a red combat suit stood in the snow outside an oil refinery that has more than a dozen chimneys pushing smoke into a frozen sky, where the ambient temperature is a full 20 degrees higher than anywhere else in the province because they are burning 1 million barrels of crude. Her name is Fang Wenya, and she runs Yangsheng Base, and 2 ragged men were kneeling in front of her with the mark of a flame burned into their faces. They had run away. 3 others had been caught and killed, and these 2 had been brought back. She asked them where exactly they had been running to, and when they did not answer, she worked it out herself and said the name of the sect out loud, and their faces told her she was right. Then she asked her deputy whether the technical department had finished the new thing. They brought a tray with 2 silver collars on it and explained that they can be filled with a small charge and detonated remotely the next time a slave tries to leave. Show me how it works. I did not know any of that yet. What I knew was that the wall was more than half up, 20 meters of layered ice over a steel frame with firing positions cut into it, and that within 3 days it would be finished and armed, and that 2 organizations with 100 kilometers of frozen ground between them and me were about to start looking. Both of them would arrive tired. Neither of them has a bunker buster or a friend in a military region, and whatever came up that road would meet Sujia town first. 200 kilometers away, Fang Wenya put collars on those 2 men and told them she was giving them a chance to run. If the collar fails, you live. It's a new product. The effect may not be reliable. Joe can pray. They ran, because people always run. The range is 5 kilometers. She pressed the button at 10 minutes. 1 collar worked and 1 did not, and she kept her word and let that man keep running, and then had the entire technical department shut in a dark room for 3 days for producing something that only functions half the time. I want you to hear her reason, because it explains everything about that half of the province. We work ourselves to the bone for these slaves. If they weren't always thinking about running, why would I bother? That hypocrite from the Baiksu sect is only using them as bait. Do they honestly believe there's a saint left in the world? Her people were leaving. That is the whole of it. Word had gone around that the sect's leader has miracles, that she heals anything, that everybody there is equal, that everybody eats. And a slave in a refinery will walk 200 kilometers through -60 on a rumor like that. So she burned a flame into every civilian's face at Yangsheng Base so that anybody who takes them in has to go to war with her. Xishan Base never had that problem, incidentally. Xishan was entirely underground. Nobody escapes from a place with 1 staircase. Then her cousin went missing at a building materials plant, along with a dozen men and 3 vehicles that simply stopped existing, and she reached the only conclusion available to her, which was that somebody had been planning to attack Yangsheng Base for a long time. She called Chaoyu Base to accuse them, and found that Chaoyu Base had also lost people that week and was about to accuse her. 2 organizations, both missing and awakened, both convinced the other one had done it, both wrong. So they did what people do. They worked through the list. The steelworkers at Qingpu do not fight, which leaves the sect. And Waiting Hai actually laughed when they got there, because the sect had been draining his labor force for 2 months and he had been looking for an excuse. Better to punish the innocent than let the guilty go. And even if they didn't do it, we get to work off some anger. Best of both worlds. 2 armed bases went 180 kilometers across a dead city to burn down a church, and the man who had actually killed all of their people was at home in a heated room laying steel bar into an ice wall. I wanted on record that I did not plan that. I simply benefited from it enormously. The wall took 9 days, and 3 of them were Elder Joe up on scaffolding doing the finish work himself, because that man spent 10 years fixing other people's plumbing, and he was not going to watch somebody else lay a course badly. When it was done, it went 500 meters out in a circle, 20 20 meters high and 10 meters thick, 2 layers of river ice over a steel frame, with firing positions cut into it and steel plate lining every one. 30 heavy machine guns, 5 autocannons, 6 artillery pieces, 2 tanks, and 4 armored vehicles set into the wall as fixed emplacements. 70% of everything Zishan base ever owned, pointing outward. All of it wired back to my phone. I can now sit on my own couch and fire the entire line with my thumb. I do not expect it to be invincible. It is a buffer. It exists to cost people time and lives, and to give everybody in those 3 houses enough of both to get behind 20 centimeters of alloy. Chen Anran also finished the other thing she promised me, back when I dumped half a chemical works on her workshop floor and told her to stop thinking about cost. That white combat suit is hers. Alloy through every panel, 20 times the material cost of the ones Zishan issued, and an exact copy of theirs down to the stitching. She made me the best armor in the world, exactly as she said she would, and then I wore it into a village and killed 30 men who saluted me because of it. She was extremely proud. I have never told her the second half of that sentence. Zhou Qier finished her analysis of the syringes I took off Jin Biao. Military stimulant, 10 times stronger than anything she had. It keeps a man awake and functional for 3 days, and the price is a body run at a loss. 10 kilos off you from 1 dose, half a month flat on your back if your constitution is good. If it is not good, you do not get up. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Anything that makes a person stronger for nothing does not exist, and I have stopped even checking. Then I asked her about something else. Do you remember that rat poison I used? Zhou said the lethal dose is 1/10 of a gram. What happens with a much smaller amount? Too small and the body clears it. Around 5% of a dose, the kidneys can't quite manage it, and it accumulates. Does it kill? Not immediately. It would slowly damage the organs, and without treatment, it eventually would. Although in an environment like this, anybody who started showing those symptoms would simply be waiting to die anyway. Then she frowned at me. Do you have mice in the house? Not in the house. I did not finish the sentence. I have found that people fill those in for themselves and remember it as something I said. And then, 3 nights before the wall was finished, I did the worst thing in this entire account, and I did it quietly, and nobody in that building knows about it except me. I took the satellite phones off the men from Yangsheng base. Military hardware, tracked from their own base, missing for days. Somebody is going to come looking for that signal. That is not a risk, it is a certainty, and I own the one house in this district that anybody would come looking at anyway, so I sat there and did the arithmetic I always do. If I hold the wall and never step outside, my odds are what, 95%? 95% is roughly 50-50. That is my entire philosophy in one number, and it has kept me alive through 2 lives, so I decided that whoever came would arrive somewhere else first. I called the cat over and told her what I wanted, and at about 2 in the morning the door of my room opened by itself, and a tabby went down the stairs with a satellite phone in her mouth, and out through the airlock, and across the ice towards Shuja town, where 15 young people who had been Zhang Yue's students were asleep in a snow hut. She came back before dawn and got into bed at my shoulder and went straight to sleep, and I lay there in the warm and looked at the ceiling, and I would like to be able to tell you that I did not sleep afterwards. I slept fine. Zhang Yue never asked me for anything again after the day I sent her to that hut. She stopped supplying her students with anything except food. They learned to fish badly. They survived, and instead of thanking her, they asked every single day to be moved into my house, and when asking stopped working, they moved on to blame, and after that to insults. She had already given up on them. What she had left was not hope. It was the last piece of a habit, and she could not quite watch them die in front of her. I offered to put the question to a house meeting. I even said I would support it. I knew exactly how that vote would go, because every other person under that roof would have voted the way I wanted without my ever saying a word, and I would have lost the vote and kept my hands clean and stayed, in her eyes, the only person who had tried. She never called the meeting. She came to me herself and said we should leave it for now, and that Mei Ling and Kiran had been hurt too badly at that academy, and that the others should learn to stand on their own feet in Zhuja town first. And then she said the sentence that I am going to carry. Everybody's living peacefully now. Nothing dangerous has happened. There's really no need to be so nervous. People who are still alive have no reason to invade anybody. I think I was over-anxious before. She said that 11 days after I killed 13 people from Yangsheng base at a factory 25 kilometers away, and 9 days after I put their phone in her student's hut. That's a good attitude to have, I told her. Honestly, I should learn from you. Don't be so paranoid all the time. The world is still a beautiful place, and tomorrow is full of hope, right? And she laughed. She actually laughed and said it was rare to hear that from me. That is the last conversation in this account that I feel anything about. The night the wall was finished, everybody stayed up late. There were cards on the table and somebody was losing badly and the whole building was lit up and warm and Zhang Yue was arguing about a hand with a woman who had wanted to poison her a month earlier. And I stood in the doorway with a cat on my shoulder and thought, in these exact words, I can live like this until the world ends. Not as if. I can. I want to tell you where all of this started because it is the only thing about my story that I have never once been able to leave alone. I opened a door. A woman I had been feeding stood in my hallway and told me she was cold, and I pulled back 4 bolts, and the whole stairwell came through them with pipes, and I died on my own floor listening to her negotiate her share. That is what kindness bought me. 1 month of feeding people, and a room full of neighbors, and a woman saying my share has to be bigger. Now I have a wall 20 meters high and 10 meters thick with 70% of a city garrison built into it and my thumb on all of it, and I still do not open the door. Not for the teacher who bled for her students. Not for 66 people in Building 18 who volunteered to die in each other's place. Not for a boy who watched a girl he loved sell him out and came back to me anyway. They live near me. They eat because of me. None of them live inside. Everybody who came through my door in that first life is dead, and I killed all of them personally, and the arc is closed and the debt is paid, and I sleep 8 hours. The only thing I let all the way in is a stray cat, and even that took a week and 100 dried fish. Here is what I did not know, standing in that doorway feeling permanent. That the 4 numbers a girl in a wheelchair changed in a message had put my address on the desk of every organization left alive in this province. Chao Yu Base had already gone back to a text a dead hacker sent to every phone in Tianhai months ago and found the name Li Wei attached to a warehouse theft and started reading it properly. That the Bike Shoe sect had decided to send a man called Grand Edict to my door to test me. Their leader is a girl of about 20 who can wake an ability in another human being at no cost at all, which means she can grow forever. She also does something to the children of her congregation that I am not going to describe, and she hides something behind her own eyes while she does it. That 200 kilometers away, a woman with fire under her skin had a list with my district on it, and that a man called Zhao Gong was already lying on a ridge above the Lu River with a signal locator, looking at my wall through binoculars and telling his people to be extremely careful, and then walking down into a village of empty snow houses that he described in his report as tombstones. He found 15 young people asleep in one of those huts, deeply asleep, with the signal source right there on the floor beside them, and for a moment he was confused, because it made no sense at all. I know exactly why it made no sense. I am the reason. There is one more thing, and then I am finished. When I went back down into the ruin of Zishan Base to strip the arsenal, I walked past the 4th pod, dark green iron door, 3 locks, all of them on the outside. When the riot started, everybody down there was driven back in and it was sealed, and then the power went, and then the water, and then the air, thousands of people. I stood in front of it with my hands in my pockets and told myself they were never getting out of that place anyway, and I walked on and loaded a helicopter into my pocket. We left. We buried the entrance under a hillside of snow so that nobody would ever find what I had missed. And I have been told, by nobody, because there was nobody there to tell me, that shortly after we left, that door moved, not opened, moved, as though something on the other side had put its weight against it and pushed. I did not see it. I was already driving home. I have thought about it every night since, and about the cockroaches in the dark, and about the pair of eyes I felt on the back of my neck in that corridor that were gone every time I turned around. If a stray cat can become what mine became, then nothing down there is finished. So I keep the wall manned, I keep the cameras on, I keep 100 dried fish on the living room floor for an animal that will not let me touch them, and I keep the door shut. They killed me once for opening it. Nobody is ever going to have to do that twice.